Chapter 509. Everyone had just sat down in the private room that looked like a secret room when on a stone table near the auction venue, a small but complicated array rune suddenly lit up. After a dazzling white light flashed, 11 steaming hot cups of spirit tea suddenly appeared on the stone table. There was actually a small teleportation array carved on the stone table. Lu Ping and the others clicked their tongues in wonder. Then enlightened Master Xian Su explained with a smile, "This small teleportation array is meant to make it easier for the guests in the private rooms to exchange their treasures after bidding. It also serves as a means of confidentiality." Sage Xian Tian heard this and said, "Confidentiality? Uncle Master, could it be that we came to this private room through the teleportation array or was it random?" Sage Xian Su nodded in agreement. However, he saw Tianqin Laozu suddenly stand up and make a series of hand signs. A net-like light of essential yuan in Tianqin Laozu's hands became brighter and brighter. Then she scattered it in all directions, and the light instantly stretched out into a huge net. It flew towards the four walls, roof and floor of the private room, and then the light net flashed across the walls, roof and floor. Sage Shensen was stunned and said, "Senior sister, why is there someone spying on us in this private room?" Tianqin Laozu laughed coldly and said, "This treasure doesn't belong to us, so how can we be sure? It's just a precautionary measure. If a mid-dharma adept forcibly invades with his divine will, even this method of mine won't be able to stop him. At most we will only know in advance." As soon as Tianqin Laozu finished speaking, she saw Lu Ping suddenly stand up and open his hands. A small jade box suddenly appeared in his hands. Lu Ping walked to the side of the private room and carefully opened the jade box. Then he used his mouth to gently blow into the box. A faint white fog rose up for less than half a foot before dissipating in the air. Then they saw Lu Ping carefully blow out white fog towards the other three walls. Everyone did not know what was going on, but they knew that Lu Ping was also taking precautions against something. But since Tianqin Laozu had already made a move, what could Lu Ping do? As expected, Sage Xian Su, who was at the side, had a slight hint of mockery and laughed. "Junior brother Lu, Uncle Master Tianqin has already made a move. What's the point of doing this? Isn't it superfluous?" Sage Xian Su and Sage Xian Sen did not say anything, but their expressions showed that they were not happy with Lu Ping's actions. Usually Lu Ping's actions were just a precaution, but now that Lu Ping's master was at odds with the person in front. If he did this now, what was it if not a provocation? Just as Master Xian Su and Master Xian Sun looked at the celestial Qin ancestor uneasily, they did not see any dissatisfaction in the celestial Qin ancestor's eyes. Instead, a sliver of surprise flashed past his eyes. Just as Sage Xian Su and Sage Xian Sun looked at each other, they heard Tianqin Laozu suddenly say, "Kid, where did you get your thought-dissolving powder? This thing is extremely vicious and has always been a secret of the Lu clan. This time, it is said that someone from the Lu clan has appeared in Phantom City. Be careful not to be silenced if you're discovered." Lu Ping had just scattered the thought-dissolving powder on the roof and floor of the private room when he heard Tianqin Laozu's question. Lu Ping raised his head and said doubtfully, "Lu clan? Isn't it the Liao clan?" Tianqin Laozu was taken aback by Lu Ping's doubtful expression and said, "Kid, you still want to play dumb? What Liao clan? Didn't you get your thought-dissolving powder from the hands of the Lu clan?" This time, Lu Ping thought of something and said with a smile, "Uncle Master, you also said that this thought-dissolving powder is a secret of the Lu clan. How could a disciple get it from a cultivator from the Lu clan?" Tianqin Laozu looked at Lu Ping and felt that he wasn't lying. He didn't ask any more and looked outside the private room. At this time, the number of cultivators who had entered the auction hall had reached more than 200, and these 200 people were all at the late stage of core forging and above. The thought-dissolving powder that Lu Ping had on him was a pill recipe from Peng Shiwan. Yesterday, after Liao Ruanjia used the thought-dissolving powder, Lu Ping remembered that when he killed Peng Shiwan, he had obtained a few pill recipes from him that also had the method to refine the thought-dissolving powder. After Lu Ping went back, he took out the pill recipe for the thought-dissolving powder and had a look. Only then did he realize how overbearing this thought-dissolving powder was. Even the divine will of a transcendent stage cultivator would be corroded by the thought-dissolving powder when they were caught off guard. After Lu Ping saw this, his hands itched. Luckily, he had already obtained 4,000 to 5,000 stalks of spirit herbs. Although the process of refining this thought-dissolving powder was complicated, it wasn't difficult. Lu Ping took out the fire ring from the ice and fire rings from Lu Qiner's hands and drew out the dark prison poisonous fire inside to refine this thought-dissolving powder. It was half the effort and twice the result. That night he refined this small box. He didn't expect that it would be put to use the next day. When Xian Su and spiritual master Xian Sen heard Tianqin Laozu say that the treasure in Lu Ping's hand seemed to be useful and that it had a great background, they finally relaxed. At this moment, if one were to look up from the auction venue, they would discover that there were a total of 34 white clouds floating in the sky above the venue. On top of each white cloud, there was a simple and unadorned pavilion in the sky. At the same time, 23 of the 34 pavilions around the auction venue had already hung up red candles. This meant that 23 of the 25 medium-sized sects of the overseas cultivation world and the 9 large-sized sects, including the Crystal Palace and the Boudoir, had already arrived. Tianqin Laozu unhurriedly lit up a red candle and placed it on the thin muslin window of the private room facing the auction venue. At this moment, the 24th sect had already arrived. At this moment, another 6 white clouds carrying 3 pavilions descended from the sky above the venue. This caused the number of pavilions and private rooms in the venue to increase to 40. The change in the sky above the venue naturally attracted the attention of the hundreds of cultivators who had entered the venue. Tianqin Laozu and the others naturally saw the changes in their surroundings. Spiritual Master Xian Su asked Tianqin Laozu, "Junior sister, do you know who these 6 additional pavilions belong to?" Tianqin Laozu's expression was a bit solemn as she said, "They should be people from the Demon Clan and the Central Plains." The pavilions in the sky were lit up one by one and the venue was already more than half filled. At this moment, a clear bell rang and the door of the Fantasy Spirit Pavilion slowly closed. All the cultivators in the venue took their seats and a door appeared out of thin air at the front of the venue. A fat cultivator in his 50s walked out of the door with a smile. A Dharma adept. The host of this auction was actually a Dharma adept. The cultivator first laughed heartily and said, "The old man's surname is Dong. Everyone can call me Fatty Dong." The old man was originally a wandering cultivator from the Eastern Sea. This time he was captured by a few old farts from the Fantasy Spirit City to host this auction. They said that the old man didn't belong to any sect and was the most fair. Everyone believed them. This is all bullshit. I came here because they promised to give me a considerable amount of top-grade spirit stones and elixirs as a reward after this is over. Dong Laozu's opening remarks made all the cultivators in the venue smile. The originally somewhat depressing atmosphere was immediately dispelled by Dong Laozu's words. Enough with the idle talk. For the sake of the spirit stones and pills, I will remind everyone here that the rules here have been explained before. The old man won't repeat them. What the old man wants to say is that behind the old man, in a corner that even the old man doesn't know about, are a few old farts older than the old man. So if you don't have the necessary confidence, don't behave atrociously in this venue, lest you become a warning to those old farts. Everyone in the hall smiled once more. However, everyone felt apprehensive in their hearts as well. When their divine perception stretched out, sure enough, they noticed a few exceedingly formidable auras faintly existing in the surroundings. When everyone wanted to further investigate their source, these auras flashed and vanished without a trace. Of course, this time there are 6 more white clouds in the sky. Other than the 9 great sects and 25 forces, there are also the cultivators of the Eastern Sea's Chu, Yen, Kong and Ao families. The only one missing is the South Sea's tyrannical turtle Xiang family. Even the number 1 family in Central Plains, the Yuan family, has arrived. In addition, there are also the cultivators of Central Plains' great sect, the Heavenly Moon sect. When everyone in the venue heard Dong Laozu's words, they all looked at the 40 pavilions floating in the air. However, these 40 pavilions completely isolated everyone's divine senses. They didn't know which pavilion the Yao clan cultivators were in, which pavilion the Middle Earth's Yuan family and Heavenly Moon sect cultivators were in. Okay, stop looking. Let's look at the old man's place first. At some unknown time, a jade table had been placed in front of Dong Laozu. There was a light purple box meticulously carved out of chalcedony. There were faint runes drawn all over the surface of the chalcedony box. Layers of light constantly flickered on and off the surface of the chalcedony box. Everyone in the venue was knowledgeable. Seeing that an item could be stored in a chalcedony box, the value was definitely not low. Dong Laozu pointed at the chalcedony box, and the changing runes on the surface of the box immediately extinguished. Dong Laozu slowly opened the jade box, and 3 white jade-like pills appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Dong Laozu chuckled and said, "Although I, Laozu, know that most of the people here are mid- or late-stage core forging cultivators, and this auction is also geared towards late-stage core forging cultivators, the old man also knows that there are many Dharma adepts hidden here. Not to mention, Each of the 40 pavilions in the sky probably has at least one Dharma adept working as a nanny. Therefore, the old man decided to take this item first in order to win the jackpot. Dong Laozu paused for a moment before continuing. One flawless longevity pill can extend one's life by 10 years. Even though the medicinal properties of these 3 pills have been weakened, it is still enough to extend a cultivator's life by more than 25 years. According to the seller's request, these 3 flawless longevity pills will be auctioned together. The seller only asks for spirit stones and the highest bidder wins. However, the seller also has a request, and that is, if there are top-grade spirit stones, they must be given priority. However, the old man still has to remind those who are participating in this auction for the first time not to bring out low-grade spirit stones. This auction will only accept treasures with high-grade spirit stones and above. The starting bid for these 3 flawless longevity pills will be 100 high-grade spirit stones. Alright, everyone can start bidding. Chapter 5:10. The longevity pill was one of the most precious pills in the cultivation world. As a pill that could extend one's life, there were several grades of longevity pills in the cultivation world. The lowest grade was the 1-year longevity pill. The better ones, such as the Vitality Dew that Lu Ping used to refine the minor forging spirit pill, were the 3 years longevity pills. Above that were the 5 years longevity pills and the 10 years longevity pills. Legend has it that in the cultivation world, there were even more legendary 15 years longevity pills and even 20 years longevity pills. However, the amount of heavenly materials and earthly treasures needed to create these pills was truly unimaginable. These longevity pills could only be inherited by the sects that had existed since the era of the 7th Patriarch in the Central Plains. In addition to those legendary longevity pills, the 10 years longevity pill could be said to be the most precious pill in the cultivation world. At any time, in the eyes of any cultivator, longevity pills were priceless treasures that were in short supply. In the blink of an eye, the price of the longevity pills had been raised to 150 high-grade spirit stones. However, the cultivators in the pavilions floating above the clouds were not very interested in the longevity pills. These sects did not have excellent alchemists and longevity pill recipes. For a sect, unless it was an emergency, they were more interested in the longevity pill recipe than a few longevity pills. Of course, for some sects that did not have a deep foundation, the value of 3 longevity pills that could extend one's life by more than 25 years was completely different in their eyes. Although the cultivators who were able to enter the auction today were all at the late core forging stage and above, there were also many cultivators who had reached the transcendent stage as rogue cultivators. This was especially true for some cultivators who were close to the end of their lifespan. Who could say that they would not be able to use the extra 25 years of lifespan to successfully break through and extend their lifespan? Even if they could not break through, being able to live for more than 20 years in this world was already very good. In the blink of an eye, the price of the 3 longevity pills had risen to 200 high-grade spirit stones. At this moment, an old voice suddenly came from a cultivator wearing a black cloak. Old man bids 2 top-quality spirit stones for these 3 longevity pills. As soon as the old man's voice came out, more than half of the cultivators in the auction hall who were originally ready to make a move suddenly stopped talking. Which of the cultivators present was not at the late stage of the core forging realm? Only Fa Xiang Laozu could call him old man in this situation. Sure enough, everyone's spiritual sense left the old man's body as soon as it came into contact with him. Even though the old man possessed a secret technique that prevented them from probing him, the feeling of a bottomless abyss still made them choose to be cautious. I also offer 2 pieces of Supreme Spirit Stones and 30 pieces of Upper Spirit Stones. One of the cultivators also covered his face, but he didn't hide his peak core forging cultivation. However, his aura was a bit weak. It was clear that he didn't have much lifespan left. He wanted to use these 3 longevity pills to prolong his life before risking his life to reach the Dharma phase. The old man in the black cloak looked in the direction of the cultivator. His old voice was emotionless as he opened his mouth and said, "Then 3 pieces of Supreme Spirit Stones it is." The cultivator opened his mouth but didn't say anything. Even though he could offer a higher price, it was obvious that this Dharma phase adept was also determined to get the longevity pills. Naturally, he wouldn't offend Dharma phase Laozu because of this. Moreover, there were definitely countless rare treasures in this auction. It was impossible that there would only be one type of longevity pill. After the longevity pills were successfully auctioned, Dong Laozu took out a jade box and opened it. Inside there was a yellow stone. He said, "There aren't many cultivators overseas who practice earth-based cultivation methods, but there are even fewer earth-based heaven and earth treasures overseas. This Jianghu stone is a mid-grade earth-level heaven and earth treasure. However, due to its scarcity, its value is 20% higher than other heaven and earth treasures of the same level. Therefore, this auction has set the starting price at 120 spirit stones. This Jianghu stone was a good preparation for Debao in the future. However, Debao had just advanced to the 9th layer of the blood condensation realm not too long ago. Based on his cultivation speed, it would take him hundreds of years to reach the 6th layer of the core forging realm and advance to the late core forging realm. Naturally, Lu Ping lost interest in this Jianghu stone. The appearance of the Jianghu stone attracted a lot of cultivators in the auction hall. Even the 40 floating pavilions started to bid for it. However, earth-based heaven and earth treasures were much rarer than cultivators who practiced earth-based cultivation methods. Lu Ping had once heard from enlightened master Lu Shenyuan that in order to obtain an earth-based low-grade heaven and earth treasure, enlightened master Guoxianshan, with the help of Tiankong Laozu, paid a huge price and buried it in a secret place overseas for nearly half a year before he was lucky enough to obtain it. By the time enlightened master Guoxianshan successfully returned to Jinling, his entire body had been drained of true essence. His body was emaciated and the muscles in his legs had started to rot. His cultivation was almost destroyed. After that, he cultivated in seclusion on Tianling Mountain for 5 years and consumed the Bell Cauldron pill specially refined for him by Tianlu Laozu. In the end, the Jianghu stone was auctioned for the price of 150 high-grade spirit stones and 2 top-grade spirit stones. Although the next few auction items were also rare items in the world of cultivation, none of the cultivators in Jinling were in urgent need of them. However, enlightened Master Shantian and the others were still watching with keen interest. With so many rare treasures appearing, it was normally impossible for them to have such an opportunity to broaden their horizons. Since the start of the auction, Tianqin Laozu had been sitting cross-legged in the innermost corner of the pavilion with his eyes closed. It seemed that he was not interested in any of the items in the auction hall. Although enlightened Master Xuanshu and enlightened Master Shensen were also paying attention to the appearance of one treasure after another in the auction hall, they were, after all, people with hundreds of years of cultivation and experience. Thus their expressions did not change too much. Lu Ping simply split his attention into 2 parts. One part of his divine sense was used to pay attention to what was happening in the auction hall, while the other part of his divine sense began to take inventory of the items in his storage ring that could be used in this auction. Before Lu Ping was punished to suppress the earth fire, Tianqin Laozu had rewarded Lu Ping with 500 high-grade spirit stones through the sect. However, after 4 years of consumption, there were not many high-grade spirit stones left. Lu Ping's cultivation was different from that of ordinary people. Ordinary mid-stage core forging cultivators could use mid-grade spirit stones to support their cultivation. However, the North Sea wave listening technique that Lu Ping cultivated was too overbearing. Although Lu Ping's true essence was thick and vigorous, allowing him to fight against cultivators of the same level as him, it was because his true essence was too thick that it caused his cultivation to slow down. In order to improve his cultivation speed at the same rate as ordinary people, Lu Ping had no choice but to use high-grade spirit stones to barely achieve the goal of his cultivation. Thus, after Lu Ping came out from his seclusion, he focused his attention on the few treasure vaults of the Overflowing Seas sect that he had obtained from Soul Search 4 years ago. There were only 3 secret treasure vaults that Lu Ping knew of. With Debao's help, Lu Ping successfully infiltrated 2 of the treasure vaults and looted all the treasures stored inside. However, after these 2 operations, the Overflowing Sea sect was finally alerted. When Lu Ping arrived at the 3rd treasure vault, he discovered that the Overflowing Sea sect had already increased their security. There seemed to be 3 to 4 core forging realm cultivators and a dozen blood condensation realm cultivators guarding the treasure vault. With no other choice, Lu Ping could only retreat. Even so, Lu Ping returned with a bountiful harvest. However, when he returned, Lu Ping was greatly disappointed. These so-called treasure vaults were actually built by the Overflowing Seas sect to store cultivation resources for blood condensation realm cultivators. Although there were a lot of cultivation resources inside, they were not of much use to core forging realm cultivators. When he thought about it, it made sense. Most cultivators had storage artifacts on hand. If it was not necessary, why would they build treasure vaults? Which core forging realm cultivator didn't have any secrets that could not be exposed to the public? They only believed in carrying their most precious treasures with them or places that only they knew about. At least Lu Ping was like that. The only thing that comforted Lu Ping was that in these 2 treasure vaults, the cultivators from the Overflowing Seas sect, for some unknown reason, had placed 2 storage pouches filled with high-grade spirit stones. Each storage pouch was neatly stacked with 500 high-grade spirit stones. The 2 storage pouches contained a total of 1,000 high-grade spirit stones. This made Lu Ping's slightly vexed mood instantly turn into joy. With 1,000 high-grade spirit stones in hand, Lu Ping could maintain this extremely luxurious cultivation method for another 7 to 8 years. As for the remaining low-level cultivators' cultivation resources, it gave Lu Ping a headache for a while. In the end, he roughly categorized these items and sent a portion of them to the Pill Pavilion. Unfortunately, Fornax Laozu was not at Tianling Mountain at that time. With great difficulty, Lu Ping managed to dig out 150 high-grade spirit stones from enlightened Shen Dian. Then he sent a portion of the spiritual materials to the crafting hall and directly paid a visit to Tianjiang Laozu. Tianjiang Laozu was generous and directly threw him 200 high-grade spirit stones. As for the remaining items, Lu Ping thought about it and went to find enlightened Shen Yuan of Zhenling Side Hall. Lu Ping knew that as the mountain head of Zhenling Side Hall, enlightened Shen Yuan also had a large amount of spirit stones in his hands. Unfortunately, although enlightened Shen Yuan coveted the resources in Lu Ping's hands, he did not have any high-grade spirit stones. Helpless, Lu Ping could only exchange for 1 million low-grade spirit stones. Then, together with the 1.5 million low-grade spirit stones that he had previously accumulated, he wantonly bought 1,000-years-old spirit herbs after arriving at Fantasy Spirit City. In just half a day he had squandered 2 million low-grade spirit stones. After that, with the 200 high-grade spirit stones that Qi Lianing gave him in Lu Ping's own, right now, Lu Ping had about 1,700 high-grade spirit stones that he could squander. In addition, Lu Ping also had 4 top-grade spirit stones that he kept close to him. This was one of his most precious treasures. Just as Lu Ping was thinking about what he needed, the small transmission array on the jade table in front of Dong Laozu suddenly lit up, and then 3 jade slips appeared on top of it. Dong Laozu looked at the 3 jade slips and suddenly said with a smile, "These 3 jade slips record 3 psychic treasure prohibitions." Originally, although psychic treasure prohibitions are precious, to be able to be auctioned at this auction, even if all 3 of them are sold together, it would still be a bit difficult. However, these 3 psychic treasure prohibitions are extraordinary. Dong Laozu deliberately kept everyone's attention in suspense. After attracting everyone's attention he said, "I believe that everyone present has heard of Fei Ling sect, one of the 9 great sects in the past. However, Fei Ling sect also passed down a set of invisible sword technique. I'm afraid that not many of you here know about it." Chapter 511. As soon as Dong Laozu's voice fell, the previously calm Lu Ping suddenly opened his eyes. His divine sense rushed out of the pavilion towards the 3 jade slips in front of the booth. At the same time, several other divine senses also appeared in the auction hall, seemingly interested in the 3 invisible treasure restrictions. When Lu Ping's divine sense rushed out of the pavilion, Daoist Shen Su and Daoist Shen Sen were somewhat surprised. They discovered that Lu Ping's divine sense was not inferior to the 2 core forging stage cultivators. Tianqin Laozu blinked her eyes, then revealed a faint smile. At this time, someone in the auction hall suddenly asked, "Fatty Dong, the 3 invisible sword spirit restrictions are certainly attractive, but without the invisible sword, what is the use of the first 3 ordinary restrictions?" Although Dong Laozu couldn't see the cultivation of the person who spoke, since the other party dared to call him by his nickname, it was obvious that the other party was a cultivator of the same status as him. Dong Laozu smiled and said, "First, these 3 invisible sword spirit restrictions are 3 sword spirit restrictions, then the invisible sword spirit restriction. Second, even if these 3 invisible sword spirit restrictions are used on ordinary flying swords, although the invisibility effect is greatly reduced, it is still quite effective. Third, Fei Ling sect was able to create the invisible sword spirit restrictions out of thin air. Now that we have the 3 invisible sword spirit restrictions, don't you have the confidence to reverse engineer the 3 ordinary invisible sword spirit restrictions?" Although old ancestor Dong's words were reasonable, he still knew that the formless sword restriction didn't exist. Moreover, the power of the formless sword could only be fully unleashed with the formless sword technique. In fact, the formless sword technique created by the Fei Ling sect was actually an extremely strict and huge system. Not only did it contain the formless sword restriction, it also contained the entire set of formless sword technique, as well as the refinement of the formless sword technique. Therefore, the value of the 3 invisible sword spirit restrictions had to be discounted. However, Dong Laozu's words still aroused the enthusiasm of many cultivators in the auction hall. The starting price is 150 high-grade spirit stones. In a short period of time, the price of the 3 invisible sword spirit restrictions broke the threshold of 300 high-grade spirit stones. However, Lu Ping sat in the pavilion without any movement. At this time, everyone in Jinling noticed that Lu Ping was interested in the 3 invisible sword spirit restrictions. Li Xuanru also knew that Lu Ping had already cultivated the invisible sword art and had an invisible sword called Nether Water. Li Xuanru worriedly asked, "Ninth junior brother, do you still have enough high-grade spirit stones? We already have 320 high-grade spirit stones on the Reef Island. Senior sister still has 300 high-grade spirit stones if junior brother?" Lu Ping waved his hand and said gratefully, "Senior sister, don't worry, if junior brother has a need, I will not be polite." Li Xuanru knew that Lu Ping had a card up his sleeve, so she was relieved. Xiantian Jinren and the others saw that Lu Ping was still indifferent to the price of 350 high-grade spirit stones in the auction hall. They were very surprised at Lu Ping's wealth, but thinking of Lu Ping's identity as an alchemy grandmaster, they put on a natural expression. However, what they did not know was that Lu Ping could not accumulate high-grade spirit stones at all. If Lu Ping had not raided the 2 treasure vaults of the overturned Sea clan and accumulated a large number of high-grade spirit stones in a short period of time, Lu Ping was afraid that he would not have the confidence he had now. Actually, Lu Ping was waiting. At this time, one of the 40 pavilions floating on the white clouds had already made a bid, and Lu Ping was waiting for the cultivator in the next pavilion to make a bid. He did not want to attract attention and expose his identity. 380 high-grade spirit stones. The cultivator in the 17th pavilion in the sky was also interested in the 3 invisible sword psychic prohibitions, and he joined the ranks of the bidding. Old man bids 400 high-grade spirit stones. In the auction hall, a middle-aged cultivator dressed in purple was very arrogant, saying "old man," as if to indicate his identity as a Dharma adept. However, the psychic prohibitions would not be of much use to the Dharma adept Laozu. He was most likely doing this for the sake of his own descendants. 450 high-grade spirit stones. Lu Ping's first bid was too high. 50 high-grade spirit stones, and this price shocked the 3rd-generation disciples in the Jinling pavilion. Although they all knew that Lu Ping was rich, to casually take out the equivalent of 4.5 million high-grade spirit stones, even someone like Xiantian Jinling, who had collected all the valuable items on him, would lose more than half of his net worth. Tianqin Laozu was obviously also stunned. She did not doubt that Lu Ping had such a large amount of wealth, but she did not believe that Lu Ping had so many high-grade spirit stones. At this time, Dong Laozu, who was in the middle of the auction hall, said, "All right, the guest in the 24th pavilion has bid 450 high-grade spirit stones. These 3 spiritual prohibitions are inherited from the Fei Ling sect. Is there anyone else who wants to bid?" In fact, these 3 spiritual prohibitions were not worth 400 high-grade spirit stones in the eyes of ordinary practitioners. Even though Dong Laozu had made a lot of extravagant talk without the shapeless sword technique, with just these 3 spiritual prohibitions in hand, it would take generations and thousands of years of effort and a lot of resources. How could this set of swordsmanship be completely perfected? However, Lu Ping was different. He had the complete, shapeless sword art in hand, and he had fused this shapeless water into his protective aura. As long as he could upgrade the shapeless sword art to the level of a spirit-connected mystic treasure, Lu Ping would be able to upgrade the shapeless sword art as power to the level of a great technique. This way, with his mid-core forging realm cultivation base, Lu Ping would be able to master 3 great techniques. Even if he didn't use the life origin array, he would still be able to fight against the late core forging realm cultivator. When Lu Ping bid 450 high-grade spirit stones, most of the previous bidders chose to give up, but then from the 17th pavilion came another bid, 480 high-grade spirit stones, 500 high-grade spirit stones. Lu Ping didn't budge an inch. The price of 500 high-grade spirit stones caused many people in the auction hall to start whispering. This price was a bit too high. Perhaps the sects in the 17th and 24th pavilions had the shapeless sword technique of the Fei Ling sect. It was said that among the 25 medium-sized sects in the Endless Sea, there were 4 sects from the North Sea. It was unknown whether the sects in the 17th and 20th pavilions were from the North Sea, and if so, which 2 sects were from the North Sea. However, there were also well-informed people who thought that the sects in the 2 pavilions might not be from the North Sea. When the secret cave residence of Fei Ling sect's Zhongxian Laozu in the East China Sea was discovered, the 5 major sects of the East China Sea and the underground boudoir all rushed into the cave residence to plunder. Therefore, the sects in the 2 pavilions might be from the East China Sea. Lu Ping's persistence finally made the 17th pavilion stop. Lu Ping put a storage bag on the stone table by the window of the pavilion. After a flash of light, the storage bag on the stone table disappeared. At the same time, the jade table in front of Dong Laozu also flashed with light, and the storage bag appeared on the jade table. Dong Laozu weighed the storage bag in his hand, smiled slightly, and then put the 3 jade slips on the small transmission array on the jade table. After the flash, Lu Ping took the 3 jade slips in his hand and carefully checked them with his divine sense. With a happy face, he put the jade slips in the storage ring. Next to him, Daoist Shen and the others said, "Congratulations, junior brother." Lu Ping obtained the treasure, and seeing that he was about to master another great magical power, he was happy in his heart, so he returned the greetings one by one. After a few more treasures, Dong Laozu took out a kind of heaven and earth spiritual object called Ice Jade. This was an earth middle grade ice attribute heaven and earth spiritual object. But when Daoist Xuanyu heard about this heaven and earth spiritual object, his spirit was shaken. He hesitated for a moment, then bowed to Tianqin Laozu and said, "Martial uncle, this disciple wants this heaven and earth spiritual object, but I only have 200 high-grade spirit stones. I hope martial uncle can help me." Daoist Xuanyu was different from others. He did not have a teacher to look after him, and he was able to reach this point almost by himself, so it was normal for him to be short of money. Tianqin Laozu, however, said seriously, "Martial nephew Xuanyu, have you thought it through? With your strength, you can definitely accumulate more than 100 years to refine a high-grade earth spiritual object. In this way, when you reach the 9th stage of the core forging stage, you will be able to refine at least 2 low-grade heaven spiritual objects and form a high-grade golden elixir. In this way, becoming a Dharma adept in the future will not be a problem." Daoist Xuanyu hesitated for a moment, then smiled bitterly and said, "To be honest, martial uncle, I have a piece of ice jade on me by chance. Although 2 mid-grade earth spiritual objects are not as good as a high-grade earth spiritual object, I can refine it now. This way I can save more than 100 years of time." Tianqin Laozu nodded his head and said, "That is not necessarily a bad idea. The closer you get to the late core forging stage, the more accumulation you have compared to others. This way it will be beneficial for you to form a golden elixir in the future. It is just that the benevolent see benevolence and the wise see wisdom. The key is still whether a practitioner's cultivation can compete with his lifespan." Daoist Xuanyu saw Tianqin Laozu nod his head in agreement, and hurriedly said gratefully, "Thank you, martial uncle." Tianqin Laozu smiled lightly and said, "You don't have to thank me. This is the sex reward for the few of you. To be able to meet a suitable heaven and earth spiritual object at this auction is also your luck." At this time, Dong Laozu also introduced the ice jade and said, "Although this ice jade is a mid-grade earth spiritual object, it is also rare among ice spiritual objects. Hence, the starting price is slightly higher. Let's start with 200 high-grade spirit stones." As soon as Dong Laozu finished speaking, 4 or 5 practitioners consecutively opened their mouths to bid. The price of the ice jade almost instantly shot up from 200 high-grade spirit stones to 300 high-grade spirit stones. Although Daoist Xuanyu's expression was still calm, his eyes were fixed on Dong Laozu, who was on the display stage. He did not dare to relax for even a moment. At the same time, he was becoming more and more nervous about the rising price of the ice jade. Chapter 512. The ice jade was a mid-grade earth step ice attribute heaven and earth spirit treasure, and it was considered quite a good treasure. After refining it and advancing to the late core forging stage, it was possible to condense a grade 7 golden core. Of course, if one could refine 2 ice jades like Daoist Xuanyu, then the chances of condensing a grade 7 golden core would be greatly increased. Because of this, the ice jade was quite popular among the cultivators in the auction house, and the bidding price had already exceeded 400 high-grade spirit stones. 500 high-grade spirit stones. Lyra Laozu finally bid and directly raised the price of the ice jade to 500 high-grade spirit stones. It must be known that 500 high-grade spirit stones was an important threshold in this kind of large-scale auction. This was because in the past years, if there was no special requirement for a high-grade earth step spirit treasure, then the starting price would be 500 high-grade spirit stones or above. Of course, it was also very rare for a high-grade earth step spirit treasure to be auctioned with high-grade spirit stones. Unlike Lu Ping, who used 500 high-grade spirit stones to buy the 3 psychic treasure restrictions, Lyra Laozu's 500 high-grade spirit stones had scared off many bidders, but the ice jade was still a heaven and earth spirit treasure, and it was directly related to a cultivator's cultivation, so there were still people who did not give up. 520. 600 high-grade spirit stones. The celestial zither ancestor bid once again. His emotionless voice was filled with an icy chill, as if there was a pressure hidden in his voice that was ready to be released. Lu Ping's expression changed. Lyra Laozu's way of speaking seemed to be a kind of magical ability, but this kind of magical ability was extremely obscure. Dong Laozu, who was in the middle of the auction house, raised his head and looked thoughtfully at the pavilion number 24. His lips moved, but in the end he did not say anything. This was the privilege of the 40 pavilions. The auction house was not high or low, but Lyra Laozu's bid had revealed too much information. Was it worth it to offend a famous overseas sect for a mid-grade earth-step spirit treasure? Dong Laozu secretly smiled bitterly. This was the weakness of a rogue cultivator. Sure enough, as soon as Lyra Laozu's voice fell, all the cultivators in the auction house who were interested in the ice jade shut their mouths. Even the several pavilions no longer raised the price. It was not that they were afraid of Lyra Laozu, but they could hear from Lyra Laozu's words that he was determined to get the ice jade. A mid-grade earth-step spirit treasure was not enough to attract the attention of these pavilion sections. Moreover, the price of 600 high-grade spirit stones was already the limit of this ice jade. Any more and it would not be worth it. This way, it could be considered as giving face to the sect of pavilion number 24. Next time, if other sects took a fancy to a treasure, Junling's pavilion number 24 would not make it difficult for them to snatch it. Daoist Xianyu quickly took out 250 high-grade spirit stones from his body and placed them on the stone table together with the storage pouch that Lyra Laozu had taken out. Light flashed twice, and the 600 high-grade spirit stones disappeared. Instead, a jade box containing the ice jade appeared on the stone table. Daoist Xianyu held the jade box in his hands with a happy expression on his face. Everyone congratulated him. Daoist Xianyu was not good with words, so he only returned the greeting one by one. No one knew what he was saying. Everyone understood his character, so they did not care about it. Next, several treasures were auctioned. Among them there was also a mid-grade earth-step spirit treasure. It just so happened that the attribute of Daoist Xianju's cultivation method was the same. However, there was only one spirit treasure. Daoist Xianju was not like Daoist Xianyu, who already had a similar spirit treasure. Daoist Xianju was an outstanding cultivator of the same generation. Naturally, he disdained to smelt a mid-grade earth-step spirit treasure. In the end, he raised the price to 400 spirit stones before giving up. However, there was still a trace of regret in his heart. Just as everyone was saying a few words of comfort to Daoist Xianju, Dong Laozu took out another item. Lyra Laozu's expression suddenly froze, and she immediately sat up straight. Everyone was shocked. What kind of treasure could make even Laozu lose his composure? Everyone, including Lu Ping, looked at Dong Laozu in surprise. They saw Dong Laozu holding a flying sword with both hands. The sword ridge was slightly narrower than an ordinary flying sword, but the sword body was half a foot longer than an ordinary flying sword. He introduced it. This flying sword is called Thin Water. It is a spirit-nurturing level magic treasure that has condensed 7 treasure restrictions. Thin Water Sword, it's actually this item. When Daoist Xiansen and Daoist Xiansu heard Dong Laozu introduce the name of the sword, they said at the same time. They seemed to recognize the sword as well. Dong Laozu continued his introduction in the middle of the auction house. There is no need to elaborate on the quality of this flying sword. I believe that everyone here is a person with keen eyes. Unfortunately, this sword seems to be a male and female dual sword. If one were to use this sword alone, it would be difficult to display its full power. Even so, a spirit-nurturing level magic treasure is still considered rare. As requested by the auctioneer, the base price of this flying sword will be set at 500 high-grade spirit stones. Everyone please bid. A spirit-nurturing level magic treasure was priced at 500 high-grade spirit stones. Although this was the lowest quality of a spirit-nurturing magic treasure, the quality of this flying sword did not seem to be able to barely qualify as a spirit-nurturing magic treasure. Therefore, setting such a low price was clearly unreasonable. As a result, everyone in the auction hall began to ponder. It seemed that there was something wrong with this flying sword. They thought about what Dong Laozu had said about this flying sword being a male and female sword. Could it be that after losing one sword, the power of the flying sword was not difficult to display, but difficult to display? For a moment, after Dong Laozu announced the start of the auction, there was an awkward silence in the auction house. After a while, The first spirit-nurturing magic treasure was sold for a price of 620 high-grade spirit stones. A spirit-nurturing grade mystic treasure could only be unleashed by a late core forging realm cultivator or above. Even though Lu Ping had more than 10 spirit-nurturing mystic treasures in his possession, none of them were spirit-nurturing mystic treasures. The water-controlling flag was a spirit-nurturing mystic treasure in the past, but unfortunately, it was heavily damaged and dropped from a spirit-nurturing grade to a spirit-nurturing mystic treasure. Lu Ping once heard from his teacher, ancestor Lu Tianling, that spirit-nurturing grade mystic treasures were rare even in the hands of late core forging cultivators. On the other hand, cultivators who had just entered the avatar realm often used spirit-nurturing mystic treasures. Firstly, it was because to upgrade a mystic treasure to the spirit-nurturing grade required a large amount of precious spirit materials. Secondly, spirit-nurturing grade mystic treasures were even rarer. Lastly, spirit-nurturing grade mystic treasures were extremely powerful. Although late core forging cultivators could unleash their full power, they couldn't fully control them. Only cultivators who had reached the peak of the core forging realm or even the avatar realm could wield a spirit-nurturing mystic treasure as they pleased. When enlightened Master Xian Hui saw Lao Zu's expression, he could not help but ask, "Teacher, do you know the origin of this sword? This flying sword doesn't seem to be very popular." "Not popular?" Tianqin Laozu chuckled. "That's because they don't know the origin of this sword and are hesitant. Don't worry, there will be people who can't wait to make a move." This time the Songhai sect and Songlang sect came together. At first, the sects of the North Sea didn't know why, but it turns out that they got the news that the thin water sword is going to appear in the auction. This time, no matter what, our sect has to interfere. I'm afraid that the mysterious spirit, Sea Flame, and Shuiyin sects will not let go of this opportunity. It won't be that easy for the Songhai and Songlang sects to obtain the thin water sword. No matter how Lu Ping looked at it, Tianqin Laozu's laughter was a bit strange, as if there was a hint of mischief hidden in his laughter. Enlightened Master Xian Su and Enlightened Master Xian Sun looked at each other, as if they were observing a moment of silence for the Songhai and Songlang sections. At this time, a cloaked cultivator in the auction hall finally called out a new high price with an incomparably calm tone. "Old man bids 650 high-grade spirit stones." Enlightened Master Xian Su, who was at the side, asked Enlightened Master Xian Su in confusion, "Martial uncle, what is the origin of this thin water sword? Why would it bring the Songlang sect and Songhai sect, who have been enemies for thousands of years, together?" Enlightened Master Xian Su laughed. "Although I know a little about the thin water sword, it seems that when the Songhai sect separated from the Songlang sect, it was because of a pair of thin water sword. I heard that this pair of flying swords was passed down by the founder of the Songlang sect. Although the male and female swords only have one spirit-raising treasure restriction each, but when the two swords are combined, their power is even greater than condensing 3 spirit-raising treasure restriction, a top magic treasure. However, regarding this thin water sword, I'm afraid that junior sister Tianqin knows more about it." At this time in the auction hall, after the black-cloaked cultivator called out 650 high-grade spirit stones, Pavilion 15 suddenly called out 700 high-grade spirit stones. Tianqin Laozu's mouth revealed a trace of mockery. Immediately after the black-cloaked cultivator raised the price by 720 high-grade spirit stones, Pavilion 33 raised the price to 750 high-grade spirit stones. At this time, the entire auction hall seemed to have sensed something and looked to see if the black-cloaked cultivator would make another bid. However, this time the black-cloaked cultivator gave up. Just as Tianqin Laozu was a bit confused, a green-clothed cultivator not far from the black-cloaked cultivator suddenly raised the price to 800 high-grade spirit stones. This small change had maintained the peace of the hall for a short period of time. Everyone seemed to be waiting for something. At this time, Elder Tianqin said with some uncertainty, "Could it be that the two sects have split up and quoted their prices separately? This is a bit uncertain. No matter what, this thin water sword is something that the Songhai sect and the Songlang sect must obtain." With that, Tianqin Laozu raised the price of the thin water sword to 820 high-grade spirit stones. This is already the highest bid treasure since the start of the sect's auction. 850 high-grade spirit stones. The green-cloaked cultivator was still abnormally calm as he bid. However, this bid seemed to ignite the mood of the entire auction hall. There was definitely a problem with this flying sword. Chapter 513. Even though it was a spirit-nurturing treasure, it was only one of a pair of flying swords. Yet it was sold for a high price of 850 spirit stones. It was a little too much, not to mention the atmosphere of the auction was a little strange. 900 spirit stones. After the 15th, 33rd and 24th pavilions, the 7th pavilion also joined the bidding, and each of the 4 pavilions increased the price by more than 50 high-grade spirit stones, as if they all had their eyes on this flying sword. Lu Ping and the others knew that the 4 pavilions had probably calculated that the black-cloaked cultivator and the cultivator shrouded in green mist would spare no effort for this flying sword. At the same time, the 2 cultivators downstairs also seemed to understand that the 4 pavilions were probably the 4 sects of the North Sea. 1,000 spirit stones. After the 7th pavilion called out the high price of 900 spirit stones, the 2 cultivators in the auction hall seemed to fall into silence at the same time. A moment later, the black-cloaked cultivator suddenly called out an even more shocking price. Tianqin Laozu frowned and said, "These 2 should be the cultivators of the Zhonglang sect and the Zhonghai sect. It seems like the 2 of them have reached a consensus and want to work together to obtain this thin water sword." Taoist Master Shensen's face was also somewhat serious as he said, "Could it be that the 2 sects will choose to merge again? If they really merge, with the current strength of the 2 sects, they will be above either the Shuiyan Pavilion or the Haiyan sect. They will not be far from the Xianling sect. They won't go so far as to merge, but this thin water sword was passed down by the common ancestor of the 2 sections. Perhaps it contains some secrets of the 2 sects that outsiders do not know about. Moreover, just the fact that it is a relic left behind by the founder of the 2 sects is worth the 2 sects spending a huge amount of spirit stones to buy it." Tianqin Laozu stared at the 2 people downstairs and said, "I just don't know which Laozu these 2 people are from the Zhonghai sect and the Zhonglang sect." Enlightened Master Xianhui also asked, "Master, since this thin water-flowing sword was used by the founder of the Zhonglang sect, how could it be lost outside? Now that the thin water-flowing sword has appeared, where is the flowing sword? Is it still with the 2 sects?" Tianqin Laozu smiled and said, "The Zhonglang sect was caught in its own trap. Back then, the Zhonglang sect took in a core forging cultivator from the Central Plains. This cultivator was also an alchemy grandmaster, so the Zhonglang sect was very courteous to this cultivator. However, this cultivator couldn't be restrained. Although the Zhonglang sect spent a lot of effort, this cultivator never joined the Zhonglang sect. Later, this cultivator left many of the alchemy legacies he had obtained from the Central Plains in the Azure Wave sect. He felt that he had repaid the Azure Wave sect's kindness, so he became an itinerant cultivator and wandered the North Sea's cultivation world. After that, this cultivator used his exquisite alchemy skills to become an alchemy grandmaster and successfully entered the Dharma phase. In the North Sea's cultivation world, he became a famous itinerant cultivator. However, although this Laozu thought of himself as an itinerant cultivator, because of his relationship with the Zhonglang sect when he first came to the North Sea, he had always maintained close contact with the Zhonglang sect. The Zhonglang sect had always treated him as a guest, so he could enter and leave the sect freely. However, one day, someone suddenly broke into the Azure Wave sect's ancestral hall. The intruder's strength was very high, and he was very familiar with the situation of the Azure Wave sect's encampment. He avoided the various restrictive formations of the sect, and injured the Azure Wave sect cultivators guarding the ancestral hall. Then he wanted to steal the thin water-flowing forever twin swords that were enshrined in the ancestral hall. Fortunately, one of the Zhonglang sect's Laozu arrived in time and activated the formation in an attempt to stop this person. The intruder only took the long water-flowing sword, and relying on his familiarity with the formation, directly broke through the formation and left. When the Zhonglang sect members heard the news and rushed over, they turned their suspicious gazes to the guest, Laozu. This was because only he was so familiar with the Zhonglang sect, and only he who was at the Dharma stage, would be able to come and go as he pleased when the Zhonglang sect was caught off guard. Therefore, the 2 mid-Dharma adepts of the Zhonglang sect, Laozu, personally led the other 2 early Dharma adepts of the Zhonglang sect towards the guest's abode. After the 2 parties met, faced with the questioning of the 4 Laozu of the Zhonglang sect, the guest was very surprised and naturally denied the crime of stealing the long water-flowing sword. The 4 Laozu of the Zhonglang sect did not believe him and wanted to capture the guest and bring him back to the sect. The 2 parties did not agree and started fighting. The guest was only an early Dharma adept and was naturally no match for them. Very quickly he was severely injured. However, the guest was very stubborn and would rather die than admit to stealing the Zhonglang sect's ancestral hall. Just as the Tsang sect adepts were about to kill him out of anger, the Tsang sect sent out another warning. Someone was attacking the Tsang mountain where the Tsang sect was based. Furthermore, the intruder was very strong and seemed to be very familiar with the Tsang sect's grounds. All sorts of formations and prohibitions were easily broken by the intruder, and he rushed directly towards the Tsang sect's ancestral hall. The four Laozu of the Tsang sect turned pale with fright. They no longer cared about the guests in front of them and all flew back towards the Tsang mountain. However, they were still too late. After the four Laozu returned, the two early Dharma Laozu guarding the Tsang mountain had already been injured by the intruder. The thin water sword that was left in the ancestral hall was also stolen by the intruder. However, this time the intruder was recognized by the two Laozu of the Tsang sect. It was the remnant of the failing sect, the Zhongshuan Laozu who had been hiding in the East Sea training world. The truth was immediately revealed. The Laozu of the Tsang sect suddenly realized that in order to strengthen the sect's protective formation, the Tsang sect had once invited the most outstanding talent of the failing sect, who was only at the late core forging stage, but was already a master of craftsmanship and arrays, to perfect the sect's protective formation. Zhongshuan Laozu was Jiao Yuqiang's teacher, so when Jiao Yuqiang was perfecting the Tsang sect's protective formation, he must have seen through the Tsang sect's protective formation at the same time and reported it to the failing sect. As Jiao Yuqiang's teacher, Zhongshuan Laozu naturally had the right to know such confidential information. Thus, Zhongshuan Laozu was naturally able to come and go as he pleased in the Tsang sect's encampment and steal the thin water sword. Not only did the Tsang sect lose the ancestor's relic, but they also severely injured a Dharma adept and alchemy grandmaster who could have been a strong ally of the sect, cutting off their path to the mid-Dharma stage. It could be said that they had completely turned against each other, and for a while the Tsang sect became the laughing-stock of the North Sea training world. However, this was only the fuse that led to the Tsang sect's split. The Tsang sect originally had 2 mid-Dharma adepts and 4 early Dharma adepts. This level of strength was slightly stronger than the Haiyan sect and Shuiyan Pavilion, and was one of the 25 mid-tier sects in the overseas training world. However, the Tsang sect's 2 mid-Dharma adepts of the Tsang sect had been at odds with each other for a long time, as if there had been enmity between them for a long time. The 4 early Dharma adepts Laozu also took their own sides, and after this incident the two sects blamed each other. In the end, one of the sects took a portion of the Tsang sect's practitioners and left the Tsang sect, and because of the Tsang sect's split, only 4 of the 5 strongest mid-tier sects were left in the North Sea. Everyone was born in the North Sea, and although they knew that the Tsang sect and the Tsang sect were originally one family, they did not know that there was such a detailed story behind the split between the two sections. Now that they were listening to Tianqin Laozu explain the whole story, everyone listened with great interest. In the auction hall, after the cloaked elder had bid a high price of 1,000 spirit stones for the thin water sword, there was a moment of silence before the 7th room called out a bid of 1,050 spirit stones. The cultivator whose face was covered in green fog snorted coldly, causing the entire auction hall to buzz. It was obvious that this person had to be a Dharma adept to dare to do such a thing in the auction hall. However, he did not make a bid, and the black-cloaked cultivator followed suit and called out a bid of 1,100 high-grade spirit stones. This also made everyone more certain that these two people were the cultivators of the Tsang sect and the Tsanghai sect, and they were Dharma adepts. Spiritual Master Shen Su also added, in the past the North Sea cultivators joined forces to ambush Zhongshuan Laozu in the East Sea, but they did not find the thin water sword on him. Later, the North Sea cultivators searched the East Sea for a few more years, trying to find the secret cave that Zhongshuan Laozu hid in the East Sea. In the end, they returned empty-handed. After the Tsanghai sect and the Tsang sect retreated, they searched the East Sea for a few more years but still found nothing. Until a few years ago, Zhongshuan's cave was discovered in Skyren's sphere of influence. The East Sea cultivators heard the news and looted the cave. Maybe it was at that time that the thin water sword fell into the hands of a lucky cultivator who didn't know the details of the thin water sword, so it was auctioned off at that auction. Now we just don't know who has the long water sword. At this time, Spiritual Master Shen Bei asked, Uncle Master, who was the guest cultivator of the Tsang sect? Since he is Dharma adept Laozu and a master alchemist, he must be a famous cultivator in the North Sea. Tianqin Laozu once again called out a price of 1,200 spirit stones. Then he smiled and said, that cultivator came from the middle of the way to visit the Fei Ling sect. Unexpectedly, the Fei Ling sect had already been destroyed. After a series of coincidences, he became friends with the cultivators of the Zhonglang sect. This person is generally known as Qingjian Laozu in the North Sea cultivation world. Lu Ping's heart was beating rapidly. He raised his head and couldn't help but blurt out, "Qingjian Laozu?" Seeing Lu Ping's expression, Tianqin Laozu asked, "What? Could it be that martial nephew Lu has also heard of this person?" At this time, spiritual master Xiansen smiled and said, "Senior martial sister might not know this, but this Qingjian Laozu's cave mansion has already been discovered by martial nephew Lu and a few junior cultivators from other sections. Martial nephew Lu even obtained Qingjian Laozu's inheritance and handed it over to the sect." "Oh." Tianqin Laozu looked at Lu Ping strangely and said, "Martial nephew Lu is really lucky." Lu Ping smiled and said, "It is indeed luck." Suddenly, the black-cloaked cultivator, who had been bidding all this time, bellowed furiously and a formidable atmosphere of coercion erupted outwards. Next, an unstoppable divine sense charged towards Pavilion number 7, Pavilion number 17, Pavilion number 24 and Pavilion number 33 in the sky with an unstoppable momentum. As a result, the restrictive arrays covering the surface of the 4 pavilions burst apart. Chapter 5:14. "Oh no, it's the Zhonglang sect's East Pole Laozu." Tianqin Laozu's expression changed, and his hands conjured 12 spells in an instant. However, before he could cast the spells, the divine consciousness of the black-cloaked man had already broken through the seals of the 24th pavilion. Immediately after, the seals that Tianqin Laozu had set up earlier also began to crumble. "Stop. Were you, sir? How dare you behave so atrociously in this auction?" The order in the auction hall had been thrown into chaos by the sudden outburst of the black-cloaked man. The Dharma Power Laozu, who had been hiding in the dark to maintain order, had never expected that the one to act up on the spot would be a mid-Dharma adept, whose level of practice was no lower than theirs. For a moment, it was too late for them to stop him. However, just as the black-clad cultivator's divine sense was about to break into the tower, the black-clad cultivator suddenly grunted and his body shook violently. It seemed as though he was enduring a great deal of pain. At the same time, he had only just destroyed the restrictive arrays of the other 3 towers. Just as the identities of the cultivators inside the 4 towers were about to be exposed, the black-clad cultivator's divine sense abruptly retreated like a receding tide. The green-cloaked cultivator stood up abruptly. At this moment, 7 or 8 auras that were no weaker than those of the black-cloaked cultivator suddenly shot out from the auction hall. They locked onto the black-cloaked cultivator and the green-cloaked cultivator who had suddenly stood up. If the 2 of them made any further moves, the hidden sects of the Phantom City would be suppressed by the Laozu. For a moment, everyone in the auction hall felt insecure, especially the cultivators near the black-cloaked cultivator. Most of them had been shaken by the sudden outburst of his divine consciousness and were bleeding from their mouths and noses. They had been caught in the crossfire and had wanted to avoid it, but they had been suppressed by the divine consciousness of a few mid-Dharma adepts. However, there were also a few who were not seriously affected. It was clear that the Dharma Power Laozu had also concealed his level of practice to participate in this auction. The black-clothed Laozu reached out to stop the cultivator in the green mist. "Don't move, they are prepared, it's too late now." The cultivator, whose face was covered by the green mist, raised his head and seemed to be looking at pavilions number 7, number 17, number 24 and number 33 floating in the sky. Even though his face was covered by the green mist, Lu Ping and the others seemed to be able to sense the anger in his sharp eyes. The masked cultivator in black said coldly, I really didn't expect that the cultivator in room 24 would have the thought-dissolving powder. I wonder when the secret of the Central Plains Lu family fell into your sect's hands?" Because of the words of the masked cultivator in black, room 24 became the focus of everyone's attention. However, the reputation of the thought-dissolving powder made many curious cultivators give up on the idea of spying. As for those who had not heard of the thought-dissolving powder, seeing that even the mid-Dharma adept Laozu had been defeated, they naturally would not ask for trouble. In the room, Lu Ping's expression was as cold as still water. He did not feel the slightest bit of joy at being able to trick the mid-Dharma adept Laozu. The words of the masked cultivator in black were obviously using someone else to do his dirty work. Fortunately, the various sects were randomly teleported into the attics. Just now, with the deterrence of the thought-dissolving powder, the cultivators who had the intention of spying on them gave up. Thus, there was no need to worry about others discovering Jinling's identity. Tianqin Laozu formed a seal with 12 different hand seals and set up an even more intricate seal outside the attic to prevent others from spying on them. However, the deterrence of the thought-dissolving powder was enough. In a corner of the auction venue, 2 cultivators stared at room 24 with bright eyes. After a long time, Liao Ruanjia, who was beside them, secretly asked the cultivator next to him, "Brother Runjian, when did the secret of the thought-dissolving powder of our family be leaked?" The cultivator next to him had a serious expression, but he said hesitantly, "The family has sent out a few bottles of the thought-dissolving powder before, so it's hard to guarantee that it won't end up overseas. If the secret of the thought-dissolving powder was really leaked, then it should be that bastard Peng Shiyuan from the Crystal Palace. I didn't expect him to have even stolen the thought-dissolving powder. I wonder how many more secrets of the family have been stolen by him. Could it be that the cultivator in room 24 is a cultivator from the Crystal Palace?" Liao Ruanjia wasn't sure either. He thought for a moment and said, "It could also be Xianling's sect. After all, Peng Shiyuan was ordered to go to the North Sea. Now that Xianling's sect and the Crystal Palace are on good terms, maybe he won't give the thought-dissolving powder to Xianling's sect. But it's hard to say that he won't give a bottle of the thought-dissolving powder to Xianling's sect as a favor." The cultivator next to him looked at the 4 rooms in the sky and said, "The key to the problem is probably the thin water sword. Those 4 rooms are obviously taking turns to raise the price. Every time, it's after the black-robed cultivator and the cultivator in the green mist bid. It's obvious that these 4 rooms don't care about the thin water sword, but rather that these 2 people are determined to get the thin water sword. That's why they've tacitly agreed to take turns to bid. It's obvious that they don't want the 2 people to get the thin water sword so easily. As long as we know the origin of the thin water sword, then we'll know who these 2 people are and the identity of the 4 rooms in the sky." A faint voice came from an unknown direction in the auction hall. It was directed at the black-robed cultivator and the cultivator in the green mist. "If the 2 of you still want the thin water sword, it's best that you abide by the rules of this auction hall. No matter what, the 2 of you are people of high status. This time, Phantom City will give you face, but if there's a next time, the 2 of you don't have to leave Phantom City anymore." Laozu of the late Dharma stage. This auction hall actually had a late Dharma adept, Laozu? The black-robed cultivator snorted coldly. This time he didn't use the power of his divine will. Then he sat down on his seat and coldly bid again, 1,400 high-grade spirit stones. Seeing this, the cultivator in the green mist also sat back down. He just tilted his head slightly as if looking coldly at the 4 rooms in the sky. The hundreds of cultivators in the auction hall who had regained their order also looked at the 4 rooms that had taken turns to bid. In room 24, Tianqin Laozu's expression changed, but he didn't say a word. The other 3 rooms didn't bid either. On the stage, Dong Laozu chuckled and said, "Since no one else is bidding, this thin water sword belongs to this friend." A servant in the early core forging stage held a wooden tray in his hand. The black-robed cultivator threw a storage bag from the wooden tray. The servant scanned the storage bag with his divine will, but he looked hesitant. The black-robed cultivator snorted coldly again and pointed at the cultivator in the green mist who was sitting not far from him. The servant looked at Dong Laozu on the stage. Dong Laozu nodded slightly, and the servant walked towards the cultivator in the green mist. The cultivator in the green mist looked back at the black-robed cultivator, as if there was nothing he could do. He also threw a storage bag into the wooden tray. The servant bowed slightly to the 2 and handed the wooden tray to Dong Laozu. Dong Laozu placed the thin water sword on the wooden tray. After the servant brought the thin water sword over, he hesitated again. This time, the cultivator in the green mist took the initiative to point at the black-robed cultivator, and the servant handed the thin water sword to the black-robed cultivator. Seeing that the thin water sword was in the hands of the black-robed cultivator, Tianqin Laozu calmed down and said, "It seems that the 2 sects have really joined forces. The Tsanglang sect sent Dongji Laozu, so the other cultivator in the green mist should be Dongyi Laozu from the Tsanglang sect." Lu Ping knew these 2 people, or rather, all the slightly accomplished cultivators in the North Sea knew them. Dongji Laozu was the only mid-Dharma adept in the Tsanglang sect, and the other cultivator, Dongyi Laozu, was the only mid-Dharma adept in the Tsanglang sect, and he was only 1 step away from advancing to the mid-Dharma stage. The Tsanglang sect now had 1 mid-Dharma Laozu and 3 early Dharma Laozu. Although the Tsanglang sect only had 1 mid-Dharma adept and 2 early Dharma adepts, the Tsanglang sect was Jinling's ally. They had once received help from Jinling, allowing one of the early Dharma adepts to reach the peak of the early Dharma stage, and he was only one step away from advancing to the mid-Dharma stage. Once these two sects joined forces with 2 mid-Dharma Laozu and 5 early Dharma adepts, there would be a total of 7 Laozu. Their strength would have long surpassed the Shuayan Pavilion and the Haiyan sect, and they would be on par with the Shenling sect. The power structure of the North Sea training world would instantly change. Tianqin Laozu seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He glanced at Lu Ping and said to the crowd, "The matter of the thought-melting elixir will end here. The Lu family of Central Plains is not weaker than our sect, but the Lu family is an alchemy family, and their hidden power in the Central Plains training world is far from what our sect can compare to." In the middle of the auction hall, Dong Laozu had already taken out another item and started to introduce it. This was actually a type of spirit beast called Wind Apricot. There were a total of 3 of them, but they attracted a lot of Lu Ping's interest. After the spirit beasts were refined into elixirs, they had a great effect on the training of a practitioner's physical body. The bone-forging elixir that Lu Ping had obtained from the Liao family was one of them. However, before Lu Ping could make a bid, Tianqin Laozu, who was beside him, had already raised the price to 500 high-grade spirit stones. Lu Ping thought about it and did not make another bid. This was because he had already noticed that after the Wind Apricot started to bid, almost in an instant, almost half of the 40 pavilions had already made a bid. Furthermore, in the auction hall, including the black-cloaked Dongji Laozu and the fog-covered Dongi Laozu, there were also a few practitioners who seemed to be in the Dharma stage who had placed their bids. The price of the 3 Wind Apricot instantly rose from the starting price of 300 high-grade spirit stones to 400 high-grade spirit stones. It exceeded 500 and directly reached 600 high-grade spirit stones. Lu Ping patted his chest without anyone noticing and coughed slightly. There was a small house made of gold hanging below his neck, and there were 10 large spirit demon peaches on the spirit demon peach tree in the middle of the gold house, and each one of them was worth as much as the Wind Apricot. Tianqin Laozu gave up when the price of the Wind Apricot exceeded 700 high-grade spirit stones. In the end, the 3 Wind Apricot were won by the 4th pavilion at the price of 800 high-grade spirit stones. After the 3 Wind Apricots were auctioned off, old ancestor Dong finally took out a high-grade Earth Steppe origin treasure. The entire auction hall abruptly went silent, as the appetizer of the Spirit Fantasy City's grand auction meet had finally ended. Chapter 515. A high-grade Earth Steppe origin treasure was a threshold for any cultivator who was about to enter the late core forging stage. If a cultivator could refine a high-grade Earth Steppe origin treasure and advance to the late core forging stage, then there was a 50 to 60% chance that after reaching the 9th layer of core forging, as long as they had a Heaven Steppe origin treasure, they would be able to form a 7th grade golden core or higher. Of course, like Taoist Master Xuanyu, who had refined 2 mid-grade Earth Steppe origin treasures, it was also possible for him to refine a Heaven Steppe origin treasure after reaching the 9th layer of core forging. It was just that the price he would have to pay was far higher than refining a high-grade Earth Steppe origin treasure. However, how many cultivators could successfully refine a high-grade Earth Steppe origin treasure before advancing to the late core forging stage? Among the 7 most outstanding 6th layer core forging stage cultivators from Jinling's 3rd generation, only Taoist Master Shen could directly refine a high-grade Earth Steppe origin treasure after obtaining it. The others, including Lu Ping's second senior sister, Li Xuanru, and Tianqin Laozu's eldest disciple, Taoist Master Shen Hui, would need decades or even hundreds of years of accumulation to refine a high-grade Earth Steppe origin treasure. Moreover, after the appearance of a high-grade Earth Steppe origin treasure, the auction house's trading method also changed. The high-grade Earth Steppe origin treasure that Dong Laozu took out was called the Flying Parasol Wood. It was a wood attribute origin treasure. As soon as this origin treasure was taken out, Taoist Master Xuantian's breathing became rapid. He was Tianlin Laozu's eldest disciple and cultivated Jinling's wood attribute cultivation method. This flying parasol wood was just right for him to refine. Taoist Master Shen Tian was calculating his net worth when he heard Laozu's voice from outside. According to the old rules, high-grade Earth Steppe origin treasures have to be put aside for spirit stones. Unless you have top-grade spirit stones to exchange for it, it will generally be bartered according to the auction house's request. The auctioneer has 3 ways to exchange this flying parasol wood. The first way is to exchange it for a high-grade Earth-grade water attribute Fei. This condition was actually the most preferred method of exchange by the auctioneer. However, on this occasion, the cultivators of the sects would not care about this method of exchange. Only those who were lucky enough to have a high-grade earth-step water attribute spiritual object in their hands but didn't cultivate a water attribute cultivation method would be able to exchange it for a suitable spiritual object of the same grade. The second is to exchange for a high-grade pill furnace. This method of exchange was targeted at the various sects with strong foundations. However, when Lu Ping heard this, he shook his head. A high-grade pill furnace? Before Lu Ping gave Ping Shiwan's pill furnace to Qianlu Laozu, the entire Jinling only had 6 high-grade pill furnaces. How could they use them to exchange for a high-grade earth-step origin treasure? With Jinling's current strength, this was already the case. Other than the 8 big sects in the Crystal Palace, there was also the mysterious Demon Clan, the Heavenly Moon Sect, and the Yuan family of the Central Plains. No one would be willing to use a high-grade pill furnace to exchange for a high-grade earth-step origin treasure. After all, a high-grade alchemy furnace could produce countless pills for many people, but a high-grade earth-level spiritual item could only give a person the chance to break through to the golden core stage and become a Dharma adept. It was clear which was more important. The third method is to exchange for some top-grade spirit stones. The highest bidder gets it. After Dong Laozu finished speaking, Shen Jinren seemed to realize that his chances were not high, but he still looked hopefully at Lyra Laozu. Lyra Laozu thought for a moment, then said to Shen Jinren, "The first method is absolutely impossible, but using a high-grade pill furnace to exchange for a high-grade earth-step origin treasure is definitely not allowed by the sect, so I can only use some top-grade spirit stones to try." Shen Jinren had already expected this result. Although he did not have much hope for another wood attribute high-grade earth-step origin treasure, he still bowed gratefully and said, "Thank you, Uncle Master." Lyra Laozu nodded and took out a storage bag. Then a few plain-looking stones appeared in his hand. Lu Ping was very familiar with these stones and knew that they were top-grade spirit stones. Lyra Laozu put 12 top-grade spirit stones into the storage bag. After thinking for a moment, he took out 3 more and put them into the storage bag. Then he placed the storage bag in the small teleportation array on the stone table. After a flash of light, the storage bag disappeared. At the same time, on the jade table in front of Dong Laozu, the small teleportation array flashed continuously, and 5 storage bags appeared on the jade table. 3 early core forging attendants shuttled through the hall with wooden trays in their hands, bringing 6 storage bags to Dong Laozu. Great Ancestor Dong checked the 11 storage pouches one by one, then took out the treasures stored in each of the storage pouches and displayed them. Sure enough, out of the 11 storage bags, 8 of them were actually filled with top-quality spirit stones. The most actually had 18 top-quality spirit stones, while the least also had 10 top-quality spirit stones. Taoist Master Shen Tian sighed. Even though he had already mentally prepared himself, he still held onto a sliver of hope. Watching from the side, Ancestor Tianqin said, "You don't need to be disheartened. With how grand the auction this time is, it's unlikely that there will only be a single wood attribute earth spirit treasure." Shen Jinren nodded, but from his expression, it was obvious that he did not have much hope for the appearance of another wood attribute origin treasure. As for the other 3 storage bags, Dong Laozu took out a high-grade pill furnace from one of them, causing all the cultivators in the hall to sigh. After Dong Laozu opened the other 2 storage bags, there was actually a high-grade earth-step water attribute origin treasure inside. Compared to the cultivation world of the central continent, the only advantage the overseas cultivation world had was that water attribute origin treasures were relatively more common. Old Ancestor Dong first returned the other 9 storage pouches one by one. Then he pointed at the 2 storage pouches that contained water attribute spirit items and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist number 103 and fellow Taoist number 197, both of you have a water attribute spirit item. If you want to exchange for this wood attribute spirit item, it will depend on your abilities." Dong Laozu's voice just fell only to hear a muffled voice say, "In that case I will add 200 high-grade spirit stones." Dong Laozu chuckled and said, "Okay, fellow Taoist 103 will add 200 high-grade spirit stones." At this moment, another voice resounded and it sneered, "You can afford 200 high-grade spirit stones. Since the fellow Taoist who auctioned the soaring parasol would needs high-grade spirit stones, then I'll add 3 high-grade spirit stones." Cultivator 103 let out a muffled snort, did not refute this provocation and continued to say, 3 top-grade spirit stones and 50 high-grade spirit stones. The previous sneer sounded again. In that case, this flying parasol would his fellow Taoist 197's. Cultivator 103 did not bid any more, obviously feeling that he was at a loss. Dong Laozu smiled and said, "In that case this flying parasol would his fellow Taoist 197s. After the appearance of the Earth high-grade spirit item, the grand auction turned into a trade fair where everyone took what they needed. This made Lu Ping and the others feel a little out of place. But there was nothing they could do about it. In the cultivation world, there were many things that couldn't be measured in spirit stones. However, the appearance of the next item once again pulled all the cultivators back to the auction of spirit stones. This alchemy master's inheritance includes 23 types of pill recipes for the core forging stage. In addition, there are also 3 types of pill recipes for the half-step core forging stage. Of course, the most important thing is that this alchemy master also has a pill recipe that can strengthen the body. This alchemy grandmaster's inheritance will be auctioned with spirit stones. The starting price is 500 high-grade spirit stones, the highest bidder wins. This set of alchemy grandmaster's inheritance obviously came from a rogue cultivator, because an alchemy grandmaster was an extremely important existence in every sect. The entire sect's collection of alchemy grandmaster's inheritance must be open to them, so it was impossible for this alchemy grandmaster's inheritance to only contain a mere 23 kinds of core forging pill recipes. Just like Lu Ping after he became an alchemy grandmaster, although he was not bound by the pill pavilion, Junling Laozu still opened almost all of the Junling's pill recipes to Lu Ping, allowing him to choose and refine them himself. Now, Lu Ping had mastered nearly 100 kinds of core forging pill recipes, far more than an alchemy grandmaster who was originally a rogue cultivator could compare. This kind of alchemy grandmaster's inheritance, in addition to being valued by the alchemy grandmaster, almost all sects would spare no effort to collect this kind of inheritance, used to increase the foundation of their sect. Moreover, most of the cultivators in the auction hall were late core forging cultivators, so they had a good understanding of the importance of strengthening the body in the transcendent stage. Therefore, the pill recipe that could strengthen the body added a lot of weight to this set of inheritance. The ancestor of the Sky Zither sect was clearly quite interested in the inheritance. After some thought, she sent 5 high-grade spirit stones into the hands of the ancestor of Dong through the teleportation formation. At the same time, several flashes of light appeared on the jade table and several storage pouches appeared on the table. Each storage pouch contained 5 high-grade spirit stones. Dong Laozu also seemed to be prepared for this phenomenon, and from his body he took out several jade slips, and each jade slip had a specific description of this set of inheritance. Tianqin Laozu carefully examined the jade slip with her divine sense, and said, 23 kinds of core forging pill recipes, only 6 of them are not in our sect, and 4 kinds of half-step core forging pill recipes, only 1 of them is not in our sect. But that core forging pill that can strengthen the body is interesting, but it is not considered a good body tempering pill. It can only be considered medium, but the body tempering pill is extremely rare, so it is worth bidding. Of course, this set of inheritance did not only contain the pill recipes that Junling did not have, it also included some medicinal properties of spirit herbs, cultivation, collection, fire control techniques, alchemy experience, and other aspects. Every alchemy grandmaster must have their own unique side, for other alchemy grandmasters to learn from. This was the so-called stones from another mountain can polish jade principle. After Tianqin Laozu put down the jade slip in the auction hall, the price of this alchemy grandmaster's inheritance had already reached 630 spirit stones. Tianqin Laozu thought for a moment, and directly bid 700 high-grade spirit stones. Chapter 516. In the end, Tianqin Laozu wasn't able to win the inheritance because the cultivators in the 40th room raised the price to 1,000 high-grade spirit stones. Tianqin Laozu was dumbfounded. He shook his head with a bitter smile and said, with such a large amount of money, it's most likely the Heavenly Moon sect or the Yuan clan from the Middle Earth. No matter what, this inheritance is not worth such a price. After several auction items, a world spirit object that made second senior sister Li Xuanru's heart tremble finally appeared. The Azure Sea Jasper bead was a high-grade Earth-step water attribute world spirit object. The Azure Sea Jasper bead was also known as the Heart of the Ocean. It was a blue bead the size of a fist. The reason why the Azure Sea Jasper bead was called the Heart of the Ocean was that the cultivator who refined it would have a much higher cultivation speed than cultivators of the same level. Moreover, when a cultivator encountered an enemy, the cultivator would have an advantage in recovering their true essence. It was a type of world spirit object that could subdue enemies and was deeply loved by water attribute cultivators. Among the 7 cultivators sent by Junling, Taoist Xiantian cultivated a wood attribute cultivation method, Li Xuanru cultivated a water attribute cultivation method, Taoist Xuanyu cultivated an ice attribute cultivation method, Taoist Xianbei cultivated a wind attribute cultivation method, Taoist Xianzhu cultivated a metal-water dual attribute cultivation method, Taoist Xianhui cultivated a fire attribute cultivation method, and Taoist Xuanzu cultivated an earth attribute cultivation method. The 7 cultivators who had reached the peak of the mid-core forging realm all practiced different types of cultivation methods. It was obvious that this was specially arranged by Jinling to avoid disputes within the sect for the same world spirit object during the auction. Strictly speaking, Taoist Xianzhu could have used the Azure Sea Jasper bead. Although it wasn't completely suitable, Taoist Xianzhu had competed for a mid-grade Earth Step world spirit object last time. This time he couldn't compete with Taoist Li Xuanru. Tianqin Laozu's expression constantly changed as he looked at the Azure Sea Jasper bead on the stand. Lu Ping was puzzled at first, but he immediately sensed something from Tianqin Laozu's mocking smile. Second sister didn't want to ask Lyra Laozu for help. However, this time, Jinling had given all the treasures to Lyra Laozu. If second sister wanted to bid for this earth-rank upper-grade spiritual item, she had to lower her head to Lyra Laozu. Obviously, Lyra Laozu had already realized this situation. It depended on whether Li Xuanru wanted to save face or the Azure Sea Jasper Pearl. In the cultivation world, a high-grade earth-rank spiritual object could be considered a treasure that could only be encountered by luck and not sought for. When Spiritual Master Xiansun saw this, he pondered for a moment. Just as he was about to speak, Spiritual Master Xiansu tugged at his sleeve. Spiritual Master Xiansun sighed softly, but he didn't say anything in the end. Hee. Dong Laozu still had a smile on his face as he continued, the seller's request for this spiritual object is a little special. It's a fellow Taoist in the Transcendence realm who wants to establish a sect overseas. Unfortunately, his sect's foundation is shallow, so he wants to use this spiritual object to exchange for some pills that can quickly increase the cultivation of his disciples. Although the quality of the pills that the fellow Taoist wants is not high, the quantity is extremely large. Most of the pills are at the mid and late blood condensation realm and early core forging realm. Of course, everyone here is a discerning person. There's no need for me to explain the value of this Azure Sea Jasper Pearl. Just don't embarrass yourselves. As soon as Dong Laozu finished speaking, 7 to 8 storage pouches appeared on the jade table in front of him. 5 or 6 cultivators in the hall raised their hands to beckon the attendants to place the storage pouches on a wooden tray in front of Dong Laozu. The requirement to exchange for the Azure Sea Jasper Pearl was actually a little difficult. Perhaps many of the cultivators present had treasures and spirit stones that could match the value of this Azure Sea Jasper Pearl. However, they were all high-level cultivators in the cultivation world. How could they possibly have large amounts of pills that were only used by mid and late blood condensation realm and early core forging realm cultivators? Apart from the deep heritage of the various sects in the pavilions floating in mid-air, only a few alchemists or alchemy grandmasters hidden in the venue might have the ability to gather enough pills. Seeing Li Xuanru's somewhat unwilling expression, Lu Ping thought for a moment and said, "This Azure Sea Jasper Pearl is very important to you, senior sister?" Li Xuanru bit her lip and said in a low voice, "To be honest, junior brother, Master once said that with my talent, even if I can smelt a high-grade earth-level spiritual item, it will still take a lot of effort to condense a 7th-grade golden core. It will be even more difficult for me to break through to the Dharma stage. Only the Azure Sea Jasper Pearl can help me break through to the Dharma stage because it can shorten the cultivation process." Lu Ping smiled and said, "No matter what, the opportunity is right in front of you. How can you not give it a try? Maybe you can get it." Li Xuanru glanced at Tianqin Laozu behind her and said in a low voice, "How can I be willing to give up? Although I also have a few treasures that I obtained a long time ago, they are nothing compared to this Azure Sea Jasper Pearl, not to mention pills for the blood condensation stage." At this point, Reverend Li Xianru transmitted her voice again in a low voice. "That day she captured Junior Marshal Brother Ian and the 3 of us without any explanation, but she was greatly humiliated by you. Now she's probably waiting for us to bow our heads to her. If we really bow our heads to her after we return to the sect, she doesn't need to brag about it herself. Everyone in the pavilion will report what happened at the auction to their respective masters. How can this matter be concealed in the sect? This person has many grievances with Master in the past, and her schemes are top-notch. How can she let go of such an opportunity to attack Master?" Although the people in the pavilions couldn't hear Li Xuanru's voice transmission, They could guess that it had something to do with Tianqin Laozu. Everyone sat quietly and didn't make a sound. However, Lu Ping said in a low voice, "Senior sister, that's not for sure. Who knows, maybe we'll be able to get this spiritual item." Although Lu Ping said in a low voice, he didn't use voice transmission. How could he hide his words from the people in the pavilions? A piercingly cold light flashed in Tianqin Laozu's eyes, but it was caught by Lu Ping's sharp divine sense. Li Xuanru immediately reacted. Her junior brother was a grandmaster alchemist. Thinking about the spirit water meridian nourishing pill that was regarded as a treasure by the sect, as well as the mysterious minor forging spirit pill, perhaps her junior brother really had a way. However, Li Xuanru still said in a serious tone, "Junior brother, it's fine if you don't want this vast ocean water avoiding pearl. I know you have a lot of treasures in your hands, but it's best if you don't reveal them. After all, you're only a mid-core forging cultivator. Even if you have the strength of a late-core forging cultivator, in the eyes of a true late-core forging cultivator, you're still not on the same level as them. This is what Master wanted to tell you in the past, but because you were too cautious on Huangli Island and Master was there to take care of you, he didn't warn you." Lu Ping didn't expect Master to give him such an evaluation. Lu Ping thought about what second senior sister had told him. He knew that this was Master's concern for him, so he nodded solemnly. However, Lu Ping immediately smiled. This time, if he really left Tianqin Laozu aside and bid for the vast ocean jade heart pearl, it would really be a slap to Tianqin Laozu's face. Lu Ping rummaged through the storage ring for a moment and deliberated for a while. Then he placed a storage bag on the small teleportation array. In the pavilion, everyone except Tianqin Laozu was astonished. The storage bag disappeared on the small teleportation array activated by Lu Ping. Dong Laozu was checking the storage bags on the jade table one by one, and he reported the number of elixirs in each storage bag. However, Dong Laozu was still a little disappointed. The price of these items was comparable to a high-grade earth-rank spiritual item, but it was still too far from the expectations of his old friend who entrusted him to auction the vast ocean jade heart pearl. At this moment, the jade table next to Dong Laozu suddenly lit up with a ray of light again. Dong Laozu held the new storage bag in his hand in surprise. He scanned it with his divine sense, and the astonished expression on his face became even more obvious, which made the other cultivators who were bidding very curious. However, Dong Laozu's astonished expression was not because of the number of elixirs in the storage bag. On the contrary, it was because there were only a few kinds of elixir bottles and jade boxes in the storage bag. Every cultivator who participated in the auction took out a large number of elixirs. There were at least dozens of elixir bottles. Among them, there were many special elixirs that were specially used to raise a cultivator's cultivation level. However, these elixirs would have various side effects after consumption. Out of curiosity, Dong Laozu took out 5 jade bottles and 2 jade crystal boxes from the storage bag. Many of the cultivators in the auction house burst into laughter. How dare he take out such little things to show off? Dong Laozu calmly took out one of the jade bottles and an elixir. He carefully checked it, then put it back into the jade bottle and reported, 10 7-step marked elixirs. When the cultivators in the auction house heard Dong Laozu start to report the number of elixirs in a serious manner, the noisy auction house immediately quieted down. However, everyone understood that although the 7-step marked elixir was one of the best half-step core forging realm elixirs that could help condense the golden core, even if they filled up the other 5 jade bottles, they might not be able to compare to 1/10 of the vast ocean jade heart pearl. 10 enchanting thought elixirs. Although the enchanting thought elixirs were also good elixirs that could help condense the golden core, they were in fact inferior to the 7-step marked elixirs. 1 bottle of 3 jade spirit elixirs. Dong Laozu said indifferently after he opened the remaining 3 jade bottles. At this time, everyone's attention turned to the remaining 2 jade boxes. Everyone realized that the real mystery could only be solved by these 2 jade crystal boxes. In the pavilion, Tianqin Laozu still did not say a word. Sage Xiansu on the other hand was a little nervous. He whispered to Lu Ping and asked, "Martial nephew Lu, are you really confident?" Sage Xiansun was also a little nervous. If things went wrong, even Junling's clean reputation would be tarnished. Lu Ping smiled and said, "Martial uncle, don't worry. At the very least, the items in the storage pouches that appeared on the jade table won't be much worse than the items in the storage pouches." Sage Xiansu heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Lu Ping's words. The items that appeared on the jade table were the bids from the various sects in the pavilion. Since Lu Ping said that they did not need to be inferior to them, at least Jinling would not lose face in front of the cultivators from the overseas region. However, Sage Xiansu was even more curious. What exactly was hidden in Lu Ping's 2 jade boxes that could be comparable to the dozens of elixir bottles from the other sects? This is... On the platform, Dong Laozu's eyes lit up and he said with some surprise. Chapter 517. Dong Laozu's cry of surprise caused over 100 divine wills in the auction hall to touch the jade box in his hand. However, after Dong Laozu saw these things, he had already covered up the item in the jade box. When everyone's divine wills probed it, they all retreated after hitting a wall. Everyone could only watch as Dong Laozu opened the other jade box calmly. However, due to Dong Laozu's intentional covering up, they could no longer see what was in the other jade box clearly. After Dong Laozu opened the second jade box, the surprise on his face became even more intense, causing the curious cultivators below the stage to be even more bewildered. However, after Dong Laozu carefully closed the jade box, he returned the other storage pouches one by one, leaving only the last storage pouch in his hand. After that, Dong Laozu placed the oceanic jasper pearl into the jade box. After that, the teleportation light on the jade table flickered. Obviously, Dong Laozu believed that the person who sent the last storage pouch was the owner of this high-grade earth-rank spiritual item. Although the cultivators in the auction hall were curious which pavilion had paid what price to exchange for the oceanic jasper pearl from Dong Laozu's hands, they were too embarrassed to ask since Dong Laozu did not say. Just as Dong Laozu was about to take out the next item for auction, a clear laughter suddenly came from the sky, and the laughter from pavilion number 40 in the sky continued. "Mr. Dong, may I know what kind of precious spirit pill was used to exchange for the oceanic jasper pearl just now? I've offered over 20 types of spirit pills, and a total of over 100 bottles. Their value has already surpassed the oceanic jasper pearl by quite a lot, but they're not a match for the other party's 2 jade boxes. It's not because I'm indignant, I'm just curious about what exactly is in the jade box." Dong Laozu pondered for a moment and said with a smile, "So it's young Master Fei Xiang from the Yuan clan of the Central Plains, Yuan. Although young Master Yuan is generous, apart from the person who obtained the oceanic jasper pearl, he's not the highest bidder. The person who obtained the oceanic jasper pearl doesn't want others to know what was used for the transaction. Due to the rules of this auction, I can only apologize to young Master Yuan. Please don't ask for any information about the auctioneer and the bidder." That clear voice didn't take old ancestor Dong's words seriously and said with a smile, "I won't belittle myself. After all, there's still the Crystal Palace and the 8 great sects in this overseas cultivation world. It's normal for me to be inferior to them. It's just that I'm unable to find out exactly what the medicinal pill used to exchange for the oceanic jade heart pearl is. I believe that all the fellow Taoists who are participating in this auction feel the same way as I do, feeling regretful in the end." Dong Laozu chuckled and didn't say anything else. Instead, he took out the next item and introduced it to the people in the auction hall. The interruption of the young master from the Central Plains was like a tidbit in this auction. However, many cultivators who had participated in the overseas auction knew in their hearts that this was the effect of the Yuan clan's reputation as the #1 clan in the cultivation world. If someone had done this in the past and acted so openly, they would probably have been chased out of Phantom City by the auction hall's Dharma idol, Laozu. In the 24th room, Li Xuanru tried her best to calm down and pushed the jade box containing the oceanic jasper pearl that Lu Ping had pushed over to her. She said, "Junior brother, you also cultivate a water attribute cultivation method and are only a step away from advancing to the 6th layer of the core forging realm. This oceanic jasper pearl is really too precious. Junior brother, you should keep it for your own use. Senior sister, you know your own strength very well. Even with this oceanic jasper pearl, I'm afraid it'll take 100 years of accumulation before you can refine it. Junior brother's strength far surpasses senior sister's. I'm afraid that once you advance to the 6th layer of the core forging realm, you'll be able to refine this kind of high-grade earth-rank spiritual item." Lu Ping smiled and said, "Senior martial sister, feel free to use it. I have my own plans for the spirit pellets I need to break through to the late core forging realm. Besides, I just happen to have a few suitable spirit pellets on me, which is why I was able to win the auction. Otherwise, with my wealth, how could I have traded for such a treasure?" Li Xuanru still shook her head and said, "This item is really too precious. No matter what, I can't casually use it. I'm afraid I won't be able to return it in the future." Lu Ping laughed involuntarily and said, "Senior sister, Did you forget that this auction is for the sect to collect spiritual items for you to advance to the late stage of the core forging realm? Could it be that senior sister is afraid that the sect won't compensate you after you return? Li Xuanru's eyes lit up when she heard Lu Ping's words. She said, "That's right. This is a treasure that junior brother helped the sect obtain. The sect has always been clear about rewards and punishments. How could we let junior brother suffer a loss? Moreover, teacher is in charge of the sect." Senior sister didn't think of this. Lu Ping pushed the jade box back to Li Xuanru and said with a smile, "Senior sister, you're confused because you're too concerned." Li Xuanru happily put the jade box away. She no longer cared about talking to Lu Ping. Instead, she carefully looked at the huge pearl in the jade box with a heart full of joy. Li Xuanru really felt that the deep ocean jade pearl was indeed too precious. She also wanted to use this opportunity to deliberately put on a show with Lu Ping and humiliate Tianqin Laozu. Lu Ping also understood this very well. Naturally, they cooperated very well. This could be considered as a blatant provocation to a Dharma adept, Laozu. In all fairness, Lu Ping and his junior brother were also very daring. They did not respect the Dharma Laozu of their own sect at all. In the eyes of others, this was simply an act of seeking death. If the two of them did not have a Dharma adept standing behind them, they would definitely not have the guts to provoke a Dharma adept, Lu Ping. This could be considered as a fox exploiting a tiger's might. However, Lu Ping could also see clearly that after this Tianqin Laozu returned to the sect, there would definitely be a fight between him and his teacher. Lu Tianling Laozu was decisive and had quite a bit of prestige in Jinling. Naturally, she was not someone to be trifled with. This time, when she regained control of Jinling, she actually held the real power of the sect leader. With the righteousness of the sect in her hands, she was even more unafraid of Tianqin Laozu's provocation. However, this time the actions of Lu Ping and his junior brother were also hoping to further damage Tianqin Laozu's prestige in the sect. This would make her even more vulnerable when facing her teacher after she returned to the sect. The atmosphere in room number 24 was very awkward. Although Tianqin Laozu was still sitting in the room without moving, the whole room was filled with the coldness of her body, causing spiritual master Shantian and the other third-generation disciples to be as quiet as cicadas in winter. Spiritual master Xuanshu's expression was a bit unhappy. Even spiritual master Shensen was a bit displeased by Lu Ping's naked provocation. They were all the best among the second-generation disciples. Although Lu Ping's actions this time were aimed at Tianqin Laozu, it was also a performance of a third-generation disciple being domineering and not putting the second-generation disciples in their eyes. Regarding this, Lu Ping also felt a bit helpless. His actions just now were more or less thoughtless. However, for an item like the azure blue heart pearl that could only be encountered by chance, and it just so happened that Lu Ping had something suitable to exchange for it, even if it was not suitable for Li Xuanru, Lu Ping would not let it go. Because the next time he encountered the same thing, Lu Ping was not confident that he would be able to meet the requirements of the auctioneer. After Dong Laozu revealed the identity of Yuan Fei Fei of the Yuan family in room number 40, Lu Ping's attention was immediately drawn away from the room. Lu Ping could not help but think of the embroidered clothed cultivator who was accompanied by Shangguan Hao in front of the store of bountiful treasures that day. Shangguan Hao was someone he had to kill. Just because he knew the identity of Samling, Lu Ping had no reason to let this person who could bring danger to him live. However, if Lu Ping wanted to kill Shangguan Hao, it was obvious that Yuan Fei Fei was an obstacle. Although Lu Ping had never been to the Central Plains, he still knew the prestige of the Yuan family. The Yuan family was the only family in the cultivation world that could be on an equal footing with the large sects in the cultivation world. Legend had it that the Yuan family had a long history and was not inferior to the few large sects in the Central Plains. It could be traced back to the time when the seventh patriarch opened the sky. The Yuan family even took the head of the seventh patriarch, Peng Laozu, as the family's ancestor and claimed to be the direct descendant of Peng Laozu. The Yuan family had a deep heritage and a high status in the Central Plains. Even some of the large sects treated the people of the Yuan family with great courtesy. Therefore, after Dong Laozu revealed the identity of Yuan Fei Fei, although there was a hidden warning, he did not directly expel her from the Phantom City according to the previous rules of the overseas cultivation world. Unconsciously, Lu Ping actually put the Yuan family in his own hostile position and began to think. Right at this moment, old ancestor Dong placed a jade slip on the auction stand. He smiled and said, "The next item is much simpler. However, its importance isn't the slightest bit inferior. I won't say much about the value of the forbidden elixir cauldron. The starting price is 600 upper spiritual stones. The highest bidder wins. Lu Ping did not like the Phantom City's method of combining auctions and bartering because there were too many uncertainties. For example, Lu Ping had used 2 jade boxes earlier. One contained 8 heart-dissolving pills while the other contained 3 heart-forging pills. The safest way to deal with such an item that could cause a huge commotion in the cultivation world was to privately trade with the user of the Azure Sea Blue beads. However, it was too dangerous to do so in an auction. Even though Lu Ping was alert and had attached his divine sense to the jade box in advance and secretly reached an agreement with Dong Laozu, it still attracted the attention of some people. However, Lu Ping had to admit that the Phantom City could only use this method to gather as many cultivators from the overseas cultivation world as possible. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for Lu Ping to obtain the Azure Sea Blue beads in such a way. The appearance of the forbidden elixir cauldron seemed to have given Tianqin Laozu a way to vent her anger. The starting price of 7 highest spiritual stones attracted many big and small forces and even high-level rogue cultivators to participate in the bidding. The price of the forbidden elixir cauldron quickly broke through 1,000 upper spiritual stones. 1,100 upper spiritual stones. Tianqin Laozu called out a new high price calmly. However, Lu Ping could hear the coldness in her calm voice. Spiritual Master Shen Sen, who was at the side, said, "Senior sister, this price is..." Tianqin Laozu coldly interrupted Spiritual Master Shen Sen and said, "Junior brother, you don't have to worry about this. You don't know how important the forbidden elixir cauldron is to our sect." "But, alright, I know what I'm doing." Chapter 518. Taoist Master Shen Sen wanted to remind Tianqin Laozu that Jinling already had a cauldron, but Tianqin Laozu's expression was calm. In fact, his heart was already burning with rage. Tianqin Laozu did not wait for Taoist Master Shen Sen's advice and interrupted him, making him speechless. Lu Ping, on the other hand, sat quietly at the side of the pavilion. His head was slightly lowered so no one could see the expression on his face. 1,600 spiritual stones. Pavilion 33 seemed to be very interested in the forbidden artifact. Tianqin Laozu sneered, "There's an 80% chance that Xianling Sect's Daoxian is in Pavilion 33, but it's not that easy to obtain this forbidden artifact. 1,700 spiritual stones." Tianqin Laozu did not budge an inch. After a while, the cultivator in Pavilion 33 seemed to be unwilling to give up, and he once again made a bid of 1,750 spiritual stones. Tianqin Laozu sneered and said decisively, 1,800 spiritual stones. In all fairness, 1,800 high-grade spiritual stones for a cauldron's forbidden artifact was a little too high. Although Jinling had handed all the matters of the auction to Tianqin Laozu, the number of spiritual stones was still limited. Moreover, Jinling hoped that he could exchange them for some heaven and earth spirit items that his disciples could refine through bartering. This was also based on the fact that Jinling had occupied a medium-sized spirit mine all by himself. Otherwise, Tianqin Laozu's extravagant spending of Jinling's spiritual stones would have a negative impact on the cultivation of all the cultivators in Jinling's sect. After defeating the suspected Xianling sect's Pavilion 33, Tianqin Laozu seemed to have vented most of the anger in his heart. His expression also calmed down. Tianqin Laozu seemed to remember something and turned to Taoist Master Shen Sen, "Junior brother Shen Sen, although this forbidden artifact is much more expensive, compared to Xianling sect, our sect's biggest disadvantage is that we don't have a magic treasure cauldron. If we have this forbidden artifact, Master's Triong cauldron might be able to advance into a magic treasure cauldron. Therefore we must obtain this forbidden artifact." Enlightened Master Shen Sen smiled bitterly and didn't say anything. Enlightened Master Shen Hui opened his mouth to speak but saw Enlightened Master Shen Tian's eyes. If he didn't say it now, Jinling would know sooner or later. Jinling would be even more furious if he hid it from Artie. Tian. Qin Laozu was startled. Tian. The celestial zither ancestor was taken aback and could not help but ask, "When did this happen?" Enlightened Master Shen Hui told him about how Laozu used the Nachuan cauldron to defeat Xianling sect's Dao Li Laozu, who was also using the boiling sea cauldron. Then he carefully looked at Tianqin Laozu's expression. Tianqin Laozu immediately understood Enlightened Master Shen Sen's advice just now. It wasn't because the price of the cauldron far exceeded the value of the cauldron, but because Jinling already had a cauldron. Spending so many spirit stones to bid for the cauldron was not worth it. Tianqin Laozu's face turned green and red. Enlightened Master Xiansu, who was at the side, saw that something was wrong. He quickly forced a smile and said, "Junior martial sister, don't worry about it. After all, it is a cauldron. Even if it can't be used now, after 100 years, our sect's cauldron might have a chance to improve further. At that time, this cauldron will be of great use. After all, a cauldron is something that can only be found by luck." Tianqin Laozu sat down again. Her expression had already calmed down. She asked Enlightened Master Xiansen, who was at the side, "Junior martial brother Xiansen, do you know if that cauldron is teacher's Trisun cauldron? And where did the cauldron in teacher's hand come from?" Enlightened Master Xiansen shook his head and said, "The cauldron that our sect obtained is not Uncle Fornax's Trisun cauldron. It's just that whether it is a new cauldron that Uncle Fornax obtained or a top-grade cauldron that was upgraded with a cauldron treasure, I don't know." After Enlightened Master Xiansen finished speaking, he glanced at Lu Ping. Back then, when Lu Ping displayed his alchemy skills in Jinling Courtyard, he had once shown everyone the top-grade cauldron in his hands. Enlightened Master Xiansen suspected that the sect's cauldron was actually related to Lu Ping. It was just that on that day when Fornax Laozu and Dao Li Laozu fought in the sky, although everyone knew that Fornax Laozu used a cauldron to defeat Dao Li Laozu, they did not see the Nachuan cauldron in Fornax Laozu's hands. In addition, Fornax Laozu and the others had deliberately concealed it. In the whole of Jinling, other than the few Dharma phase Laozu, no one knew that the cauldron was actually Lu Ping's. Therefore, Enlightened Master Xiansen could only suspect it. Ever since Lu Ping improved the minor forging spirit pills and increased the effect of the newly refined minor forging spirit pills to a quarter of the ordinary minor forging spirit pills, Lu Ping felt that his alchemy skills had reached a bottleneck. As long as he broke through this bottleneck, he might be able to become the third alchemy grandmaster in Jinling after Fornax Laozu and Tianqin Laozu. When Fornax Laozu and Tianjiang Laozu asked him for the Nachuan cauldron, they had made it clear that when his alchemy skills reached the level of alchemy grandmaster, the Nachuan cauldron, which had reached the level of a magical treasure, would once again be under his control. Lu Ping naturally would not worry about the too dignified Dharma Laozu deceiving him, a junior. However, now that Tianqin Laozu had brought this treasure prohibition back to the sect, there was no doubt that this treasure prohibition would definitely be used on the Nachuan cauldron in the future. Although at that time, Jinling might have a new magical treasure furnace, the Nachuan cauldron, as the number 1 furnace in Jinling, would definitely be given priority. In this way, the second treasure prohibition of the Nachuan cauldron would also be settled, and Lu Ping himself also had a treasure prohibition of the pill furnace that he had obtained from Peng Shiwan, so it was possible for the Nachuan cauldron to be directly promoted to the level of a psychic pill furnace. For such a good thing, Lu Ping naturally had no reason to refuse. The key now was to not let Tianqin Laozu notice the joy on his face at this time. Although Lu Ping tried his best to remain calm, Tianqin Laozu and the others were all shrewd people. Perhaps if Lu Ping's expression changed slightly, they would be able to see some clues. Therefore, Lu Ping simply lowered his head slightly, so that others could not see the expression on his face. As the auction went on, the treasures that appeared became more and more rare, and the auction price also kept rising. Every treasure that appeared, even if it was not urgently needed by cultivators or sects, would still cause many cultivators and sects to compete for it. However, the more precious the treasure, it was often obtained by the 40 pavilions floating in the sky. After all, the scattered cultivators in the auction venue were absolutely unable to compare with the financial resources of these large and medium-sized sections. Tianqin Laozu also frequently made a bid, but often had to give up after increasing the price once or twice. In the end, the number of treasures that were obtained from these pavilions could distinguish the large and medium-sized sects among these pavilions. These large sects, at least the large sects of the Eastern Sea, each possessed at least one large spirit stone vein. Compared to the entire Northern Sea, which only had one newly discovered large spirit stone vein, it was unknown how many times richer they were. Not to mention the treasures that Lu Ping and the others were envious of. Even Tianqin Laozu could only watch as other pavilions obtained treasures at jaw-dropping prices, causing Tianqin Laozu to sigh repeatedly. There were also several earth-grade and high-grade heaven and earth phase. However, it was a pity that these things were either not favored by spiritual master Shantian and the others, or the conditions of the transaction were too harsh, or they were obtained at a higher price. Jinling had originally come here specifically to collect heaven and earth phase, but in the end, only spiritual master Xuanyu obtained the earth-grade ice jade, and Li Xuanru obtained the earth-grade azure sea blue heart pearl with Lu Ping's help. Seeing the envious gazes that Shen Tian and the others had on Li Xuanru, who had been studying the azure sea blue heart pearl in her hand, Tianqin Laozu's expression became increasingly unsightly. Fortunately, a heaven and earth fae finally appeared, and its conditions for the transaction made Tianqin Laozu's eyes light up. Jade liquid flowing goblet. This was a peculiar heaven and earth fae, or rather, a peculiar coexistence of two kinds of heaven and earth fae. This was a peculiar water attribute earth grade fae, and it existed within a metal attribute heaven and earth fae. Furthermore, this metal attribute heaven and earth fae was also earth grade. This was obviously a kind of treasure that was specially prepared for spiritual master Xianzhu. After spiritual master Xianzhu saw the introduction of this peculiar heaven, and spiritual master Xianzhu no longer cared about his pursuit of earth grade heaven, and spiritual master Xianzhu fervently asked Tianqin Laozu, "Martial uncle, please help this disciple obtain this treasure." This disciple feels that this treasure is more suitable than smelting a metal attribute or water attribute heaven and earth fae. Back then Tianqin Laozu was quite fond of Tianshui Laozu. Tianshui Laozu's disciple, spiritual master Xianzhu, was Tianqin Laozu's good friend, and spiritual master Xianzhu was spiritual master Xuanzhu's disciple. Spiritual master Xianzhu had served his teacher and was also very familiar with Tianqin Laozu. Tianqin Laozu enjoyed the feeling of having a junior disciple rely on him. In addition, Tianqin Laozu and spiritual master Xianzhu were already familiar with each other. Thus Tianqin Laozu smiled and said, "Martial uncle, I will naturally do my best. However, those who covet this jade liquid flowing goblet probably won't say anything. The rest can only depend on luck." Jade liquid flowing goblet was a coexistence form that was extremely rare in the cultivation world. Its rarity was probably even higher than earth grade heaven and earth fae. For those cultivators who cultivated in metal attribute and water attribute cultivation techniques, it was definitely a fatal attraction. The auctioneer urgently needs a good healing elixir. This kind of healing elixir not only needs to have a quick and direct medicinal effect, but it also needs to have a gentle and long-lasting medicinal effect. It won't cause any other damage to the cultivator. This is because the cultivator who needs this elixir to heal has broken blood vessels and is already on the verge of cultivation collapse. Chapter 519. The Fantasy Spirit City's trade fair only lasted for 7 days, but the auction held in the Fantasy Spirit Palace would last for 3 days. 3 days without sleep or rest was a simple task for cultivators. 2 days had already passed, and with the sale of nearly 200 items, the auction was nearing its end. More and more valuable items appeared, and their grades were getting higher and higher. Their prices were also climbing higher and higher as well. These 200 auction items ranged from spirit pills to pill furnaces, from magic treasures to forbidden treasures, from cultivation methods to divine abilities and dharma spells, and from spiritual objects to all kinds of legacies. It could be said that there was everything one could think of. Moreover, every auction item could be said to be the best in the cultivation world. The appearance of jade nectar flowing goblet and the announcement of its conditions caused Tianqin Laozu's expression to brighten. Tianqin Laozu currently had 2 types of pills that fulfilled these conditions. One was used to repair and nourish damaged blood vessels, and the other was used to quickly heal injuries within the body. It even had the effect of increasing one's cultivation. These were the Jinling Spirit Water Meridian Nourishing Pill and the Bell Cauldron Pill. The combination of these 2 pills was often a blessing in disguise for heavily injured cultivators whose cultivation was on the verge of collapse. At least, Taoist Master Shen was a living example. However, what greatly reduced Tianqin Laozu's excitement was that the Jinling Spirit Water Meridian Nourishing Pill was actually in the hands of Lu Xianping. Thinking of Lu Ping, Tianqin Laozu felt inexplicably irritated. Not only was this person the proud disciple of that person, but he was also constantly opposing him. As a senior, Tianqin was repeatedly held back and could only watch as this person humiliated him in front of the rest of the sect. This kid was actually so lucky. Even the Jinling Spirit Water Meridian Nourishing Technique, an unorthodox alchemy technique that was almost lost in the cultivation world, was discovered and successfully cultivated by him. This was really strange. This kid clearly cultivated a water attribute cultivation method, but he actually entered the realm of alchemy and even triumphantly became one of the few alchemy masters in the sect. If it weren't for the fact that Lu Ping cultivated a water-attributed cultivation method, how could he have inherited the inheritance of spirit water alchemy? Lyra Laozu shook her head gently as if she wanted to put these thoughts aside. At this time, there were already more than 10 storage bags on the auction stage. It was obvious that many people were interested in this jade nectar. Tianqin Laozu thought for a moment, then put the 3 spirit water meridian nourishing pills and the 3 bell cauldron pills into 2 jade marrow boxes, then put them into the storage bag and brought them to the booth. After Dong Laozu checked the pills in the storage bags one by one, he picked out 3 storage bags and returned the rest. In the building, the ancestor of the Sky Zither sect saw that the storage bags had not been returned, which was clearly within her expectations. However, what surprised her was that there were actually 2 storage bags left behind. Dong Laozu pointed at the 3 storage bags and said, according to the medicinal effects, the pills in these 3 storage bags are the most effective, and they are also what the auctioneer of the Jade Nectar urgently needs. However, this makes it a bit difficult for me to distribute them, so I ask the 3 of you to continue bidding. The highest bidder wins. As soon as Dong Laozu's voice fell, Yuan Feixiang from the Central Plains Yuan family, who was in the 40th room, asked in surprise, in this cultivation world, there are pills that are comparable to my Yuan family's healing pills. I wonder if Mr. Dong can tell this junior the names of these 2 pills? Of course, this junior has no intention of offending the dignity of the fantasy city, I am just curious. Dong Laozu smiled faintly and was about to refuse, but he was startled for a moment. He pointed at one of the storage bags and said with a smile, although Mr. Yuan comes from the number 1 family in the Central Plains and is experienced and knowledgeable, you cannot underestimate the heroes of the world. Your family's 7 Extreme Emperor pill is naturally a healing pill, but the pills in this storage bag are the most effective and can heal the injured person's injuries the fastest. Oh, this is a coincidence, the most effective medicine. Could it be that the injured person just happened to meet an enemy here and got the antidote by chance? Yuan Feixiang's ridicule was a bit unbridled, but for some reason, Dong Laozu and the others did not give him a warning. The Yuan family is really famous. I Chu Yuan do not believe in such nonsense. That injured person may not have been injured by me, but the spell that injured the auctioneer was from my Chu family. How could it be? Could it be that Mr. Yuan wants to seek justice for that person? In room 37, a cultivator who didn't sound very old said in a lazy manner. So it is the Green Sea Snake's Chu family. Yuan Feixiang seemed to be a bit serious this time. However, after knowing Chu Yuan's identity, Yuan Feixiang ignored the provocation of the Green Sea Snake's powerhouse. Instead he asked Dong Laozu, I wonder what is in these 2 jade essence boxes? How can it be comparable to the elixir of our Yuan family? Dong Laozu smiled and said, one of the elixirs in these 2 jade essence boxes is also an effective elixir. However, compared to fellow Chu's elixir, it takes too long to take effect. It may take several years. Therefore, the other party attached another healing elixir in the other jade box. Although this elixir is not completely effective, it can play an excellent role on the basis of the first elixir. Moreover, after the injury is healed, it can also greatly improve the cultivation of the injured. Oh, there is such a magical elixir. It seems that the overseas cultivation world is also a land of crouching tigers and hidden dragons. Feixiang is too shallow. Yuan Feixiang still had a proud tone, but he seemed to be a lot more serious. He still said, I am willing to bid an extra 500 high-grade spirit stones for this spiritual item. I heard that the Middle Earth is full of heroes, and the Yuan family is also very famous. Plus, your family is the only Thunder Element Peng bloodline in the training world. So, why would you want this mid-rank Earth-class spirit item? I will bid 600 high-grade spirit stones. How about young Master Feixiang give this spiritual item to me? The Emerald Sea Spirit Snake Clan cultivator who had introduced himself as Chu Yuan in room 37 spoke in an unhurried manner. One was a wealthy family of the Middle Earth, and the other was a monster race. The 2 of them confronted each other in the auction hall as if there was no one else present. Dong Laozu did not know why, but he just pretended not to see it. Brother Chu's words are not appropriate. The Thunder attribute Peng bloodline can only be inherited by the direct descendants of the Yuan family. The Yuan family has many branch bloodlines and affiliated families. This jade liquid flowing goblet is exactly what a good friend of mine needs. Please forgive me for not wanting to give it to you. Moreover, there is another family participating in the auction. Even if I want to give it to you, Brother Chu will have to ask this family, right? Yuan Feixiang spoke with fervor and assurance. He opened his mouth and increased the additional spirit stones by 100. In the 24th room, Daoist Xianzhu looked at Lyra Laozu with apprehension. Especially after hearing that the last bidder was actually the Yuan family and the Green Sea Snakes, Daoist Xianzhu's heart became more and more uncertain. At this time, Lu Ping knew that if Lyra Laozu did not have anything unexpected, there was an 80% chance of getting this spiritual item. Competing with the green sea snakes and the Yuan family in the cultivation world with spirit stones was an extremely unwise approach. Sure enough, after Lyra Laozu thought for a moment, his hands drew a circle in front of him, and then a black hole appeared in the void. Lyra Laozu dug into the hole and took out a jade essence box. After opening it, there were 3 purple pills the size of a finger. At first glance, Lu Ping thought that Lyra Laozu took out 3 bell cauldron pills again. He was a little surprised at first, but after a careful look, Lu Ping quickly noticed the difference between the two. The luster in the 3 purple pills seemed to be more abundant than the bell cauldron pills. The pill fragrance that filled the room was also much stronger than the bell cauldron pills, and the fragrance was also different. At this time, because of Yuan Feixiang's words, the attention of the auction venue was focused on the storage bag of the third force that was participating in the auction. They wanted to see if the third force would bid for this spiritual item under the attack of the 2 major forces. At the same time, they also hoped that the third force would be like the green sea snakes and the Yuan family, announcing themselves to satisfy the curiosity of the cultivators in the auction venue. It would also add a little extra fun to the auction that would last for 2 days. However, to everyone's disappointment, the third force that was participating in the auction did not make a sound. Just when everyone was disappointed that this force was going to give up under the pressure of the green sea snakes and the Yuan family, they saw the small teleportation array on the jade table in front of Dong Laozu light up again. Dong Laozu's spirit was also lifted. However, under everyone's expectant gaze, what appeared in front of everyone was still a jade box. After Dong Laozu recovered from his shock, he opened the jade box. 3 purple elixirs the size of a thumb, similar to the elixirs in the previous jade box, were revealed. What is this? Could it be that the third force wants to use the number of elixirs to determine the winner? What's the use of that? This kind of top-grade elixir used for healing injuries is mostly used by cultivators who are half a step into the Dharma manifestation stage and above. A cultivator can only use 3 at most before it loses its medicinal effect. What's the use even if you give them 1,000 elixirs? There were also cultivators who were proficient in elixirs who refuted, "No, these 3 elixirs are different from the previous 3. Perhaps they are other elixirs. Let's see how Dong Laozu explains it." As Dong Laozu examined the 3 elixirs in front of him, he also listened attentively, as if someone was communicating with him through telepathy. After a while, Dong Laozu nodded slightly and smiled, "So that's how it is. These 3 elixirs are elixirs that the bidder has improved on the basis of the previous 3 elixirs. Not only are the improved elixirs more effective for healing injuries, but they are also very effective for cultivators, especially those in the late core forging stage, to break through bottlenecks. In terms of the quality of the elixirs, these 3 elixirs are completely Dharma manifestation elixirs, but they can be consumed by core forging stage cultivators. This is already the work of an alchemy grandmaster. In this way, there is no doubt that the Jade Goblet auction this time will be the winner. Compared to the Spirit Stones, the auctioneer obviously values the cultivation that will be delayed due to healing injuries. Chapter 520. In the attic, Jinren Shensen was quite surprised and praised, "Senior sister, you actually upgraded the Zhongding pill to the Dharma stage and it can still be used by a core forging stage cultivator. This method is already comparable to Uncle Tianlu's creation of the Zhongding pill that caused a sensation in the North Sea training world. That Dong Laozu's claim of being an alchemy grandmaster is really not a lie." Lu Ping was also quite impressed by Lyra Laozu's pioneering work. Lyra Laozu smiled and said, "These years in the East Sea my alchemy skills have not improved much, but this little bit of achievement is still standing on Master's shoulders. Junior brother, you are flattering me. Just like how an alchemy grandmaster could become an alchemy grandmaster by refining a core forging stage elixir, refining a Dharma stage elixir could naturally also be called an alchemy grandmaster. However, a real alchemy grandmaster needed to independently create a core forging stage elixir to prove that they were passed down to future generations. Alchemy grandmasters often also needed to create a Dharma stage elixir to be called a real alchemy grandmaster. The Zhongding pill was originally a kind of healing elixir for a half-step to the Dharma stage. After Lyra Laozu upgraded the Zhongding pill to the Dharma stage, she could barely be called an alchemy grandmaster. However, she lowered the threshold to the core forging stage elixir without affecting the grade of the elixir. This was even more rare and valuable, and she deserved to be called an alchemy grandmaster. So far in the auction, Jinling had only obtained 2 kinds of mid-earth level spiritual items and 1 high-earth level spiritual item. Among them, the jade flowing goblet that Jinren Xianzhu obtained could barely be regarded as a treasure comparable to a high earth-level spiritual item due to its uniqueness. Other than that, there was only a Dan Cauldron treasure restriction and Lu Ping's 3 invisible spiritual restrictions. The auction had already been going on for 2.5 days, and as many as 200 kinds of treasures had appeared. Among them, it was not that there were no spiritual items that Jinling looked down upon. On the contrary, Lyra Laozu could be said to have frequently bid, but the harvest was very little. In the final analysis, it was because compared to the great sects of the Eastern Sea, Jinling's foundation was too weak. He could only watch as suitable mid-earth level spiritual items were taken by other sects and cultivators. Compared to Li Xuanru, Xianzhu, and Xianyu who had obtained suitable spiritual items, the other 4 seemed much more disheartened, especially Jinren Xiantian. After the flying parasol wood, there was originally a high earth level spiritual item with a wood attribute, but the conditions of the auction were even more harsh. Lyra Laozu was also very regretful that she did not even have the chance to bid before the auction was won by the 28th pavilion. At this time, Lyra Laozu's expression was focused on the item that Dong Laozu carefully held in his hand on the auction stage. It looked like a piece of dirt that could shatter into powder at any time. This item was extremely familiar to Lu Ping, because he had once obtained it from an earth attribute high earth level spiritual item, the dark jade stone, during the Northern Seas alchemist gathering. This piece of dirt that was as soft as dirt was a piece of growing soil, a treasure that was comparable to a heaven-level spiritual item. Last time, Lu Ping had only obtained a fist-sized piece of growing soil, but it was enough to completely transform the spirit herb garden that Lu Ping had opened up in the Golden House. Many precious spirit herbs were growing very well in the Golden House, and a small number of transplanted 500-year-old spirit herbs had already begun to mature and be harvested. Even 2 gold nuts had matured ahead of time, and were used by Lu Ping to refine gold adamantine pills. This piece of growing soil was almost twice the size of the one that Lu Ping had obtained last time. However, it looked like it had been severely weathered, and was not as solid as the one that Lu Ping had obtained last time. After Dong Laozu finished introducing the growing soil, he carefully placed the piece of growing soil on the jade table, as if he was afraid that he would break it. Just as Dong Laozu had clearly stated the conditions and starting price of the growing soil, and was about to announce the start of the auction, the piece of growing soil that had been placed on the jade table in perfect condition suddenly disintegrated without any warning, and suddenly split into 4 pieces of different sizes. This unforeseen event caused Dong Laozu to forcefully swallow back the words that he was about to say. The cultivators in the auction house were clearly shocked by this unforeseen event, and many busybodies even started to shout and boo in the auction house. The value of a strange item like the growing soil, aside from its size, the most important factor was whether or not it was intact. Although these 4 pieces of growing soil of different sizes were still the same big piece of growing soil when combined together, due to the disintegration, its value could no longer be compared to the previous piece of growing soil. Dong Laozu's expression was uncertain, and after a moment his expression changed as if he had received some sort of hint. He then laughed dryly and said, "It is such a coincidence, I did not think that this kind of thing would happen to the old man. Since that is the case, then we might as well separate these pieces of growing soil and auction them separately." In room number 24, even though Lyra Laozu coveted this piece of growing soil, she did not have much hope that she would be able to obtain it. However, this sudden turn of events caused many cultivators in the auction house to feel extremely regretful, but Lyra Laozu's eyes suddenly lit up, as if she had seen a ray of hope. Of the 4 pieces of growing soil, the first to be auctioned was the smallest piece. Sure enough, the disintegrated pieces of growing soil did not attract the attention of the people suspected to be from large sections. Lyra Laozu decisively made a move, and used 8 pieces of top-quality spirit stones to obtain this piece of growing soil. Immediately after, the second piece of growing soil was auctioned. Lyra Laozu did not directly call out a price, but instead used a jade slip to indicate the bidding price, and then sent it through a teleportation array. This way, no one would notice that room number 24 was still participating in the auction. The second piece of growing soil, which was only slightly larger, was finally won by Lyra Laozu with 7 top-quality spirit stones and 500 top-quality spirit stones. The 2 smallest pieces of growing soil added together were not even a third of the entire piece of growing soil. However, after the third piece of growing soil was auctioned, Lyra Laozu decisively stopped bidding, and did not participate in the auction anymore. As expected, the price of the third and fourth pieces of growing soil soared, directly breaking through the 2,000 top-quality spirit stones. The people from the previous rooms that had successfully obtained the growing soil repeatedly raised the price to a sky-high price, but in the end, it was won by room number 28, which had always been the strongest in the auction house, at a high price. This caused Lu Ping and the others to be dumbfounded, and at the same time, they were filled with admiration towards Lyra Laozu's previous methods. Daoist Shen Sen and Daoist Shen Su even suspected that the cultivators from the Crystal Palace were in room number 28, because since the beginning of the auction, the one who had obtained the most treasures, and had repeatedly paid the highest price, was the one who had obtained the most treasures. The appearance of the growing soil seemed to be just the beginning of the perfect curtain call of this auction, and immediately afterwards, the real craziness of the auction began. For the low-grade Heaven Step Water Attribute World Spirit Treasure, Magnificent Golden Liquid, the first condition of exchange is also a low-grade Heaven Step Metal Attribute Spirit Treasure, Tai Bai Stone. If you can't exchange it, then use it to exchange for some top-quality spirit stones, and don't take out the top-quality spirit stones as an eyesore. The appearance of the Heaven Step Spiritual Treasure seemed to have suddenly ignited the passion of all the cultivators in the auction house. Previously, a high-grade Earth Step Spiritual Fire, Flame of the Sea, had appeared, and it had been auctioned for a price of 30 top-quality spirit stones. Admittedly, this was because world spirit fires were often used in the cultivation world for alchemy and refining, so its value was higher than the same grade spiritual treasures. But the price of 30 top-quality spirit stones, even Lyra Laozu had to say that this price was a bit too high. Lu Ping looked at this flame of the sea's heart, and his eyes also lit up. Because this world spirit fire was bred in the depths of a volcano, it was contaminated with a trace of a gentle aura, and it was suitable for all the best flames for alchemy. If Lu Ping wanted to advance to Alchemy Grandmaster, although the Eastern Purple Chi Flame was still enough for him to use, but the effect of a mid-grade Earth Step Spiritual Fire on alchemy was not obvious. If he wanted to be helpful to Alchemy Grandmaster, then Lu Ping had to at least find a high-grade Earth Step Spiritual Fire. However, the path of obtaining it from the auction house was basically closed to Lu Ping. Lu Ping had killed several enemies as spoils of war, and after a narrow escape he was lucky enough to obtain 4 top-quality spirit stones. For the current Lu Ping, 30 top-quality spirit stones was still a height that he could not reach. The high-grade Earth Step Spiritual Fire of the Sea's Heart was finally auctioned by the cultivator in room 35. However, the moment the low-grade Heaven Step Spiritual Treasure appeared, this price was shattered by the surging price. 42 top-quality spirit stones. In an auction of this level, unless the cultivator in the room introduced himself, Dong Laozu, who presided over the auction, would generally not disclose which room the cultivator came from. Even if everyone knew which room was bidding, it was difficult to guess which sect was in the room. Room 28 was still fierce, and for the first time, the bidding price of this auction was raised to more than 40 top-quality spirit stones. The cultivator of the Crystal Palace? Sure enough, he is rich and overbearing, but this magnificent golden jade liquid is also coveted by several juniors of the old man. Today I have no choice but to lose money, so let's add 3 top-quality spirit stones. This time the old man is really bleeding a lot, and later I will definitely get back at that old bastard. A helpless voice came from room number 11. 48 spirit stones. The cultivator in room 28 was still silent, but he was very determined to raise the price. Humph, the Crystal Palace is a big family. Do you want to buy all the treasures in this auction? The old man does not believe in this 50 top-quality spirit stones. As this exceptionally valiant voice continued to ring out from room 11, the entire auction hall cheered in unison. This was the highest price ever recorded for a spirit stone in this auction. However, as the cheers faded away, the fierce voice from room number 11 sounded again. This time it was in a dejected tone. What a loss! What a loss! 50 top-quality spirit stones. This time the old man must have been extorted by those old bastards. I feel so sorry for the old man. The old man has nothing better to do. Why did he shout at those bastards of the Crystal Palace? Haha, from the tone it sounds like friend Kong Ji of the Kong family, but you seem to be complaining to the wrong person. The voice came from room 6 and Lyra Laozu looked surprised and said, "It is actually Yuan Guang of the Crystal Palace." Which force is in room 28? Besides the Crystal Palace, who else has the ability to bid for so many treasures? Immortal Xian Su asked the question that almost everyone in the auction venue had. Lu Ping's attention was not on room 28, but he murmured, "Kong Ji, surname Kong, Could he be a Dharma adept of the Kuan Fish clan? Chapter 521. Just which force was in the 28th room? After Yuan Guang Laozu announced his identity in the 6th room, all the cultivators in the auction venue looked at the 28th room floating in the air with puzzled eyes. However, this made Dong Laozu slightly displeased. He coughed and said, "Since fellow Taoist Kong Ji has bid 50 top-quality spirit stones, is there anyone else who wants to bid?" It would have been better if Dong Laozu hadn't said this, but as soon as he said this, some of the cultivators who hadn't paid attention to the 28th room also turned their attention to the 28th room, waiting to see if this force would raise the price again. Unfortunately, the 28th room seemed to have fallen silent, not a single sound came from it. Tianqin Laozu had a thoughtful look on her face and muttered, "Could it be them?" Both Taoist Shen Su and Taoist Shen Sen asked in confusion, "Does Senior Marshal Sister know who is in the 28th room?" Lu Ping was startled. Taoist Shen Su and Taoist Shen Sen might not know, but he knew that Tianqin Laozu had once occupied a high position in the boudoir. Could it be that Tianqin Laozu thought that the 28th room was the boudoir? With this thought in mind, Lu Ping's heart was suddenly enlightened. Now that the boudoir pavilion was established in the Eastern Sea, it was naturally in urgent need of a batch of treasures to strengthen the sect's foundation and establish a more reasonable cultivation system. Hence, the boudoir pavilion's crazy buying of treasures in the auction was also a reason. However, the fact that this boudoir had such a strong financial strength also greatly surprised Lu Ping. It could be seen that before the boudoir completely emerged from the cultivation world of the Eastern Sea, the hidden forces of the boudoir must have been enormous. Thinking of the Li family on the Three-Family Island, it was unknown how many other peripheral families like the Li family in the Eastern Sea were supplying large amounts of cultivation resources to the boudoir. The golden essence jade nectar finally fell into the hands of Kong Ji Laozu in the 11th room, which made the cultivators who had been expecting the 28th room to bid a higher price somewhat disappointed. In the auction hall, there were naturally people who guessed that it was the boudoir, but there were also people who thought that it was the Heavenly Moon sect from the Middle Earth that had not made a move. However, these guesses and discussions all disappeared with the appearance of the second low-grade heaven-ranked spirit item, Yulan Adamantine. This was a type of low-grade heaven-ranked spirit treasure that was nurtured in the Yulan River, the second largest river in the Central Plains. After the Yulan River flowed into the Eastern Sea, it solidified and was distributed within a 10,000-kilometer radius around the mouth of the Yulan River. This sort of spiritual item rarely appeared in the overseas cultivation world. The area within a radius of 5,000 kilometers from the mouth of the Yulan River was the territory of the cultivation world of the Central Plains. Once Yulan gold essence was discovered, it would usually fall into the hands of the cultivators of the Central Plains. The Yulan Adamantine was a low-grade heaven-tier metal attribute origin spirit, but more importantly, it attracted the attention of the cultivators in the auction hall because the Yulan Adamantine was a low-grade heaven-tier metal attribute origin spirit. 3 Spirit Forging Pills. Lu Ping knew that the spirit forging pill was famous in the North Sea, but he didn't expect it to have such a huge reputation in the overseas cultivation world. What kind of joke is this? 3 spirit forging pills? If the Fei Ling sect was still around, this low-grade heaven-ranked spirit object would be worth the price of 3 spirit forging pills. But now that the Fei Ling sect has been annihilated, the spirit forging pill recipe has been lost for more than 4,000 years. Even if there are a few spirit forging pills that have survived, who would be willing to take them out? That's right. I think that if the auctioneer doesn't have any other conditions, this heaven-grade spirit item might not be sold. It might not be sold. After all, it is a heaven-grade spirit item. There is an 80% chance that there are other conditions that have not been announced. Great Ancestor Dong looked at the auction venue and the pavilion that was suspended in mid-air, and he could not help but smile bitterly. However, he still continued to say, "Of course there is a backup plan. The auctioneer intends to exchange for some pills that can accelerate the smelting of heaven and earth spirit items, increase the final grade of the golden core, and help cultivators break through to the Dharma stage." In fact, the spirit forging pill could satisfy all of these 3 conditions. Furthermore, the spirit forging pill was undoubtedly the best choice for each of the 3 conditions. However, if the spirit forging pill didn't appear, there were other possibilities for these 3 conditions. In the pavilion, spiritual master Shen Su's face was very serious as he stared at the spirit item on the display. After a long time, he let out a long breath and turned to Tianqin Laozu. "Junior sister Tianqin, Is there any possibility of this spirit item being auctioned in our sect? When Tianqin Laozu heard Spiritual Master Xiansu's words, she naturally knew that Spiritual Master Xiansu wanted this spirit item. Spiritual Master Xiansu was now an expert at the 9th stage of core forging. Although he still lacked the necessary accumulation to form the golden core, this heaven-grade spirit item was even more difficult to find than a high-grade earth-grade spirit item. As long as there was a chance of obtaining it, there was no reason for him to let it go. Tianqin Laozu thought for a while and took out 3 jade boxes from the air. She said, "This pure jade orchid seems to have 3 conditions, but they are all related to each other. In the end, they are all for the sake of breaking through to the Dharma phase. Under the situation where the spirit forging pill doesn't appear, each sect actually has their own secret pills, especially the big sects like the Crystal Palace. Their resources are so deep that I, Jinling, can't compare at all. Hence, I really don't have any confidence in obtaining it. I can only try my best." Spiritual Master Xiansu smiled. "I can accept this. If I get it, then I'm lucky. If I don't, then that's fate. Junior sister, you just have to try your best." Tianqin Laozu nodded and pointed to the 3 jade boxes. In the first jade box are 3 minor forging pills refined by junior nephew Lu. These pills can only be consumed by late core forging cultivators. The effect of refining heaven and earth spirit items is negligible, but in the world of cultivation, it is still an extremely rare top-grade pill. I have to say, junior nephew Lu, you are really good. Tianqin Laozu looked at Lu Ping indifferently. Lu Ping didn't mind. He chuckled and said, "Thank you for the compliment, uncle." Tianqin Laozu ignored Lu Ping and pointed to the other jade box. "The 3 pills in this jade box are our sect's secret pills that can help in breaking through to the Dharma phase. These pills actually have to be combined with a secret technique of our sect in order to maximize their effect. They are mostly targeted at those who have condensed a 6th-grade golden core and are unable to directly advance to the Dharma phase. For those who have condensed a 7th-grade golden core and above, they are not very helpful in advancing to the Dharma phase." This last pill, Tianqin Laozu pointed to the 3rd jade box and said, "is a secret pill in my boudoir called the Misty Pill. This junior martial sister was also involved in the creation of this pill, so I know the pill formula. When I left my chambers, I obtained one of these pills. This pill is very useful for cultivators when they condense their gold core. These 3 pills can be considered to be quite specific to fellow Taoist Dong's 3 conditions. Whether or not it will be successful will depend on the final opinion of the auctioneer." The auctioneers were also participating in this auction. It was just that they didn't want to reveal their identities. Therefore, during the auction, many top-quality treasures were bartered. Therefore, Patriarch Dong needed to communicate with the auctioneers frequently and listen to their opinions. Spiritual Master Xiansu nodded and said, "I'll leave it to fate. Thank you, junior sister." Tianqin Laozu was about to place the 3 jade boxes on the small teleportation array when Spiritual Master Xiansun suddenly said, "Senior sister, please wait." When Tianqin Laozu looked over in astonishment, she saw Spiritual Master Xiansun take out a jade marrow box from his storage magic tool in a very serious manner. It could be seen that the item in the box was not ordinary. Spiritual Master Xiansun opened the jade marrow box, and inside it was a huge spirit pill that was about an inch in size. He heard Spiritual Master Xiansun say, "Although Senior Sister's Misty Pill is precious, there is only one. This Snow Domain Pill is also useful for raising the rank of a golden core, so I'll send it along with Senior Sister's Misty Pill. This way the chances of getting the Jade Orchid Gold will be higher." Without waiting for Spiritual Master Xiansun to finish speaking, Spiritual Master Xiansu hurriedly said, "No." Spiritual Master Xiansu turned his head and said to Spiritual Master Xiansun, "Junior brother Xiansun, this Snow Domain Pill is something that you obtained from Laozu's cave in the Snow Domain. It is a treasure that you will use to condense your golden core in the future. How can you use it on this?" Spiritual Master Xiansun said with a carefree smile, "I know my own situation. Although I was lucky enough to reach the 9th layer of the core forging realm by consuming the Bell Cauldron Pill, my foundation has become more and more unstable. If I want to solidify my foundation, reach the peak of the 9th layer of the core forging realm, and prepare to condense my golden core, it will be impossible without at least 200 years of polishing. Besides, Senior Sister Tianqin has already grasped the pill recipe for the Misty Pill. When the time comes, I just need to ask Senior Sister to refine a few Misty Pills, and the problem of condensing my golden core will be solved." Spiritual Master Xiansu was a little moved. When he turned to look at Tianqin Laozu was looking at the snow domain pill. When he heard spiritual master Shen, he said, I have heard of the name snow domain Laozu in the past. This snow domain pill is indeed brilliant, but the misty pill cannot compare. Junior brother Shen, you have to think carefully. There is no pill recipe for the snow domain pill. If you give this one away, I'm afraid there won't be a second one. Spiritual master Shen said with a smile, since I have taken it out, there is no reason to take it back. Spiritual master Shen said with gratitude, regardless of whether it succeeds or not, I will remember junior brother's favor. Just as Tianqin Laozu placed the snow domain pill on the small teleportation array, he heard Lu Ping suddenly ask, Martial uncle, with these pills, how confident are you in exchanging for the pure jade orchid gold? Tianqin Laozu looked at Lu Ping in surprise, but he still sighed and said, at most there is only a 20% chance. What if I exchange it for this item? Lu Ping laughed, took out a jade essence box from his storage ring, and placed it on the stone table. Chapter 522. What if I use this? Lu Ping placed a jade quintessence box on the stone table. The spirit sealing rune engraved on the jade quintessence box shone brightly. It seemed to indicate that the item in the box was quite amazing. Tianqin Laozu was not polite at all. She knew that since Lu Ping took out this item, he must have some confidence in his heart. So, she directly took the jade quintessence box on the stone table and wiped it with her hand. The spirit sealing rune on the jade quintessence box temporarily lost its effect. Tianqin Laozu opened the jade quintessence box, revealing 3 purple pills with a hint of red inside. Tianqin Laozu was startled because this pill looked quite similar to the minor forging spirit pill in the other jade box. Tianqin Laozu's eyes narrowed. Holding the jade quintessence box, a golden flame suddenly appeared in her hand. The temperature in the pavilion rose sharply. Fortunately, Lu Ping and the others were high-level cultivators, so they naturally wouldn't care about this little bit of heat. Lu Ping knew that this was probably a method that Tianqin Laozu used to test the medicinal properties of the pill. Sure enough, Tianqin Laozu's eyes suddenly shone brightly. She looked at Lu Ping and said, that day you laughed on Jianghu Island, was it because you refined this pill? Jianghu Island was guarded by Celestial Phenomenon Laozu. Celestial Phenomenon Laozu was highly respected in Jinling. Therefore there were very few people on Jianghu Island who laughed unscrupulously like Lu Ping did after successfully refining the new minor forging spirit pill. Moreover, Lu Ping was in a very excited mood. In the process of laughing, his Zhen Yuan unconsciously burst out, causing more than half of Jianghu Island to echo with his laughter. Lu Ping chuckled, but he was a little embarrassed and said, yes, I was too excited that day, so I was a bit presumptuous. Tianqin Laozu coldly snorted and said, refining this kind of pill, so what if you are more presumptuous than that day? Tianqin Laozu's words caused Lu Ping to be stunned. He saw Tianqin Laozu put away the first jade quintessence box that contained the minor forging spirit pill and put the jade quintessence box that Lu Ping handed over inside. The small transmission array flashed and 3 jade quintessence boxes appeared on Dong Laozu's jade table. Inside the pavilion, because Daoist Shensu was paying attention to the Yulon gold essence, he couldn't help but ask, Martial nephew Lu, what kind of pills are they? They are even more wondrous than the minor forging spirit pills you refined before? Lu Ping smiled and was about to answer, but Daoist Laozu interrupted him. Senior Lu Ping spirit, Lu Ping said. Lu Ping Lu. Lao Lu Lu Lu, Ping I Su I Lu. Is this clear? Daoist Shen Su immediately reacted. He patted his head and said, worry worry worry? Tianqin Laozu turned to Shen Tian and the others and said, today, regardless of whether we can win the Yulon gold essence or not, Martial nephew Lu's pill cannot be leaked. This includes your family and masters. When I return, I will report this matter to the Laozu in the sect. If I find out that any information about this pill is leaked, not only will I not forgive you, but the Laozu in the sect will not let you off either. Are you clear? Lu Ping looked at Daoist Shen Tian and the others with surprise. Daoist Shen Tian and the others promised not to leak today's matter. Tianqin Laozu turned to Lu Ping and said, although Martial nephew Lu's pill is far from the real spirit forging pill, it is the most successful imitation of the spirit forging pill in the cultivation world in thousands of years. If the opportunity is right, it is best to give this pill to the sect for safekeeping. The sect will naturally reward you. Lu Ping smiled and said, you're right, Martial Uncle. In fact, Martial Uncle Fornax has already discussed this matter with me, but it's about the small forged spirit pellet recipe. I will naturally hand it over to the sect when the time is right. Tianqin Laozu nodded and didn't say anything else. At this time in the auction hall, Dong Laozu had already finished appraising the pills in the 20 or so storage bags. At the same time, his lips moved from time to time as if he was discussing something with someone else. In the end, he returned most of the storage bags, leaving only 3 storage bags on the jade table. Taoist Xian Su saw that the teleportation array on the stone table hadn't been activated. It was obvious that Junling's pills had been approved by the auctioneer. He couldn't help but let out a long sigh of relief. However, Tianqin Laozu's expression became more and more serious. He turned around and said, "I'm afraid that the 3 sects will compete in the future. If there are 3 spirit-forging pills here, then we can naturally bid for the gold of Yulan. However, the 3 sects' pills are at most 2/3 of the gold of Yulan. In the end, I'm afraid we will still have to use spirit stones. However, there aren't many high-grade and top-grade spirit stones that the sect has collected for this auction. The strength of the other 2 sects is unknown. If we meet the Crystal Palace or other large sects, I'm afraid we won't be able to handle them." Taoist Xian Su and Taoist Xian Sen had already given Tianqin Laozu a total of 400 high-grade spirit stones and 4 top-grade spirit stones to Tianqin Laozu when Tianqin Laozu was bidding for the growing soil. When Spiritual Master Xian Su heard this, he lowered his head and rummaged through his storage pouch, gathering another 50 high-grade spirit stones. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. Although Zhenling sect's cultivators were much wealthier because of the large spirit stone mine and the medium spirit stone mine that they secretly occupied, they also became more extravagant when it came to cultivation. Thus, in the end, they still weren't able to accumulate much wealth. Even the spirit stones that Spiritual Master Xian Su and Spiritual Master Xian Sen had gathered for the Soil of Breath were because the 2 of them knew about the auction in Fantasy Spirit City in advance. Taoist Xian Sen took out another top-grade spirit stone and another 20 high-grade spirit stones. It was obvious that he had poured everything into his storage bag. Tianqin Laozu sighed and also took out 6 top-grade spirit stones from his storage bag. He said, "I only have these." In the auction hall, Dong Laozu took out the pills from the jade boxes. Because this time Tianqin Laozu didn't have the same request as Lu Ping, Dong Laozu didn't keep the bidding pavilions a secret. He directly said, "The 3 sects that will be participating in the final auction of the Yulan Gold are pavilions number 6, 24 and 28. Please begin the final bidding." Pavilion number 6 was naturally the Crystal Palace. There was no need to doubt its strength. Lu Ping clearly saw that when Dong Laozu mentioned pavilion number 28, he pointed to one of the 3 jade boxes. It contained the same ethereal pills that Tianqin Laozu had taken out earlier. Tianqin Laozu clearly saw it as well. He frowned slightly. There was no doubt that pavilion number 28 was the location of the boudoir. However, the boudoir might be able to link it to Tianqin Laozu from the ethereal pill in Jinling's jade box. In fact, other than the minor forging spiritual pill and the snow domain pill that Lu Ping had improved, Jinling's other pills were the worst among the 3 sections. At this moment, Yuan Guang Laozu, who was in pavilion number 6, was the first to raise the price. He bid 500 high-grade spirit stones. The boudoir immediately responded and increased the price by 100 high-grade spirit stones. In pavilion number 24, Taoist Master Shantian first took out 250 high-grade spirit stones. After thinking for a moment, he took out a top-quality spirit stone from his storage magic tool. This was the one that Tianlin Laozu had given him. Taoist Master Shenhui also took out 150 high-grade spirit stones. The couple, together with the top-quality spirit stone, made up a total of 500 high-grade spirit stones. At this time, the Crystal Palace had raised the price to 800 high-grade spirit stones. The boudoir immediately wanted to suppress the Crystal Palace, offering 850 high-grade spirit stones. Taoist Master Xuanyu and Taoist Master Xianzhu were already out of high-grade spirit stones because of the previous bidding for the Heaven and Earth spiritual treasure. Li Xuanru, on the other hand, had saved 300 high-grade spirit stones because Lu Ping had taken out the Forging Heart pill and defeated all the other bidders. However, these 300 high-grade spirit stones were given to Li Xuanru by Li Xuanru, Zhao Xuanji and Wang Shenjing. Taoist Master Xianbei scratched his head and then put a storage bag on the stone table. He smiled embarrassedly and said, "This disciple is short of money. I only have 150 high-grade spirit stones, all of them are here." Taoist Master Xuanshu smiled and said, "Thank you, martial nephew." Taoist Master Xuansu also took out 190 high-grade spirit stones. Obviously, she also did not have a single high-grade spirit stone left. Tianqin Laozu calculated for a moment and said, I have now collected 1,900 high-grade spirit stones. Whether I succeed or not will depend on heaven's will. At this time, the price of the auction had already exceeded 1,200 spirit stones. The Crystal Palace and the owner of room number 28 seemed to be fighting with each other, neither giving way to the other. Every time they raised the price, the previous 100 spirit stones would be raised to 200 spirit stones. The people in the pavilion intentionally or unintentionally left out Lu Ping. This was because Lu Ping had taken out 500 high-grade spirit stones in one go when he bid for the invisible sword communication treasure. Everyone thought that Lu Ping did not have many spirit stones on hand. Moreover, when Lu Ping bid for the Azure Sea Jasper bead and the improved minor forging panacea, although he had made Tianqin Laozu lose face, these were all real contributions that Lu Ping had made to the sect. Even if Lu Ping did not say anything now, no one could say anything. However, Lu Ping still rubbed his chin and said with a smile, How could Martial Uncle not remember me? Actually, I still have 1,000 high-grade spirit stones on hand. At this time, the boudoir had rebid 1,500 high-grade spirit stones, once again suppressing the Crystal Palace. Tianqin Laozu originally wanted to use the 1,900 high-grade spirit stones in her hand to gamble, but Lu Ping's words made her swallow the bid. Yuan Guang Laozu of the Crystal Palace's voice sounded, 1,700 high-grade spirit stones. Tianqin Laozu did not care about the Crystal Palace's bid. She looked at Lu Ping with bright eyes and asked, How much do you have? Everyone else also had an expression as if they had seen a ghost. Spiritual Master Shensen was happy at first, but then he frowned and asked, 1,000 high-grade spirit stones in addition to the previous 500 high-grade spirit stones. Martial Nephew Lu, where did you get so many spirit stones? Did you get into trouble? Lu Ping handed a storage bag to Tianqin Laozu and said with a smile, I only robbed a group of robbers' treasure house. I didn't leave anything behind. Martial Uncle, don't worry. Actually, at this time, Lu Ping still had 200 high-grade spirit stones and 4 high-grade spirit stones. Lu Ping naturally could not bear to part with the 4 high-grade spirit stones. He had to use the 200 high-grade spirit stones to support his cultivation for a period of time, so he could not use them. 2,000 high-grade spirit stones. With Lu Ping's 1,000 high-grade spirit stones, Tianqin Laozu suddenly had confidence. She opened her mouth and raised the bid to 2,000 high-grade spirit stones. Everyone thought that the 24th room, which had been quiet for a long time, had given up its bid due to the strong bidding of the Water Crystal Palace and the 28th room. Unexpectedly, the Water Crystal Palace and the 28th room did not make any bids for the time being. Chapter 523. Lyra Laozu managed to get the pure Yulan gold for 2,700 high-quality spirit stones. Lyra Laozu threw the remaining 200 high-quality spirit stones to Lu Ping and said, This time I owe the boudoir a favor. Just now, in the 3 parties bidding, the boudoir of room 28 had been suppressing the Crystal Palace. However, after Lyra Laozu added 2,000 high-quality spirit stones, the Crystal Palace took the opportunity to suppress Zhenling. Fortunately, the boudoir seemed to have set its sights on the Crystal Palace. As long as the Crystal Palace bid a higher price, the boudoir would bid a higher price again. Lyra Laozu immediately realized something. After the boudoir bid, she stopped bidding. The Crystal Palace had no choice but to raise the price to 2,300 spirit stones, but was suppressed by the boudoir with 2,400 spirit stones. After the boudoir raised the price to 2,600 spirit stones, the Crystal Palace seemed to have reached their limit and stopped bidding. At this time, Lyra Laozu once again called out a price of 2,700 spirit stones. The boudoir didn't follow up either. It was obvious that she was specifically targeting the Crystal Palace. Many of the cultivators in the auction hall were surprised that the 24th room had obtained the Yulan gold. At this moment, quite a few cultivators had already guessed that the 28th room was the boudoir of a large sect that had recently risen in power in the Eastern Sea. The 24th room, which had always kept a low profile, was now the subject of much discussion. The cultivators who had previously guessed that the 28th room was a cultivator from the Heavenly Moon sect began to guess that the 24th room was actually a cultivator from the Heavenly Moon sect. After obtaining the pure Yulan gold, Zhenling, who had run out of spirit stones, could be said to have completed his mission of participating in this auction ahead of time. He could only sit and watch the auction until the end. However, the appearance of heaven-grade spirit items did not stop there. After the water attribute golden essence jade liquid and the metal attribute jade orchids gold essence, the earth attribute, wood attribute, fire attribute, wind attribute, and ice attribute heaven-grade low-grade spirit items appeared. Each of them was raised to an extremely high price. The intense competition at the scene was a feast for the eyes of the Zhenling sect cultivators who had already lost the right to compete. Among them, the appearance of the wood attribute low-grade heaven-rank spirit object had caused Taoist Master Shensen's eyes to be filled with greed. However, the conditions of the auction were not achievable before Zhenling sect obtained the Yulan gold essence. Thus, Taoist Master Shen Sr. The heaven-class low-grade heaven-class spirit fire once again broke the record of the auction with spirit stones. The price of 60 high-grade spirit stones caused the 5 people in the auction hall to challenge the dignity of the 6th pavilion, the Crystal Palace. This time, the Crystal Palace finally revealed its ferocious face as the #1 sect in the overseas region. After the pure Yulan gold, there were 5 heaven-class low-grade heaven-class spirit items, and the Crystal Palace alone obtained 3 of them. Although the boudoir repeatedly raised the price, it was suppressed by the Crystal Palace with a thunderous momentum. The starting price was 500 high-grade spirit stones, which made the cultivators in the auction hall exclaim in satisfaction. It also made people once again see the domineering power of this giant sect in the cultivation world. The remaining 2 spirit items were won by the Heavenly Moon sect, which had been keeping a low profile. As for the other spirit item, no one knew which sect had won it. Although the boudoir had been very active in the auction of the 7 heaven-class low-grade heaven-class spirit items and had repeatedly caused trouble for the Crystal Palace, they had not won a single spirit item. Just when everyone thought that the auction was about to come to an end, 2 old men with white hair and beards suddenly appeared on the auction stage. Their inner yuan was surging, and behind them, there seemed to be faint roars of tigers and phoenixes, which caused the entire auction hall to fall silent. Dong Laozu bowed slightly to the 2 of them as if he was very respectful to them. Tianqin Laozu's eyes shone brightly and she said in a low voice, "Mid-Dharma adepts." The 2 mid-Dharma adepts took 2 steps forward and formed a triangle with Dong Laozu, surrounding the jade table in front of Dong Laozu. While everyone was still a little confused, the small teleportation portal on the jade table suddenly flashed with light. Just when most of the adepts had not clearly seen what was being teleported in through the light, Dong Laozu had already grabbed a jade essence bottle in his hand. This jade essence bottle had been refined by an expert into a transparent color, and there was only a drop of water the size of a third of a fist spinning nimbly inside. Just when many of the adepts in the auction hall were looking at the drop of unknown liquid in the jade essence bottle in confusion, a green light suddenly flashed in the eyes of Lu Ping, who was sitting in the pavilion. A strange color flashed across Lu Ping's face. The strange look on Lu Ping's face did not escape Tianqin Laozu's attention. Tianqin Laozu smiled slightly and asked, "Disciple Lu, do you recognize this item?" Lu Ping did not expect Tianqin Laozu to ask such a question in such a friendly manner, and everyone else in the pavilion also had a strange look on their faces. Lu Ping was stunned for a moment, then he shook his head and answered, "I have not seen this item before, but I have seen a similar description in the jade scroll that Elder Fornax had hidden. It seems that this item is the famous Thousand Dew of Wonder, but it looks like there is too little of it." Tianqin Laozu nodded slightly and said, "Disciple Lu's view coincides with mine. It seems that there is an 80% chance that it is this item. However, the Thousand Dew of Wonder is different from other world treasures. It can only be used to refine a gold core and it must reach a certain amount. However, every drop of this item is extremely precious. Although it is not enough to refine a gold core, just drinking it can increase one's lifespan by 10 years. If it is in the hands of a great alchemist, it can easily refine a 20 or even 30-year longevity pill." Not only had Lu Ping seen the Thousand Dew of Wonder, but he also had a portion and a half in his hands. He was also well aware of the information that Tianqin Laozu had told him. However, the Thousand Dew of Wonder was too important. Lu Ping could feel that the entire cultivation world, at least the North Sea and the East Sea, seemed to be secretly eyeing the Thousand Dew of Wonder as well as the spirit-forging pill refined from it. This kind of secret treasure was naturally the safest to only be known by himself. After listening to Tianqin Laozu, Lu Ping did not have time to think about why Tianqin Laozu's attitude towards him had suddenly changed. He quickly said, "Disciple understands." Tianqin Laozu nodded with satisfaction. seemingly quite pleased with Lu Ping's attitude. She no longer spoke and instead listened to Dong Laozu's introduction in the auction venue. The appearance of the Thousand Dew of Wonder naturally caused the auction to reach its climax near the end. Although there was only one drop, it still found everyone in the auction venue fighting for it. Of the 40 pavilions except for the 24th pavilion where Jinling was located, almost all of them participated in the competition for the Thousand Dew of Wonder. In the end, the Crystal Palace raised the bidding price to 40 top-grade spirit stones in one fell swoop, shaking off the majority of the participating sects and cultivators in one fell swoop. The Boudoir Pavilion, the Yuan clan, and the Green Sea Snake Chu clan began competing. In the blink of an eye, the bidding price broke through the barrier of 50 top-grade spirit stones, greatly surprising Jinling and the others. It must be known that the magnificent golden jade liquid, a low-grade heaven-step spiritual treasure, was only sold for 50 top-grade spirit stones before it was taken by Kongji Laozu. Although the Thousand Dew of Wonder was a mid-grade heaven-step spiritual treasure and had many wonderful uses, it was still inconceivable for a single drop to be sold at such a high price. The Yuan clan and the Green Sea Snake clan withdrew their bids one after another, leaving only the Boudoir Pavilion and the 28th Pavilion still competing with the Crystal Palace. Lyra Laozu looked pensive. Suddenly she turned to Daoist Shen and asked, "Junior Marshal Brother, you said that when the Crystal Palace's Yuan Guang was in the North Sea persuading the sects to unite against the demon race, he told Xianling sect about the various precious spiritual herbs needed to refine the spirit-forging pill?" Enlightened Master Shen knew what Ancestor Sky Qin was thinking about, so he quickly said, "That's right. Not only Xianling sect, but even my sect, Shui Yen Pavilion and Ocean Flame sect have also obtained the names of these precious spiritual herbs." Lyra Laozu's eyes lit up and said, "But in the end, Crystal Palace only chose Xianling sect as their partner?" Daoist Shen hesitated for a moment and said, "Senior Marshal Sister, you mean that Xianling sect has a part of the secret of refining the spirit-forging pill, which made the Crystal Palace choose Xianling sect in the end? But this conclusion is a little too narrow. How could the Crystal Palace choose their representative in the North Sea cultivation world just because of a pill recipe?" Lyra Laozu smiled but didn't continue the conversation. At this moment, Yuan Guang Laozu's furious voice suddenly came from the auction house. "Xiao Yuhuan, don't think that I don't know that the person inside is you. I, Yuan Guang, will now bid 60 top-grade spiritual stones. If your boudoir really wants this drop of wonder jade nectar, as long as you can offer one low-grade spiritual stone higher than 60 top-grade spiritual stones, the old man doesn't have to give up this item." Hearing Yuan Guang Laozu say Xiao Yuhuan's name, Lyra Laozu's expression suddenly changed as if she was saying, "No wonder, so it's her." When Lu Ping looked over, he saw that when the Crystal Palace was bidding for this drop of wonder jade nectar, the boudoir had been playing the role of raising the price. It was as if they knew that the Crystal Palace would definitely win this drop of wonder jade nectar, and they kept raising the price to provoke the Crystal Palace. Yuan Guang Laozu finally couldn't bear it anymore. Many cultivators in the auction venue then confirmed that the boudoir in room 28 was actually the boudoir of a newly rising sect in the North Sea. After a long time, a female voice sounded from room 28. She giggled and said, "Fellow Yuan Guang is too impatient. The Wonder Jade Nectar's rarity is comparable to a heaven-rank upper-grade spiritual object, and its magical value is really no less than a heaven-rank upper-grade spiritual object. My boudoir naturally participated in the auction with the intention of buying this item." Finally, Yuan Guang Laozu couldn't bear it any longer. Many cultivators in the auction venue confirmed that the boudoir in room 28 was actually the boudoir of a newly rising sect in the North Sea. After a long time, a woman's voice sounded out from room 28. She giggled and said, "Fellow Taoist Yuan Guang is too impatient. The Wonder Jade Nectar's rarity is comparable to a high-grade heaven-step spiritual object, and its value is also no less than a high-grade heaven-step spiritual object. My boudoir naturally has the intention of buying this item." Ancestor Origin Light finally took the drop of myriad Wonder Jade Nectar in his hand. Just as Ancestor Dong was about to announce the end of the auction, Xiao Yuhuan suddenly said, "However, there is one thing that this little sister must remind fellow Taoist Origin Light and everyone present. My boudoir has already decided to establish a sect on Carefree Island 1 year from now. At the same time, my boudoir will also change its name to Carefree Faction. I ask that everyone spread this news throughout the entire cultivation world during this auction. 1 year from now, my Carefree Faction will be waiting for you at the Carefree Saber." The Grand Fantasy City Grand Auction continued for 3 days before finally coming to an end. The many cultivators in the auction venue also began to leave. The oil lamps hanging outside the 40 floating pavilions in the sky began to extinguish one after another. In the 24th pavilion, Lyra Laozu hesitated for a moment. Then she turned to the crowd and said, "First, you can all exchange the spirit stones that the sect has yet to use in Fantasy City for spirit grasses. Afterwards, you can return to Awakening Hibernation Island. After the auction, Laozu has important matters to discuss with the various sects, so there is no need for you to wait for me." With that, Lyra Laozu's hands pulled outwards, and a portal was pulled open in the void. Lyra Laozu stepped inside and disappeared. Sage Xiansu was in a very good mood after obtaining the Jade Orchid Gold. Although he owed a great deal of debt, the sect would still repay the majority of it for him. Thus he smiled and said, "Let's go. If we delay any longer, we will attract the attention of others. We must quickly spread out the spirit stones in our hands so that we can purchase spirit grasses that are over 1,000 years old in Fantasy City and bring them back to the sect." The teleportation formation in the pavilion had already lit up. When everyone reappeared, they were already in the Fantasy Spirit Palace with many other cultivators. Lu Ping and the others exchanged glances, then mixed into the crowd and walked out of the Fantasy Spirit Palace, heading towards Fantasy City. After leaving the Fantasy Spirit Palace, Lu Ping took out a sound transmission magic sword and said something to it. Then, the sound transmission magic sword turned into a stream of light and disappeared into Fantasy City. Lu Ping wandered around Fantasy City for a while. Then, a stream of light streaked across the sky from the east of Fantasy City, then hovered above Lu Ping's head. Lu Ping took the sound transmission magic sword and scanned it with his divine sense. Then he strode towards the east of Fantasy City. At the entrance of a spirit herb shop, Qi Lianying and Yin Xianchu watched as Lu Ping walked over. He tossed an interspatial pouch to Lu Ping and complained, "Why is this auction going to take so long? If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have accepted your offer. I also wouldn't have had to deal with something on Soundwave Island." Lu Ping took the storage bag and scanned it with his divine sense. Then he stored all the 1,000-year-old spirit herbs into his storage magic tool. Hearing Qi Lianying's words, he couldn't help but frown. "What's wrong? Did something happen on Soundwave Island? Do you need me to return as soon as possible?" Qi Lianying shook his head. From the news from the Red Eagle, it seems that someone visited Soundwave Island. The other party doesn't have any malicious intent, but the Red Eagle can't make the decision. So, they hope that I can return as soon as possible. Lu Ping nodded and relaxed. He turned to look at Yin Xianchu. Yin Xianchu said, "I also have to return to Soundwave Island to train in seclusion. After inheriting the Ice Dragon Pearl, my training has improved greatly. I'm afraid I'm already on the verge of breaking through to the 5th level of the core forging realm." Lu Ping's expression lit up. "That's good. With the Ice Dragon Pearl in hand, you'll probably beat that Shen Shen kid this time." At the mention of Ji Xianchu, Yin Xuanchu's usually cold expression seemed to melt a lot. However, it was only for a moment before it froze again. He said in a low voice, "In these 3 days of the auction, many people from Fantasy City have arrived. These people are all in a hurry, hiding their heads and covering their tails. We don't know what they're up to. Some local cultivators from Fantasy City went to investigate, but unexpectedly angered one of them. A core forging cultivator was killed with a wave of his hand. The aura he released was that of a Dharma adept." Hearing this news, Lu Ping's curiosity was piqued. He asked, "Do you know what these people's motives are? Where did they go?" Yin Xianchu shook his head. "These people's training is at least at the late core forging realm, and there are even quite a few Dharma adepts like Laozu. If I hadn't refined the Ice Dragon Pearl and obtained a few secret techniques that allowed me to secretly investigate some things, I'm afraid I wouldn't have been able to find out." The cultivators of the various sects in Fantasy Spirit City had secretly sent people to investigate these mysterious cultivators who had entered Fantasy Spirit City one after another, but the people who investigated kept disappearing. In the end, they could only determine that these cultivators seemed to have left Fantasy Spirit City in the east and flew straight to the sea region east of Fantasy Spirit Island. East? What is the east of the fallen mystery land? Isn't that the territory of the demons? Yin Xianchu shook his head and said, "On the east side of the island where the 2 large spirit veins are located, there seems to be an extremely perilous sea. The reputation of the parish secret domain is mostly due to this perilous place." "What do you mean?" "When the 3 of us entered the 7-star cave heaven, I heard that you went to the Golden Valley. There was no need for Lu Ping to hide this matter. He said directly, that's right. It's 100 times more dangerous than the Golden Valley. Yin Xianchu looked at Lu Ping's surprised face, but he still looked calm. He continued, that sea and the islands in it are called the Fallen Archipelago. According to the older cultivators in Fantasy City, the myriad poisoned sky above the Fallen Archipelago will weaken every hundreds or thousands of years. There is no pattern to this weakening. This time, it happened to coincide with the auction of Fantasy City. I'm afraid those suspicious people are heading for this dangerous place. Lu Ping thought about what had happened in the Golden Valley and couldn't help but ask, is there any other saying about the Fallen Archipelago? Yin Xianchu nodded and said, that's right. Although the Great Fallen Archipelago is a place of great danger, it's also a place where treasures gather. The exotic flowers and plants there have been covered by the myriad poison vault for a long time, so they're naturally very precious. However, even though the myriad poison vault has weakened, the threshold to enter the Great Fallen Archipelago is still extremely high. Dharma ancestors can naturally enter, but for core forging stage cultivators, only those late core forging stage cultivators who have special techniques and are not afraid of the corrosion of the poison can enter. Lu Ping suddenly remembered that Lyra Laozu had left first after the auction. The weakening of the myriad poison sky and the opening of the Fallen Archipelago were big events that all the sects who participated in the auction of Fantasy City knew about. Lyra Laozu might have left because of this. Although Fa Xiang Laozu could enter the Fallen Archipelago, it was still very beneficial for Dharma phase alchemists and cultivators who were proficient in poisonous cultivation methods and secret skills. Celestial Phenomenon Laozu's strength was naturally above Lyra Laozu's, but in the Fallen Archipelago, Celestial Phenomenon Laozu's strength might not be as good as Lyra Laozu's, who was an alchemist grandmaster. This might be another reason why Celestial Phenomenon Laozu insisted that Lyra Laozu replace him to participate in the auction of Fantasy City. Chapter 524. After sending off Qi Lianying and Yin Xianchu, Lu Ping thought for a while, then took out another sound-transmitting sword and said something into it. After that, he released the flying sword and left the east side of the Phantom City, flying in the general direction of the Fallen Islands. Tens of thousands of miles east of Phantom Spirit City, Lu Ping stared at the endless gray sky in front of him. His eyes flashed with inexplicable shock. Was it the power of the heavens and earth that formed such a magnificent and mystical land, or was it the work of an almighty being? Lu Ping could not help but think of a legend that Yin Xianchu told him before he left the Phantom City, which was spread among the high-level cultivators of the East Sea cultivation world. According to the legend, when Jiao Daoren, one of the seventh patriarch of creation, and Taoist Gui joined hands to open up the overseas cultivation world, Taoist Gui was lazy and liked to sleep. After opening up the South Sea cultivation world with Jiao Daoren, he drifted on the sea and fell into a deep sleep. Jiao Daoren had no choice but to open up the East Sea cultivation world and the North Sea cultivation world by himself. However, because he was too tired, the North Sea cultivation world he opened was the narrowest, which was also an important reason for the barrenness of the North Sea. Jiao Daoren used up most of his potential in opening up the two cultivation worlds by himself, and he was even seriously injured. Therefore Jiao Daoren found Taoist Gui, who was drifting on the sea and sleeping soundly, and asked him for a few healing pills. Unexpectedly, Taoist Gui, who was in a deep sleep, mixed a poisonous pill with the pills he gave to Jiao Daoren. Jiao Daoren did not know what was going on. After taking the pill in seclusion in the fallen secret land, his injuries worsened. In the end, he spat a mouthful of bloody phlegm near the current Fallen Islands, which covered the sea and the islands, forming the current Fallen Islands. Many years later, Jiao Daoren returned to the Fallen Mystery Land with his injuries under control. He was going to deal with the poisonous blood sputum he had spat out. However, not only did Jiao Daoren's bloody phlegm contain the highly toxic essence of Taoist Gui's poisonous pill, but Jiao Daoren himself was also a master of poisons. His saliva was highly toxic to begin with. With the combination of these two factors, the entire Great Poisonous Archipelago and the surrounding sea area turned into a poisonous world. Just as Jiao Daoren was about to deal with it, he realized that the bloody phlegm he had spat out that year contained the essence of poison, but it also contained the enormous vitality of Jiao Daoren. Over the past hundreds and thousands of years, even though the area of the sea that had been contaminated and eroded by the highly toxic pollution had continued to expand, because of the special region it had formed, it had also nurtured many rare cultivation resources. In the end, Jiao Daoren did not eradicate this poisonous area. Instead, he set up this magnificent heavenly poison wall to completely seal this area in order to prevent the poison from leaking out. Due to the influence of the toxic fog, the myriad poison firmament wall was usually pitch black. Only when the toxic fog in the myriad poison great archipelago weakened and the toxic fog in the sky became thinner, would the myriad poison firmament wall turn gray. Although Lu Ping did not believe that the appearance of the great poisonous archipelago was due to Jiao Daoren's bloody phlegm, the appearance of the heavenly poison wall made Lu Ping somewhat believe that it was the work of a powerful being. However, Lu Ping really could not believe that Taoist Gui, one of the seventh patriarch of heaven creation, would give Jiao Daoren the wrong pill just because he was sleepy. Perhaps this was a conspiracy specifically aimed at Jiao Daoren. When this idea appeared in Lu Ping's mind, even Lu Ping himself was shocked, but he immediately denied it. After all, according to the legend, this heavenly poison wall was set up by himself after his injuries were contained. A golden shield suddenly lit up around Lu Ping's body, but he did not step into the heavenly poison wall. Instead, he clenched and opened his hands, and a golden bubble appeared in his hands. Lu Ping blew on it with his mouth, and the golden bubble floated up from Lu Ping's palms and flew into the heavenly poison wall. Lu Ping stared at the golden bubble intently. Just as it flew into the heavenly poison wall, the small bubble suddenly trembled violently, and a faint layer of gray stained the golden bubble. A moment later, the bubble burst with a pop. Seeing this, Lu Ping lowered his head and pondered for a moment, then stepped into the heavenly poison wall. The golden gang qi around him became brighter and brighter, tightly wrapping Lu Ping's body in it. Lu Ping felt like he was a snowman suddenly standing under the intense sunlight. Just as Lu Ping stepped into the heavenly poison wall, Lu Ping's Zhenyuan suddenly leaked, and the Zhenyuan around him was almost corroded by the poisonous fog around him. Fortunately, Lu Ping's Zhenyuan was strong and he reacted quickly. The golden Dan in his body suddenly shook, and the Zhenyuan around him was retracted. The dim golden myriad meteoric poison star gang became brighter than before. The poisonous fog that was corroding his gang qi was like a swallow flying into the forest, and was refined by the myriad meteoric poison star gang, making the myriad meteoric poison star gang even more tyrannical. However, Lu Ping's Jinyuan consumption was much higher than when he was supporting the myriad meteoric poison star gang before. Lu Ping calmed himself down and used his divine sense to explore the surroundings, but he suddenly found that his divine sense was greatly restricted. Originally, Lu Ping's divine sense was no less than a late-stage core forging cultivator, but now he could barely explore the surrounding situation within a mile. Moreover, Lu Ping could faintly perceive that there seemed to be a hidden poison in the poisonous fog. Not only could it limit the spread of the divine sense of the cultivator, but it was also slowly corroding the cultivator's divine sense. The density of the poisonous fog in the fallen archipelago had dropped to its lowest point. Normally, no cultivator would dare to enter it. No wonder this place was known as a forbidden area by the high-level cultivators of the East Sea. After initially adapting to the environment here, due to the restriction of the poisonous fog on the divine sense and the slow corrosive effect, Lu Ping could only rely on his vision to slowly fly through the poisonous fog. Fortunately, after Lu Ping cultivated the 3 pure true pupils, he had refined 4 kinds of heaven and earth strange treasures, which allowed Lu Ping to see further and clearer than other cultivators in the poisonous fog. At this moment, Lu Ping seemed to suddenly discover something. His flying figure paused in the poisonous fog and then stopped moving. In the misty poisonous fog, Lu Ping's figure was faintly discernible. In a trance, there seemed to be 2 faint cyan lights streaking across from time to time. Lu Ping's eyes suddenly looked down to the left, and his right hand made a slash. A golden sword light flashed, and a hoarse cry was cut off as soon as it sounded. A black, filthy blood splashed up, but it was blocked by the meteoric poison gang, and a hissing black smoke rose. It seemed that the black filthy blood also contained a terrible corrosive poison. After that, the plop sound of a heavy object falling into the water came from below Lu Ping's figure. There were only 2 sounds, and it seemed that 2 pieces of something that had been cut fell into the sea one after another. The golden scale sword circled in front of Lu Ping, and then floated above Lu Ping's head. Lu Ping's eyes flickered with cyan light, and he was secretly horrified. What a powerful poisonous beast. Just the poison contained in this filthy blood is far more poisonous than the surrounding poisonous fog. It almost corroded the meteoric poison gang. Lu Ping became more cautious and went several miles into the fallen archipelago. The golden scale sword had already killed 6 or 7 poisonous beasts that were hiding in the dark, waiting for an opportunity to attack Lu Ping. At this moment, Lu Ping's eyes finally saw a small island hidden in the poisonous fog. Lu Ping looked happy. Although this period of flying would not have too much impact on Lu Ping's rich real essence, in this heavenly poisonous poison wall, even the spiritual qi had been polluted by the poison. It was impossible to absorb the spiritual qi to recover. Without replenishment, Lu Ping always felt very uncomfortable. However, just when Lu Ping's feet landed on the small island, a layer of black waves appeared in the dark green grass under his feet. A swarm of black poisonous ants suddenly crawled out of the grass and rushed toward Lu Ping. They attached themselves to Lu Ping's protective gang qi and began to gnaw. Lu Ping's expression changed. The fallen vital energy gang, which had consumed far more real essence than usual, seemed to be unable to persist for a long time under the gnawing of the black poisonous ants. Suddenly, a purple flame lit up on Lu Ping's fingertip. Under Lu Ping's control, the flame suddenly expanded and turned into a wave of fire. With Lu Ping as the center, it swept out in all directions. The black poisonous ants, together with the dark green grass on the ground, were burned clean by the east-rising purple qi flame, revealing the black scorched soil under the grass. Flames were originally one of the means to restrain poison, not to mention the east-rising purple qi flame of the middle-grade east-rising purple qi flame. In the process of the raging fire wave, it seemed that the gray poisonous fog around Lu Ping was burned a lot thinner. Even after Lu Ping put away the flame, he could clearly see the gray poisonous fog around Lu Ping filling up the area that had been burned by the flame. Lu Ping walked toward the interior of the small island. At the same time, he held an upper-grade spirit stone in his hand and operated the cultivation method. The spiritual energy contained in the spirit stone was continuously replenished and refined into real essence. In this area, because it was impossible to directly absorb spiritual energy and refine it into real essence, he could only replenish it through spirit stones. Fortunately, Lu Ping still had more than 400 upper-grade spirit stones. Even if he could only use them to replenish real essence and not cultivate, it was enough for him to support for a long time. After walking a few steps on the small island, Lu Ping's eyes lit up. An ordinary-looking weed-like plant fell into Lu Ping's eyes. 9-leaf grass. This was a rare 3,000-year-old spirit herb, and looking at the age of this spirit herb, it had clearly matured for a long time. Lu Ping bent down to pick it, but his body suddenly stopped. He slowly reached out to grab the 9-leaf grass, but his eyes were not focused on the spirit grass. Just as Lu Ping's hands were about to touch the 9-leaf grass, a piece of black soil behind the 9-leaf grass suddenly turned up, and a mouse-like poisonous beast that looked much thinner than Debeo suddenly sprang out of the soil. It opened its mouth toward Lu Ping's outstretched palm, and a pair of sharp front teeth shone strangely in the gray poisonous fog. Seeing that the poisonous rat was about to bite Lu Ping's palm, he did not see a blue long sword appear in Lu Ping's originally empty palm. The poisonous rat opened its mouth and rushed over, but it was pierced by the netherwater sword. The blue light in Lu Ping's eyes flickered again, and at the same time, regardless of the damage that the poisonous fog might cause to his divine sense, he checked the surroundings again. After finding nothing wrong, he was relieved to pick the 9-leaf grass. The area of this small island was very small, not much bigger than an island reef, and it was located on the periphery of the fallen archipelago, so close to the poison firmament wall. It only took Lu Ping an hour to check this small island. However, on this small island, Lu Ping had harvested 5 or 6 3,000-year-old spirit grasses and more than 10,000-year-old spirit grasses. Lu Ping looked into the depths of the fallen archipelago. Just the periphery had such a harvest, then what kind of harvest would there be if he continued to go deeper? After this idea emerged in Lu Ping's mind, he could no longer resist the urge in his heart. He used the high-grade spirit stone to restore the qi in his body, and once again flew towards another small island in the distance. However, just as Lu Ping flew up, he quickly landed on the island. At the same time, a set of stone armor appeared in his hand. After putting it on, Lu Ping hid in a hidden place on the island. Suddenly, 2 unclear escape lights flashed in the gray poisonous fog. 2 late core forging stage cultivators landed on the island. One of the cultivators asked, "Brother Zhang, did you see it clearly?" The other cultivator nodded firmly, "Brother Lu, there is absolutely no mistake. I did see a flash of spiritual light on this island just now. Don't you believe in the magical power of my eyes? That is definitely a kind of treasure's spiritual light." When Brother Lu heard the words, he cautiously reminded, "Brother Jiang, what if it is a cultivator like you and me?" Brother Jiang grinned. Now that the poisonous fog in the myriad poison sky wall has just been weakened, the cultivators who entered, as long as they have a little ability, are desperately running into the depths of the fallen archipelago. Fortunately, they can find more cultivation resources before the myriad poison sky wall recovers. Except for you and me who are not prepared to resist the poison, only those with low cultivation can wander around the periphery. In that case, what is there to be afraid of? When Brother Lu heard this, his courage couldn't help but rise, but he still smiled and said, "Maybe our luck is really good, we can find a treasure in the periphery." While talking, the two had already landed on the Laughing Road. When the two walked around the island, they saw the land that was previously burned by Lu Ping with the eastern purple chi flame, and there were many traces of spirit herbs being harvested on the island. Brother Zhang's face was dignified. He threw out a handful of flying needles in his hand, densely surrounding his body, looking like a hedgehog. When Brother Lu saw Brother Zhang like this, he whispered, "Has someone been here?" Brother Zhang nodded and said, "Just now there is 80% chance that someone used the heaven and earth spirit fire to burn the poisonous beast, revealing their tracks. We need to be careful. Once we fight with the other party, we need to end the battle quickly. The poison repellent pills we have on us can't last for a long time." Brother Lu opened his mouth and two green lights flew out. One flew around his neck, the other around his chest. The two green lights looked like they were going to attack at any time, but it was more like they were protecting themselves. Lu Ping hid in a corner and saw clearly that these two were both 7th layer core forging cultivators. Apart from the fact that they really didn't have good methods to resist the poison, the most important reason for them to move around the periphery of the fallen archipelago was their low cultivation base. At this moment, one of Brother Zhang's eyes suddenly emitted a red light. Obviously, he was also using a kind of vision magic to look around, but at the same time, Lu Ping was also using the 3 pure true pupils to look for the location of the two. Brother Zhang casually looked around, but happened to see 2 flashing green lights in a secret place. The two looked at each other and were shocked. The golden scale sword in Lu Ping's hand had already cut through the gray poisonous fog and attacked first. "Be careful." When Brother Zhang saw that the golden light wasn't rushing towards him, but Brother Lu beside him, he immediately opened his mouth to warn. At the same time, the countless flying needles around him suddenly disappeared in the gray fog. When they reappeared, they were already around Lu Ping under the cover of the gray poisonous fog. A broken small flag appeared in Lu Ping's hand. He waved it and a stream of light poured down from the top of Lu Ping's head. In the stream of light, a blue jade lotus floated along with the stream of light and bloomed around Lu Ping, blocking all the dense flying needles. Brother Zhang's face changed and he heard a loud noise around him. When he turned his head to look, he found that Brother Lu was actually hit by the golden sword light and flew dozens of feet away. "Who are you? We are just passing by. Let's not interfere with each other's business. Let's stop here, shall we?" Brother Zhang thought quickly. Obviously, the other party had a treasure to hide his cultivation, so Brother Zhang couldn't detect the depth of Lu Ping's cultivation. However, judging from the fact that the other party was able to repel his partner, whose cultivation was similar to his, with only a sword strike, the other party's strength was probably not weaker than his. As Brother Zhang spoke, he had already retreated to Brother Lu's side. The two of them joined hands and retreated from the island. Obviously, Lu Ping's sword strike had made the other party afraid, and he didn't want to tangle with Lu Ping any longer. Originally, Lu Ping didn't want to get involved. Although the two of them were at the 7th layer of core forging, their real strength was obviously too low. If Lu Ping fought against one of them, he would naturally have some confidence in winning. However, if the two of them joined forces, Lu Ping wouldn't be a match for them. When the two of them saw that Lu Ping didn't chase after them, Brother Zhang became even more certain that the other party was also afraid of them. In the fallen archipelago, which was covered by the myriad poison firmament wall, cultivators not only had to rely on their own cultivation, but also the boundless poisonous fog around them and the dangers that lurked in the poisonous fog. However, at this moment, an inexplicable color flashed in Lu Ping's eyes, as if he had made up his mind about something. Just when Brother Zhang and Brother Lu were about to hide in the boundless gray fog, Lu Ping's golden scale sword suddenly shone with a golden light. The sword energy that filled the sky pierced through the gray fog, and under the shocked gazes of Brother Zhang and Brother Lu, the two of them were sucked back into the sword light. Chapter 525. Brother Lu and Brother Zhang were shocked and angry at the same time. They didn't expect that Lu Ping would dare to take the initiative to attack the two of them. Arrogant. Brother Zhang shouted fiercely, and the flying needles that were circling around him disappeared once again, but he didn't care about the sword light that was coming at him. On the other side, Brother Lu pushed out the 2 rays of light that were hovering in front of him. The 2 rays of light were like 2 wandering spiders. In an instant they weaved a huge light net around the 2 of them, protecting them in the net. Clang clang clang. The sound of metal clashing could be heard. The golden scale sword light pierced the net of light, but was bounced off one by one. However, the originally shining net of light also became dim, as if it would collapse at any time. Brother Lu controlled the 2 lights to dance around, trying to repair the light damaged by the golden scale sword lights. His pale face was covered with a layer of sweat. On the other side, when the flying needles around Brother Zhang suddenly disappeared, Lu Ping also disappeared in the gray poisonous mist. Brother Zhang's eyes were constantly emitting a scarlet color as he looked at the poisonous creatures around him. In this myriad poison sky wall, the cultivator's spiritual sense was greatly restricted. Moreover, Lu Ping was wearing a set of magical stone armor, which made it impossible for people's spiritual sense to capture him. Therefore, Brother Zhang had to use his eye technique, hoping to capture Lu Ping's traces in the poisonous mist. However, this time Brother Zhang was disappointed. No matter how he used his eye technique, he couldn't detect Lu Ping's location in the poisonous mist. After a moment, Brother Zhang suddenly thought of something and whispered, "Not good, he is deliberately delaying us. I'm afraid this person has already noticed that we can't stay here for a long time with our cultivation. Once the effect of the medicinal pill is over with our cultivation, we won't be able to last long in this myriad poison sky wall. I'm afraid we will be at the mercy of others." Brother Lu looked flustered and said, "Then what should we do? How about we retreat first?" Brother Zhang looked at Brother Lu like he was an idiot. It was obvious that Brother Lu didn't want the 2 of them to retreat, but he still said helplessly, "Fight as we retreat. We must not let this person tangle with us." After the 2 of them finished speaking, they quickly retreated toward the myriad poison firmament wall. However, before the 2 of them could turn around, Lu Ping had already appeared behind them out of nowhere. A golden sword light suddenly shot out from behind the 2 of them. Brother Zhang's expression changed. He turned around and took out a big umbrella from his storage celestial device. He held the umbrella's rib with his right hand and pushed it outwards. The big umbrella immediately blocked the oncoming sword light. Then, the 2 of them joined forces and rushed toward the direction of the sword light. Looking at the big umbrella, Lu Ping was quite surprised. Obviously, the defense strength of the big umbrella was beyond Lu Ping's expectation. However, Lu Ping didn't feel that it was difficult at this time, because what Lu Ping needed to do was to delay the 2 of them. There was no need to rush and attack the big umbrella. Lu Ping's expression changed. He suddenly remembered that he still had an item with him. In a strange place like the fallen Great Archipelago, it might have some unexpected effect. While Lu Ping tried to delay the 2 of them with the golden scale sword, he touched the golden house on his chest. A jade bracelet appeared in Lu Ping's hand. However, on the crystal clear jade bracelet, there were a few black sparks jumping and flashing from time to time. This jade bracelet was the fire bracelet of the ice and fire bracelets that Lu Ping gave to Lu Qiner. Unfortunately, Lu Ping didn't have the cultivation method to use this set of magic weapons, and he didn't have the special treasure restriction to upgrade this set of magic weapons. Therefore, he could only use a natural treasure to help control this pair of jade bracelets. This set of magic weapons had always been condensed with only one treasure restriction and couldn't be upgraded further. Now that Lu Qiner's cultivation had reached the peak of the 2nd stage of the core forging realm, she already had the wind and fire wheels refined by Qin Lian as a handy magic weapon. Therefore, the ice and fire jade bracelet was no longer in her eyes. But now, Lu Ping suddenly remembered the black prison poisonous fire that was condensed in one of the jade bracelets. The black prison poisonous fire was a kind of fire seed that was relatively powerful among the natural treasures. Under normal circumstances, this kind of poisonous fire couldn't cause any harm to a late core forging realm cultivator, but in a special place like the fallen Great Archipelago, it was hard to say. As soon as the jade bracelet condensed with the black prison poisonous fire seed was exposed, a black spark suddenly jumped up from the fire ring. However, after this spark jumped up, it didn't return to the jade bracelet. The surrounding black poisonous fog was like a tautai that smelled delicious food, gathering towards the black spark. The spark, which was originally attracted by the fire seed and was about to return to the jade bracelet, suddenly stopped jumping up in the air. Just as the poisonous fog gathered, the bean-sized spark suddenly jumped up violently and the fire became bigger and bigger. At this time the jade bracelet floating below the spark also trembled. Lu Ping patted the jade bracelet with his left hand, and a black fire seed suddenly jumped out of the jade bracelet. It was the black prison poisonous fire that was condensed in the jade bracelet. After the black prison poisonous fire seed came out of the jade bracelet, the previous black spark instantly returned to the fire seed. The flame of the black prison poisonous fire suddenly jumped up, and the poisonous fog in the surrounding hundreds of feet suddenly seemed to be summoned, gathering towards the fire seed. The fire seed, which was the size of a fist, suddenly rose again, and under the control of Lu Ping's real essence, it soared into a black fireball the size of 10 feet. The two people who were struggling to break out of the encirclement with Lu Ping's golden scale sword, saw the poisonous fog around them gathering towards Lu Ping's position like a storm. Brother Lu's expression shook and he happily said, "That guy is dead for sure. He actually gathered such a thick poisonous fog. Who does he think he is? Jiao Daoren? How can he control so much poisonous fog?" Brother Zhang's expression relaxed at first, but he was cautious by nature, but he still used the magical power in his eyes and tried to look into the dark poisonous fog. There seemed to be a black shadow jumping in the dark fog, and every time the shadow jumped, Brother Zhang felt a sense of fear. Brother Zhang's premonition, which had been wandering between life and death for many years, made him try to control the fear in his heart, and he hurriedly said, "Not good, let's go." Although Brother Lu was still surprised, he had always trusted Brother Zhang, and when he heard this he rushed behind Brother Zhang. However, it was already too late. The thick poisonous fog that had previously gathered suddenly became turbulent, and then, under the frightened eyes of the two people, the poisonous fog from all directions gathered towards them. Brother Zhang opened up a big umbrella, and a curtain of rain fell down, trying to resist the impact of the poisonous fog. The real essence in his body poured out like water, and Brother Zhang's face quickly turned pale. "Brother Lu, give me a hand." When Brother Lu heard this, he hurriedly reached out and held the umbrella's handle, and injected a stream of real essence into it, and immediately slowed down the loss of Brother Zhang's real essence. However, good things did not last long, and just when the poisonous fog surrounded the two people, a black flame suddenly rushed out of the black fog like a ghost, and attached to the curtain of rain hanging down from the big umbrella, and burned fiercely. Chi-chi, the sound of chi-chi was endless, and under the panicked eyes of the two people, not only was the curtain of rain gradually burned out, but the body of the big umbrella was also gradually being eroded by the black fire. Brother Zhang, Brother Lu's eyes for help had a trace of despair in them. "The effect of our poison-dispelling pill is almost over." Brother Zhang had been trying to resist the invasion of the poisonous fog and the black fire, but he did not notice that the black poisonous fire and poisonous fog were not only eroding the real essence in his body, but also the poison-dispelling effect in his body was being eroded by this strange poisonous fire. Brother Zhang's face showed a trace of determination, and suddenly fiercely shouted in the direction of Lu Ping, "Your Excellency is so ruthless, the two of us will not let you have an easy time even if we have to self-destruct." Brother Zhang's words made Lu Ping hesitate for a moment. He could hear that Brother Zhang's words were not false, and if he was really forced into a corner and self-destructed, even if Lu Ping was lucky enough to escape, he would not be able to obtain any benefits. Then what was the point of delaying the two people? However, Brother Zhang did not expect that his words would cause Brother Lu's panicked face to become even paler, and a trace of maliciousness suddenly flashed across his face, and he suddenly slapped Brother Zhang's back with both of his palms. Brother Zhang was caught off guard, and opened his mouth to spit out a mouthful of blood. Before he could turn around to ask, a strong force surged from behind, and he was already involuntarily flying in the direction of Lu Ping. At this time, Brother Zhang's heart was full of despair, and he never thought that his partner would actually attack him from behind at such a critical moment. "I still have a wife and child, Brother Zhang, I'm sorry." Brother Lu saw that after Brother Zhang was sent flying, it really attracted the opponent's attention, so he pointed at the two cyan lights that were revolving around him, and the cyan lights suddenly exploded in a direction, blasting open a passage in the black poisonous fog. Brother Lu did not care about the injuries caused by the self-destruction of his life source magic weapon, and plunged into the passage to escape. Good, if that is the case then no one will have an easy time." "Kala," a crisp sound was followed by a muffled poochie sound. Brother Zhang shattered his golden core one after another, collapsing the space in his heart. His whole body's Zhen Yuan rushed into his blood vessels, and his blood flowed rapidly. Bright red blood vessels protruded from his skin, and his whole body looked as if it had been fished out from a pool of blood. Self-destruction. How powerful was the self-destruction of a late core forging cultivator? However, at this moment, a golden light flashed again, and even the thick black poisonous fog couldn't block this golden light. Great divine swordsmanship. Under Brother Zhang's desperate eyes, the big umbrella that was on the verge of collapse under the corrosion of the black flames and poisonous fog was suddenly cut into pieces, and the black poisonous fog and fire surged towards him. A pitiful scream came to an abrupt end, and Brother Zhang, who didn't have the time to self-destruct, turned into a pool of poisonous water in the blink of an eye, and sprinkled onto the sea surface. Chapter 526. Lu Ping reached out and grabbed the storage bracelet that had fallen into the sea. However, he couldn't retrieve the hundreds of flying needles hidden in the poisonous fog in time, and they all fell into the sea. At this moment, a loud explosion suddenly came from the poisonous mist in the distance, followed by a shocked and angry voice. It was Brother Lu, who had abandoned his partner and friend to escape alone. Lu Ping smiled contemptuously. His figure flashed and he fled in the direction of the roar. Brother Lu was about to escape. At this time, the antidote in his body had already been exhausted by the black prison poisonous fire. He was only relying on his late core forging realm cultivation to resist the invasion of the poisonous fog. However, seeing that the myriad poison sky wall was close at hand, a series of strong winds hit Brother Lu's face. Demon race. Brother Lu was, after all, a late-stage core forging cultivator, so he still had good eyesight. With a glance, he could clearly see that there were 6 core forging cultivators in front of him, led by a mid-stage core forging cultivator. The other 5 were only at the early stage of core forging. Under normal circumstances, Brother Lu, a late-stage core forging stage cultivator, naturally wouldn't put these attacks in his eyes. However, at this time, most of his Zhen Yuan was used to resist the erosion of the poisonous fog, and because of the self-detonation of his life source magic weapon, he was seriously injured, so he couldn't exert more than 20% of his strength. As such, he could only watch helplessly as these attacks blocked his way in front of the myriad firmament poison wall. At this time, Brother Lu didn't dare to stay in the myriad poison sky wall for even a moment. At this time, he could feel that the poisonous fog around him had corroded his last layer of protective aura. If this layer of protective aura was broken, he could only abandon his body and use his gold core to reincarnate. Moreover, there was no loud sound of Brother Zhang's self-detonation. Brother Zhang was most likely dead. His heart was even more afraid of Lu Ping. Brother Lu grabbed a handful of talismans from his waist. There were many talisman treasures inside. Obviously, they were accumulated by Brother Lu. Brother Lu threw more than 10 talismans at the 6 people in front of him. Brother Lu's figure flashed and once again rushed towards the 6 people. Talisman treasures were naturally rare protective treasures for blood condensation realm cultivators, but for core forging realm cultivators, their power was limited. Unless they could use the talisman weapons made by Fa Xiang Laozu, they could pose a threat to core forging realm cultivators. Naturally, Brother Lu would not pin his hopes of breaking out of the encirclement on a few talismans. When the dozen talismans and talismans exploded, another magic treasure appeared in Brother Lu's hand. He charged towards the youngest of the 6 Yao cultivators, blocking his way, a little girl. The 6 demon cultivators easily blocked the talismans and talisman treasures flying towards them, but it was already too late to stop Brother Lu from rushing towards one of them. They could only attack Brother Lu with the magic treasures in their hands. Brother Lu ignored the attacks from the others and only attacked the youngest of them, Lu Ling. Lu Ling stood in front of Brother Lu, refusing to retreat even though she was a late core forging realm cultivator's attack. Just as Lu Ling was about to be injured by Brother Lu's magic treasure, a golden sword light finally arrived. Brother Lu, who was almost at the end of his rope, was once again sent flying. At this moment, the attacks from the others also landed on Brother Lu's body, who was sent flying by Lu Ping. The faint layer of light surrounding Brother Lu's body was finally broken by Brother Lu's desperate howls. The poisonous fog surged up and suddenly submerged Brother Lu. Several rays of light flashed from within the black fog. Brother Lu's final struggle was ultimately futile. After the miserable howls stopped, only a pool of blood was left behind, sprinkling into the sea. Lu Ping also grabbed Brother Lu's storage magic treasure in his hand, then he turned his head to look at the 6 people behind him. Lu Bai, Lu Hai and Lu Ling struggled to hold up a shield, enveloping Lu Qin Luan Yu and Lu Dagui in it, resisting the erosion of the poisonous fog. Samling was originally a highly poisonous demon beast, so he had a great resistance to the poisonous fog. In addition, when Lu Hai smelted his protective aura, he also used the myriad poison meteorite evil chi. Therefore, after the three of them joined forces to hold up the protective aura, although they were not as strong as Lu Ping, they could still barely withstand the poisonous fog. Lu Ping smiled, and the protective aura around his body suddenly expanded, covering the 6 people in his own myriad poison meteorite evil chi. Samling suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Lu Ping took Samling, Lu Qin and Lu Dagui into the Golden House, leaving only Luan Yu, who had just smelted the wood attribute low-grade earth step spiritual wood and broken through to the middle stage core forging realm. Lu Ping smiled and said, "I didn't expect you to have this kind of magical power. You can see that the anti-poison pills on these 2 people are about to lose their effectiveness." Luan Yu smiled and said, "This is also a risky plan. If you hadn't returned in time, I'm afraid Lu Ling would have been injured by that person. This is a magical secret technique carried in the inherited memory of my Wuduan clan after I broke through to the middle stage core forging realm. I didn't expect to use it here." Lu Ping knew that the Wuduan clan's knowledge of spirit grasses could be said to be the best in the cultivation world. If Luan Yu could explore this forbidden area with him, the harvest would be even greater. So he asked, "What do you plan to do? Do you want to return to the Golden House or do you want to explore this fallen archipelago with me?" Luan Yu shook her head and said, "I know what you're thinking. However, although I have a good understanding of spirit grasses, I can't defend against the attack of this poisonous fog. Even if you have the protection of your myriad poison meteorite evil chi, it will drag you down. Not to mention this time, I heard that the cultivators gathered in the fallen archipelago are all at the late stage core forging realm and above. If I'm exposed, I'm afraid it will bring you big trouble." Lu Ping knew that Luan Yu was telling the truth, so he could only nod with regret. Just as he was about to put Luan Yu back into the Golden House, Luan Yu took out a jade slip and handed it to Lu Ping. Luan Yu said, "This is a compendium of spirit grasses passed down by my Wuduan clan. You can take it to check if you're missing anything so you don't miss out on any treasures." Lu Ping's face lit up with joy, but he was a little hesitant. He said, "This item is really important to me, but won't this break the rules of the Wuduan clan?" Luan Yu smiled bitterly and said, "It's fine. The real inheritance of the Wuduan clan is how to cultivate spirit grasses. The more spirit grasses you know, the more types of spirit grasses you can find, and the more abundant the spirit grasses in the Golden House will be. This will also be beneficial to my cultivation. Besides, how many people are left in the Wuduan clan? Maybe after I die, the inheritance of the Wuduan clan will disappear." Lu Ping took the jade slip and said, "Brother, you shouldn't be so gloomy. Maybe the hope of the Wuduan clan to rise again lies in you. As long as you're alive, there will always be hope." Luan Yu didn't want to talk about these things. Just as he was about to return to the Golden House, he suddenly thought of something and said, "Don't forget about your Wonder Dew. Don't you think the environment of the fallen archipelago is even worse than the Golden Canyon in the 7-star heavens?" Lu Ping's eyes lit up. He said, "You're saying that the environment of the Wonder Dew is formed in this kind of poisonous place?" Luan Yu was a little uncertain. He said, "It's just my guess. But at least this kind of environment is very beneficial for the formation of the meteorite poison essence serum." Lu Ping thought back to the time when he was in the Land of 100 Flowers. The Wonder Dew absorbed all the miasma in the Land of 100 Flowers, and in the end, only a few drops of meteorite poison essence serum were formed. The poisonous mist in the fallen archipelago was still above the Golden Canyon. If the Wonder Dew absorbed the poisonous mist here, it would definitely be able to form more meteorite poison essence serum. This was one of the most peculiar and tyrannical water attribute natural wonders. Inside the Golden House, the meteorite poison essence serum and half of the Wonder Dew that were stored in a large bluestone vat had now been placed by Lu Ping in a pool that was specially built with bluestone. The half of the Wonder Dew was somewhat listless as it continued to sink into the small amount of meteorite poison essence serum. After Luan Yu returned to the Golden House, Lu Ping circled around the island and searched the surrounding sea. After finding no traces of cultivators, Lu Ping landed in the center of the island and took out the Golden House that had shrunk to the size of a thumb. Lu Ping had been carrying the Golden House on his chest all this time. Lu Ping tossed the Golden House king into the air, and the thumb-sized golden house quickly expanded to the size of a house. Then, the door of the golden house opened abruptly. At this moment, the half of the myriad wonder jade nectar in the green stone pond seemed to have sensed something. It abruptly rushed out of the meteorite essence liquid from the bottom of the pond and leaped 3 feet into the air before falling back into the myriad poison liquid. When Wan Yu, who was standing beside the bluestone pool, saw that, a look of joy appeared on her face. She said, "As expected, it is effective. This fellow is truly lucky." Naturally, what was happening inside the golden house could not be hidden from Lu Ping. The moment the half of the Wonder Dew jumped out of the bluestone pool, the gray-colored poisonous mist covering the entire island suddenly shook violently. One by one they surged into the open door of the golden house. The commotion caused by this move was much greater than the one caused by the appearance of the black prison poison flames. Suddenly, Wan Yu's exasperated voice rang out from inside the golden house. "Not good. I cannot let the Wonder Dew continue to absorb the poisonous mist. The spiritual herbs in the spiritual herb garden will be destroyed." Hearing that, Lu Ping was shocked. The golden house was a spatial artifact. Although the poisonous mist was attracted by the Wonder Dew, once the poisonous mist permeated the space, the large area of spiritual herbs that Lu Ping had been helping Wan Yu to cultivate over the years would suffer a calamity. Lu Ping hastily slapped his palm on the golden house. An intense blue light gushed out from Lu Ping's palm. It almost dyed the entire golden house blue. Fortunately, the golden house was a spatial artifact that had been meticulously refined by Lu Ping. After Lu Ping poured his real essence into the bluestone pool, he quickly established a spatial passageway between the bluestone pool and the door of the golden house. The poisonous mist that was surging into the bluestone pool passed through this passageway and gathered above the bluestone pool. It formed a pitch-black cloud. The dark cloud became thicker and thicker. It floated gloomily above the bluestone pool. About 2 hours had passed by now. Almost all of the poisonous mist on the island had been absorbed into the golden house. The poisonous mist in the surroundings had become thinner. However, the poisonous mist from the distance was still continuously pouring into the small island. The movement caused by the golden house's absorption of the poisonous mist was getting louder and louder. Chapter 527. Seeing that the commotion from the gold house was getting louder, Lu Ping grew increasingly worried. Seeing that the surrounding poisonous fog had thinned out, Lu Ping took the opportunity to quickly extend his divine will out. At the same time, Lu Ping's face grew increasingly pale. Clearly, as his divine will spread out further, the density of the poisonous fog increased and the corrosion on his divine will became more severe. At that moment, Lu Ping's expression suddenly changed and he quickly retracted his divine will. Ignoring the dizziness caused by the corrosion of his divine will, he quickly wiped away his sweat and pointed at the gold house. The 2 doors of the gold house instantly closed and the gold house rapidly shrank. Then Lu Ping grabbed it in his hand and flew towards the depths of the Great Fallen Archipelago. Without the gold house's ability to absorb the poisonous fog, the empty area of the poisonous fog that had formed on the small island was quickly filled up by the poisonous fog from all directions. Not long after Lu Ping left the small island, a few streaks of grayish light flashed within the poisonous fog. A few cultivators with blurry figures landed on the small island, one after another. "We've already lost track of him. Looks like the treasure has already been taken by someone else. This person is very vigilant. He actually risked his divine will to check his surroundings. If not for that, he would not have discovered our tracks. I wonder what that treasure is. There are not many treasures that can cause such a huge commotion in the Great Fallen Archipelago's poisonous fog. Could it be the Wonder Dew? The Wonder Dew is the Wonder Dew. I think the few of you only know about the Wonder Dew. 8 out of 10 cultivators who have entered the firmament wall of poisons are here for the Wonder Dew. If the Wonder Dew really appeared at the edge of the Great Fallen Archipelago, why would those Dharma adepts go deeper into the Great Fallen Archipelago?" A cultivator who seemed to be the leader reprimanded in a low voice. What these people did not know was that their earlier guess was actually correct. Lu Ping flew for about the time it took for a stick of incense to burn before landing on a small island. After checking the surroundings and confirming that it was safe, Lu Ping carefully picked up the 5 3,000-year-old spirit grasses and more than 20,000-year-old spirit grasses. Lu Ping was still wearing his stone armor. He found a relatively hidden corner of the island, so he wasn't afraid of being discovered by others. Then he reached out and grabbed the 4 high-grade spirit stones in his hand. He swallowed a medicinal pill and began to restore the Zhenyuan that he had consumed in the previous battle with Brother Zhang and Brother Lu. Due to the erosion of the poisonous fog, even though Lu Ping had the protection of the myriad meteoric poison gang, the consumption of his Zhenyuan was still twice as much as usual. Lu Ping had smelted the myriad meteoric poison essence plasma, which was also known as the mother of all poisons. Therefore, one could imagine the situation of the other cultivators in the Fallen Islands. After a long while, Lu Ping finally restored most of the Zhenyuan in his body. He spread out his left hand and a small golden house appeared in Lu Ping's hand. Lu Ping's spiritual sense entered the golden house and found that the myriad wonder jade nectar was suspended in the air above the bluestone pool. It had formed a huge ball of water. Above the myriad wonder jade nectar, the previously thick dark clouds had shrunk to more than half of their original size. Moreover, they were tumbling and flashing with a golden luster from time to time. When Lu Ping's spiritual sense carefully investigated the situation, he found that an invisible aura was being stripped away from the dark clouds and converging towards the myriad wonder jade nectar suspended in mid-air. Every time an invisible aura was stripped away from the dark clouds, a golden luster would flash within the dark clouds. This process continued for 12 hours. The dark clouds suspended above the bluestone pool had shrunk to a quarter of their original size. Moreover, the dark clouds had also changed from black to a pale golden luster. At this moment, something shocking happened to Lu Ping. The head-sized half of the myriad wonder jade nectar suspended above the bluestone pool suddenly swelled up. Its volume had unexpectedly increased by 10%. Then, under the dumbfounded gazes of Lu Ping and Luan Yu, who was standing not far away from the bluestone pool, the myriad wonder dew directly fell into the myriad poison liquid in the bluestone pool like an overstuffed fatty, splashing golden water droplets. After the myriad wonder jade nectar fell into the bluestone pool, the completely golden clouds floating above the bluestone pool seemed to have reached their limit. They turned into golden water droplets and fell into the bluestone pool like rain. The myriad poison nectar, which had originally only been at the bottom of the pool, suddenly increased by a third. Luan Yu stood beside the bluestone pool and looked at the myriad wonder jade nectar in the myriad poison nectar. She muttered, "Sure enough, sure enough." Lu Ping seemed to have been petrified. He sat cross-legged in the corner of the island with a look of disbelief on his face. Soon after, he reacted and a look of ecstasy appeared on his face. The myriad wonder jade nectar could actually form and grow on its own. No wonder Jiao Daoren didn't want to destroy the Great Fallen Archipelago. Although the Great Fallen Archipelago was a dangerous place, it was also a great land of fortune. Lu Ping forcibly suppressed the urge to open the golden house again to absorb the poisonous fog. Instead, he sat cross-legged on the ground and pondered for a moment. Then he reached out and took out the jade bracelet that had previously smelted the black prison poisonous fire. The black jade poisonous fire had also swallowed a large amount of poisonous fog and had undergone many changes. However, Lu Ping was in a hurry to deal with the two late core forging cultivators, so he didn't have the time to carefully examine it. Lu Ping once again summoned the fire seed from the jade bracelet. The fire seed, which was originally the size of a walnut, had now doubled in size. The pulsating black flame was a lot more lively than before. Even Lu Ping seemed to have an illusion that the black flame seemed to have a trace of intelligence in its pulsation. Could it be that the black prison poisonous fire could turn into a spiritual fire of heaven and earth? This thought only flashed in Lu Ping's mind for a moment. Then Lu Ping threw it to the back of his mind. After the black prison poisonous fire was exposed to the poisonous fog, it was still slowly absorbing the surrounding gray poisonous fog. However, the movement it made was much smaller than before. As the gray poisonous fog was continuously devoured by the black prison poisonous fire, the fire seed of the black prison poisonous fire doubled in size again. From the looks of it, it was already half the size of a fist. The flames of the black prison poisonous fire also grew stronger. However, at this moment, the gray poisonous fog finally stopped gathering around the black prison poisonous fire. It was as if the black prison poisonous fire had grown to its limit. Lu Ping continued to fly in another direction. Along the way, he encountered several cultivators who entered the Fallen Islands. However, the stone armor on Lu Ping's body made it impossible for them to see through Lu Ping's strength. Both sides were wary of each other. They were also worried that they would fight each other in the Fallen Islands, which was filled with poisonous fog. So they retreated. Lu Ping deliberately avoided the larger islands and specifically looked for small islands that were not eye-catching. After picking the few spiritual grasses on the islands and confirming that it was safe nearby, Lu Ping opened the door of the golden house and connected it to the bluestone pool. The surrounding poisonous fog once again gathered towards the golden house, forming a black cloud above the bluestone pool, which was much smaller than the previous one. It seemed that the myriad wonder dew nectar in the bluestone pool had eaten and drunk its fill after the huge commotion that was equivalent to triggering a natural phenomenon. When Lu Ping connected the passage again, the myriad wonder dew nectar lazily floated above the surface of the myriad poison liquid from the bottom of the bluestone pool, peeling off the invisible aura of the black cloud floating in the sky. Then it sank to the bottom of the bluestone pool, motionless. The dark cloud that had turned into golden raindrops and fell down, flowing into the myriad poison liquid in the bluestone pool. After 3 consecutive times, when Lu Ping once again opened the door of the golden house on a small island, the myriad wonder dew nectar, whose volume had increased by 1/4 from its original size, lay motionless at the bottom of the myriad poison liquid. The gray poisonous fog in the surroundings no longer gathered towards the golden house. It seems that it has eaten its fill. Guan Yu stood beside the bluestone pool, looking at the myriad wonder dew nectar at the bottom of the pool. She did not conceal the envy on her face. Lu Ping rubbed his chin, then took out a huge jade essence bottle from his storage ring and threw it into the golden house. Guan Yu saw a jade essence bottle with a big belly and a thin neck suddenly appear above the bluestone pool. Then the jade essence bottle tilted down. Under Guan Yu's incredulous gaze, a large mass of liquid that was exactly the same as the one at the bottom of the bluestone pool fell from the jade essence bottle and smashed into the bluestone pool. The myriad poison liquid that splashed up almost fell on Guan Yu. Guan Yu was so frightened that she retreated and cried out in alarm, "Myriad wonder dew nectar! How can you still have myriad wonder dew nectar? Moreover, it's an entire portion of myriad wonder dew nectar. This is impossible, this is absolutely impossible." Lu Ping chuckled and did not answer. This portion of myriad wonder dew nectar was a treasure that Lu Ping had stolen from Aoyu's ice dragon cave when Lu Ping had ventured into the deep-sea demon domain by himself. Lu Ping had always treated it as his own secret and had never told anyone about it. Guan Yu calmed herself down with great difficulty and said, "You don't have to worry. If I were to reveal this secret of yours, do you know how many Laozus from the Eastern Sea would come looking for you? This is the myriad wonder dew nectar. Each drop of myriad wonder dew nectar in the hands of an alchemy grandmaster is equivalent to a 30-year longevity pill. In the cultivation world, how many Dharma Laozus are there? How many drops of myriad wonder dew nectar are there? Not to mention that you already have more than 1.5 portions of myriad wonder dew nectar." Lu Ping was outside the House of Gold, but he could naturally hear Guan Yu's words. Lu Ping smiled and did not say anything. Guan Yu's thoughts were clear. There were some things that did not need to be clearly explained to him. After a complete portion of myriad wonder dew nectar reappeared, it quickly fused with the myriad wonder dew nectar at the bottom of the bluestone pond. The gray poisonous mist around the small island once again roiled and gathered towards the House of Gold like a tsunami. Fortunately, this time Lu Ping was prepared. The gray poisonous mist only gathered for the time it took for an incense stick to burn before he decisively closed the House of Gold and fled in a certain direction. After doing this 6 times in succession, Yang Kai had only spent 2 days searching for a suitable island and confirming whether the surroundings were safe or not. The wonder jade nectar in the bluestone pond was no longer able to gather the gray poisonous fog, and the volume of the wonder jade nectar had increased to 3/4. As for the golden myriad poison nectar in the bluestone pond, it had filled 3/4 of the entire bluestone pond. Chapter 528. After entering the Great Perilous Archipelago, Lu Ping had been deliberately avoiding the high-leveled cultivators there. Instead, he would find some smaller islands to rest his feet. That way, although Lu Ping's harvest of spiritual herbs was limited, he would not encounter too much danger. After Lu Ping had carefully fed himself with the 10,000 wonder dew from the cyan stone pool, the half-filled portion of the 10,000 wonder dew had grown to 3/4 of a portion. Add the portion that Lu Ping had obtained from Aoyu, Lu Ping had unknowingly obtained so many of the treasures that the entire world of cultivation would flock to. At that very moment, Lu Ping could still vividly remember the frenzy caused by the 1 drop of the 10,000 wonder dew back in the auction house. There were 24 drops of the 10,000 wonder dew and Lu Ping possessed a total of 42 drops of the 10,000 wonder dew. At that moment, Lu Ping was standing on a small island, listening to something. After a while, Lu Ping nodded his head. Both his hands formed a seal and a golden-colored light shone out from Lu Ping's chest. The light transformed into a golden-colored door before Lu Ping. The door slowly opened and a boy and two girls walked out from the door. They were 3 children around the age of 8 or 9. After coming out from the golden house, the 3 children sat down cross-legged beside Lu Ping. Lu Ping, on the other hand, had already activated the myriad meteoric poison's energy shield to envelop Samling. Samling stretched out a small palm each to place it upon the golden-colored shield formed by the myriad meteoric poison's energy shield. Next, the surrounding poisonous mist slowly surged towards Lu Ping's shield. After being filtered by the myriad meteoric poison's energy shield, Samling absorbed the poisonous mist for his cultivation. At this moment, Lu Bai's body was shrouded in a cyan mist. This was the wind poison that Lu Bai had separated from the poisonous mist absorbed by Lu Ping's myriad meteorite origin Gang Qi. After Lu Bai absorbed the wind poison, apart from enhancing her own talent, it was also greatly beneficial to the growth of her cultivation. In addition to Lu Bai, Lu Hai and Lu Linger also tamed the poisonous mist bit by bit through Lu Ping's myriad poison meteorite astral dipper, and then separated the poison that was useful to them, and then absorbed and cultivated. Among the Samling, Lu Hai was the one who cultivated the fastest through Lu Ping's myriad meteoric poison's energy shield. Because Lu Hai also cultivated a water attribute cultivation method, which was the same as Lu Ping. Not only did he receive guidance from Lu Ping during his usual cultivation, but he could also gain a lot from Lu Ping in the process of condensing his shield. At least, Lu Hai's shield had condensed the myriad meteoric poison's energy shield, Kuei water essence, and other 4 kinds of water attribute heaven and earth strange objects. Among the Samling, his shield was the first to be accomplished. Although Lu Hai also condensed the myriad meteoric poison's energy shield, his Zhenyuan could not be compared with Lu Ping, and his cultivation had only reached the peak of the first level of core forging realm. He could not withstand the erosion of the poisonous mist on the fallen archipelago alone. However, after Lu Ping used his own shield to filter the poisonous mist, he was the one who cultivated the easiest. Lu Linger was originally the youngest sister among the Samling, and also the one with the lowest cultivation among the Samling. However, after Lu Ping obtained the Ice Dragon Pearl from Ao Wushuang and let Lu Linger integrate many inheritances of the Ice Dragon clan, Lu Ling's cultivation had caught up. Now, she was not much worse than Lu Hai, and was only one step away from breaking through the second level of core forging realm. As a result, Lu Bai, the eldest sister among the Samling, became the one with the lowest cultivation. However, Lu Ping would not favor one and discriminate against the other. Among the Samling, only Lu Bai liked swordsmanship, and Lu Ping's most convenient means of fighting the enemy was swordsmanship. Although Lu Ping cultivated swordsmanship of the water attribute, after Lu Ping's swordsmanship reached the level of great divine power, he had a wider range of other swordsmanship. Many swordsmanship could be comprehended by analogy, so it was more than enough to teach Lu Bai. Not to mention that Lu Ping also passed on the merry 18 swords of Xianling sect that he obtained from Liang Xianfeng to Lu Bai. The merry 18 swords was an authentic swordsmanship of the wind attribute. The only pity was that Lu Ping had only figured out a small divine power level swordsmanship. As for the cultivation method of the great divine power level swordsmanship, it was taught orally by Xianling sect's cultivators, so Lu Ping did not know. In the future, whether Lu Bai could comprehend the great divine power level swordsmanship through this swordsmanship would depend on her own aptitude and hard work. Therefore, although Lu Bai was still far from advancing to the second level of core forging, if the Samling were to fight against each other, Lu Bai would be the strongest one. Lu Ping supported the myriad meteorite poison energy gang for the Samling to cultivate, which was extremely serious to Lu Ping's own true essence. This was also Lu Ping. If it was another cultivator, even if their cultivation reached the late stage of core forging, they would not be able to bear such a severe true essence consumption. Samling was a green sea snake. Poison was their talent, and it was even closely related to the growth of their cultivation. If it was not for the fact that the poisonous fog was a mixture of many toxins, and the toxicity was far from what the Samling could bear with his current cultivation, even if Lu Hai had also condensed the myriad meteorite poison energy gang, he would still not be able to bear it. This fallen archipelago could be used as a cultivation holy land for green sea snakes. However, now that there was Lu Ping's myriad meteorite poison energy gang to filter it, and Lu Ping was watching from the side, the Samling did not have such concerns, and began to concentrate on cultivating. Lu Ping smiled bitterly, and once again held 4 high-grade spirit stones in his hands and began to accelerate his cultivation. Although this still could not catch up with the speed of the true essence consumption in the body, it could more or less prolong the cultivation time of the samling. Due to the request of the samling, Lu Ping had to temporarily give up the exploration of the fallen archipelago, and closed himself in this remote island for 3 days in a row. On this day the figure of Lu Hai who was cultivating suddenly shook, and the surrounding spiritual qi began to accelerate towards him, along with the poisonous fog entangled with the spiritual qi. Lu Ping looked at this scene and was suddenly taken aback. The movement of this moment almost caught up with the situation when the dark prison poisonous fire was just taken out. Lu Ping had also consumed a lot of the true essence in his body in the past 3 days. If he encountered the erosion of such a thick poisonous fog again, he was afraid that he would not be able to hold on for long. Fortunately, Lu Hai's breakthrough was already a foregone conclusion. Lu Ping formed several seals in his hands and shouted, "Collect!" A golden beam of light suddenly covered Lu Hai, and Lu Hai suddenly disappeared in the light beam. At the same time, on the small lonely mountain in the Golden House, in the palace that Lu Ping came from the Clear Stream Cave, Lu Hai suddenly appeared in one of the cultivation rooms. At the same time, a series of 36 high-grade spirit stones and hundreds of middle-grade spirit stones appeared in the cultivation room, and a spirit-gathering formation was arranged around Lu Hai. This was not the end. The small lonely mountain in the Golden House also had a kind of effect of sealing spiritual qi. Lu Ping usually put the Golden House on the spiritual vein of Huangli Island. He wanted to seal all the rich spiritual qi in the spiritual vein that was not used in the spiritual vein in the small lonely mountain for emergencies so as not to waste it. At this time it just came in handy. As Lu Ping cast a few hand seals, the entire mountain suddenly trembled. The spiritual energy that was sealed in the mountain in the past suddenly spread out from the mountain. The density of the spiritual energy was no less than that of a small spirit vein. At this time Lu Linger had also reached the edge of the breakthrough. Lu Ping also took her into a secret room in the Clear Stream Palace. Although Lu Bai still needed a period of time to break through the second level of core forging realm, the absorption of wind poison had obviously reached a saturation level, so Lu Ping simply took Lu Bai into the secret room for closed-door training. In this way, Lu Ping arranged a spirit-gathering formation for each of them. In each secret room, a formation equivalent to a small spiritual vein was opened. A total of 3 people cultivated. At this time, Lu Hai had already completed the breakthrough and began to consolidate the results of the second level of core forging realm. Lu Ping paid attention to the state of the 3 people in closed-door training. He knew that in this year and a half, Samling would not be able to come out to help him. However, Lu Ping still felt pain for using more than 100 upper-grade spirit stones in the blink of an eye. Before the auction, Lu Ping still had 1,700 upper-grade spirit stones. After the auction there were only more than 400 left. Now a quarter of it was gone. Spirit stones really flowed like water. Lu Ping shook his head and sighed. He suddenly remembered that he still had the storage artifacts obtained from Brother Lu and Brother Zhang. He did not know what kind of harvest these two would have. Although the two were not strong and only dared to appear in the periphery of the fallen archipelago, they were still 7th-level core forging realm cultivators. They should have some wealth. Lu Ping had just taken the storage artifacts of the 2 people in his hand. His face was shocked. His eyes were like blue lightning, looking into the depths of the poisonous fog beside him. Without saying anything, Lu Ping stood up and fled out of the island. As soon as Lu Ping left the small island, a voice came from behind him. "Why are you in such a hurry to leave? May I know what kind of treasure you've obtained? Can you tell me? I'm willing to exchange it for an equivalent value." Although the person's tone was sincere, he did not slow down at all. His previous attempt to sneak up on Lu Ping failed. Now, while saying equivalent exchange, he quickly caught up. Lu Ping had to leave. Previously, he supported Samling's cultivation for 3 days. Although he had the upper-grade spirit stones to supplement his cultivation, Lu Ping still consumed more than half of the Zhenyuan in his body. This was definitely not the time to argue with others. Moreover, after Lu Ping noticed the person behind him, although it was only a glimpse, Lu Ping still felt a strong Zhenyuan fluctuation from the person behind him. Obviously, this person was an 8th-level core forging realm cultivator. At this moment, Lu Ping was no match for him. Equivalent exchange? Who are you trying to fool? If this person had good intentions, he would not have approached Lu Ping in such a sneaky manner. Thinking of the vibration of the poisonous fog caused by Lu Hai's breakthrough, Lu Ping secretly scolded himself for being careless. Previously, Lu Ping already knew that once there was a large-scale gathering of poisonous fog in the Fallen Archipelago, it mostly meant the appearance of some treasures. Previously, in order to feed the Wonder Dew nectar, Lu Ping spent several days constantly changing the place where he absorbed the poisonous fog in order to not attract the attention of other cultivators and cause trouble. Now he stayed on the island for 3 days in a row. It was only when Lu Hai's cultivation broke through that he attracted attention, which was already considered lucky. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.